Hi, welcome back guys. This is your sensei, back with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Monster Naruto Got Harem. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Charlotte Linlin considered herself a fine woman. Abnormal perhaps, but there wasn't a pirate on the Four Blues or the Grand Line that could look at her and not feel a modicum of appreciation for her uniquely stunning visage. At the age of 20 she stood at a positively monstrous 12 feet in height with an hourglass figure that turned many heads at a glance. Her face held a sultry beauty to it. Large orange eyes were accented with long delicate eyelashes. A pointed nose and large pouting lips painted a sumptuous red that stood out prominently from her creamy skin. Linlin's long pink hair tumbled down to the small of her back in a waterfall of rose-colored tresses, gathered under a wide-brimmed black fedora that sported a white band and pink polka dots. Needless to say, she was one refined young woman. Well, as refined as a pirate with a bounty 1,643,000,000 berry could be. Linlin wore a white short-sleeved blouse worn open, exposing her polka-dot bra-clad cleavage. Her lower body was enveloped in an underbust corset and tight-fitting shorts made of a dark pink leather. Her long and well-toned legs were clad in matching thigh-high-heeled boots made of a shiny maroon leather that accentuated her already extreme height. Lastly, a white captain's coat with pink cuffs and gold epaulets hung from her shoulders like a cape, a large heart on the back. Despite her positively pretty appearance, Linlin's face was set into a deep scowl as she appraised the island through the telescope held in her hands. Fishcake Island was, like many of the islands located in the large archipelago surrounding her home base on Whole Cake Island, in the process of being terraformed to her needs. She traced the hills and forests that ringed the island using the telescope and noticed that the progress in transforming it from humdrum terra firma to a more culinary appearance had come to a grinding halt for one reason or another. It was for this reason that had drawn her out to this outlying island in her territory when she had much more important things on her mind and the primary contributor to her foul mood. Collapsing the telescope before roughly pushing it into the hands of a chess soldier, Linlin stalked down the spiraling staircase of the tart ship with a mean look on her face, paying no mind to the soldiers and homies that did their best to stay out of Big Mom's way. Big Mama, Linlin thought, her scowl softening a modicum as she mentally tested out the title that so many had taken to calling her as of late. She hardly thought that having 5 children by the age of 20 was something to evoke great fear, but it was a fair bit more flattering than country destroyer Linlin. I'm more in the business of building countries right now, she mused as she made her way out onto the deck to oversee the final approach to Fishcake Island. It had been 14 years since her friends and Mother Caramel had vanished and Linlin had been left alone, too young to understand just why she was despised and terrified those who saw her. 14 years since she had conceived of the nation of Tato and committed to seeing it come to fruition by any means necessary. Sadly for Linlin, nation building was a long and time-consuming process that required money, labor, and above all time. It was why small hiccups like this drove her up the wall so. Yesterday she had been standing in the center of Sweet Town watching the scores of workers, homies, and hired contractors put the finishing touches on Whole Cake Shadow, the towering cake-themed stronghold that would serve as the seat of power for her and all races would look to as a sign of utopia. She should have felt happy that the work to build her dream nation was starting to bear fruit. And indeed she had. She had cracked a wonderful smile and sat down to have tea with those many thousand that had slowly but surely emigrated to Tato land after hearing of the promise of a better life. However, about 20 minutes into tea, pleasantries, and sumptuous food, Streusen had whispered a rather ominous report into her ear. While Whole Cake was mostly finished, Tato land contained 36 islands, each of which was needed to be terraformed to her tastes and made livable. This process required constant work and there were a squad of approximately 200 homies working away at each island at all times. According to Streusen, none of the homies or workers on Fishcake Island had checked in for the past 5 days. While initially she had simply assumed it was a breakdown in communications, none of the homies from adjacent that her first and now ex-husband had ordered go investigate had returned. This left Big Mom with a sour realization. There was something unwanted in her territory and it was too strong for her subordinates to remove. Setting out in a tart ship at dawn the following day, it had taken Linlin a grueling 5 hours to sail the distance between Whole Cake Island and Fishcake Island, by which time she was in a foul mood to end all foul moods. As the tart slowly pulled into the small port of the fishing-oriented island, Linlin had wasted no time in disembarking, using her inhuman strength to jump the intervening 200 meters between the ship and land with her personal homies floating after her. A cursory investigation of the settlement revealed nothing but a ghost town filled with nothing but the smashed remnants of what must have been 300 homies in total, all bearing slightly different wounds upon their empty cartoonish faces. Some had been smashed, others diced into pieces while others had been burnt to a crisp or rendered to splinters by hook or by crook. Who could have done this? Mama Zeus drawled in an unsure voice, the horse-sized cloud looking more like a sentient ball of cotton than a concentration of water vapor. Someone who's gonna get a piece of my mind, Zeus. Linlin replied, scanning the horizon for anything out of the ordinary. She slowly let her observation haki come to life and was pleased when she sensed a single life form at the center of the island. There you are, Zeus, Prometheus, come, the Pinkette barked, drawing startled noises of assent from her two personal homies. She did not rush as she made her way inland, her heeled boots crunching gravel underfoot, following the central river that snaked from the port all the way to the center of the island where the lone life form on this island dwelled. Half an hour later, Linlin caught a scent on the air and sniffed softly, recognizing the scent of wood smoke and omega-3 rich oil running freely. She snorted in wry amusement. Looks like our little vandal has decided to help himself to some of our fish without asking. If I wasn't going to punish them before, then I certainly am now. Prometheus and Zeus giggled in harmony, whizzing around Linlin's head as they discussed what they were going to do to this intruder. Maybe you could throw him in the lake and I'll boil him alive, Mama Prometheus suggested, the cartoonish miniature sun practically bouncing up and down on non-existent feet. Zeus nodded enthusiastically before his mouth formed into a small O of realization. Oh, how about we do that, but every time their heart stops I jumpstart it, that way we get to make it last longer. Linlin's bloodthirsty grin told the pair of elemental homies that their suggestions were pleasing to her. They preened it, knowing what ideas would get their mama in a good mood. It was only right. After all, they were her personal homies, formed from fragments of her soul. She shook her head with a small smile. Much as I like the idea, boys, I at least want to get some answers from whoever it is. After all, it's not every day an interloper can cut down 300 homies. Plus, I think they are waiting for us, Linlin explained. She assumed that she was expected. After all, she had made no effort to hide her presence, yet she could sense through her observation haki that the interloper had made no move to run. So either they knew she was coming and waiting for her, or they lacked observation haki themselves, which opened up a whole other realm of questions. Following the scent, the statuesque woman eventually made it to the large circular lake in the center of the island and slowly approached the distant campfire on the other side, and once she was within shouting distance she made herself known. Who the hell are you? Sat beside a small campfire with two spits roasting fish over it was a young man with spiky blonde hair and bright blue eyes. The thin whisker marks that lined his face briefly made her consider that he might have mink ancestry, but she quickly discarded that idea. He had a light tan and was of average height, which is to say a full 6 feet shorter than Linlin, but there were two things that stood out to the young superhuman. The first was just how young he was. He couldn't have been more than 2 or 3 years younger than her, which, while not entirely out of the ordinary, clashed with the way he was sitting cooking his fish. The second was that he was dressed in rags, torn black pants and a scorched two-tone orange and black jacket was worn over a bare chest, and black sandals that were barely holding themselves together. The blonde looked up at her slowly, raising a blonde eyebrow at her massive height while turning over the fish on the end of a spit. "Neon Naruto. Uzumaki Naruto," he answered glibly, confusion swimming in his eyes as he regarded Linlin. Linlin bristled at the nonchalant response. Didn't he know who he was speaking to? "Do you mind telling me what the hell you are doing on my island eating my fish?" she inquired, getting a slight look of embarrassment from the blonde. "Your island?" Naruto questioned in turn, taking in the gold epaulets on her captain's coat. Realization dawned on him that it was a sign of leadership. He winced when Linlin gave a sharp nod. Sorry, I sort of washed in a few days ago and well, I needed to catch a bit of rest. I thought I'd camp out here for a few days until I was back in good shape. The food is really good, by the way." He tacked on with a chuckle, hoping to alleviate the literal storm cloud hovering in front of the sun. Naruto blinked. He thought he had been imagining things when he had first seen the cartoonish forms of Zeus and Prometheus floating on either side of Linlin's head, but lo and behold, they were not dispelled by a blink of the eye. Orange pigment briefly appeared around each of Naruto's eyes before he made a murmur of intrigue as he regarded the pair of homies. That's a neat trick, big lady," he uttered. Zeus and Prometheus stilled for a moment, something about Naruto's presence giving them pause. Linlin ignored it, crossing her arms under her bust. "I see, and how does that factor into you scrapping 300 of my homies down in town?" she questioned, watching Naruto stiffen slightly. "Seems your vandalism slipped your mind in favor of poaching my fish and squatting on my land." "Oh, those creepy cartoon people were yours, huh?" he asked, Big Mom answering with a glacial nod. "CRRR, yep. Look, I'm sorry, but they attacked me first. As for squatting on your land, how was I supposed to know? There's no sign or anything." Naruto looked at his 2 roast fish spits before sighing. Slowly he got to his feet and dusted himself down while meeting Linlin's piercing stare. He noted that her eyes were a wonderful shade of orange. "I'd offer to pay for the fish, but I don't have anything to pay. As for squatting, well, tonight was going to be my last night before going on my way. Nothing wrong with starting a little early, I guess," Naruto said, kicking some dirt into the campfire to slough it before turning to leave. "Sorry for the inconvenience, big lady, I'll be on my way." Naruto moved past Linlin, passing through the large shadow she cast, and began to walk towards the edge of the lake from which the river would take him back to the port, fully intending on leaving the island behind. The bark of a pistol stopped him in his tracks, a small chunk of ground to the right of his foot erupting into a small poof of dirt and grit. Naruto slowly looked over his shoulder, seeing Linlin leveling the smoking barrel of a flintlock pistol at the ground that had just been shot. "And where do you think you're going, Whiskers?" Linlin asked, internally taken aback and a little affronted that this little blonde pissant didn't seem to realize the danger he was in. Naruto slowly turned on his heel to face Linlin fully. There was a readiness to his stance that set off alarm bells at the back of her head, but she ignored them as the blonde replied. I was leaving, big lady. Pink eyebrows knit together in frustration and Linlin gave a menacing smirk. It's Big Mom, and you aren't going anywhere, Whiskers. You don't just break into someone's island, destroy all of its workers, squat for a few days and leave without a slap on the wrist. There is punishment to be had. Naruto stayed standing there as Linlin slowly crossed the distance between them, stowing her flintlock safely in its holster on her tailbone. Now face to face with the blonde with her back to the lake, Naruto was really treated to just how tall Linlin was. Even at 6 feet tall he barely came up to her crotch. Naruto flexed his fingers a few times as the statuesque woman loomed over him. He would be lying if he said he didn't enjoy the view, but his mind was on much more practical matters. And what might that be, he asked, his eyes cooling until they were chips of blue ice. Big Mom grinned, twirling a lock of her long pink hands between her fingers before she spoke in an overly sugary voice. We're going to play a game, a deal really, to decide what you're going to do to make up for your crimes. Couldn't you just put up a flag or something so this doesn't happen to anyone else? Naruto said in jest, only for Big Mom to continue to grin at him, her twin homies peeking ominous over each shoulder. She pouted for a moment, her dark red lipstick forming a perfect Cupid's bow. Maybe afterwards, but I still need to make you pay for what you did, Whiskers. No, Linlin called upon the power of the Soru no Mai and let her contract be spoken, life or pet. Naruto's eyes went wide as a pale magenta aura surrounded him, outlining his entire body and worming its way into his soul. Linlin tilted her head to the side and began to explain. You must be at least somewhat entertaining if you could smash 300 homies, and those whiskers are awfully cute, so here is the deal. I have a fondness for rare specimens. You agree to be my plaything for, she thumbed her chin and thought, let's say 10, no, 15 years and I'll consider your crimes paid for. Or, I take 4 times that out of your remaining lifespan. So, life or pet? Linlin expected a range of reactions, from confused demands of wanting to know what was going on to blubbering bartering for a reduced sentence or even sad denial despite the fear that crept from the existential dread of feeling your soul move entailed. What she got was a searing and righteous fury that burned those blue eyes slitted and red. The last thing Charlotte Linlin saw before everything went to hell was the magenta light of her soul pocus guttering like a candle in the wind. Clench your teeth was his only warning, chambering a fist. Then there was pain. Naruto's fist slammed into Linlin's jaw in a blur of motion. A subitable whump was heard before reality caught up with what had occurred. Linlin's eyes bugged out, entire body going briefly limp as the impact of the vicious uppercut lifted her off the ground. Then with a shockwave of pressure she was launched spinning across the lake in a thunderclap of sound, a kilometer of distance covered in an instant. Grimacing deeply, Naruto dropped back down to the floor as Linlin collided with the distant tree line, carving a trench of destruction through the forest as she went on unslowed from the Herculean punch that had shot her like a ball loosed from cannon. Bit of a violent reaction there, Kurama rumbled at the back of Naruto's mind, the plumes of debris in the distance finally beginning to settle down. Naruto snorted in reply, you felt it as much as I did, Kurama. She took hold of my soul and the last few people who tried to do that were intending to rip you out of me. Kurama harumphed in agreement before his eyes narrowed. You know that didn't take her down. If anything, it feels like you just made angrier. Naruto's sarcastic response was cut off when instinct roared at him to move, and loath was he to not listen to his instincts in a strange new world. Ikoku sovereignty. No sooner did Naruto hear those words than a crescent of magenta energy burst out of the far tree line and streaked towards where he had just been standing a moment ago. It scythed into the ground like a hot knife through butter, carving a long line deep into the ground as it moved, smashing into what had been his campsite a few minutes before and kept going to demolish hundreds of meters worth of forest behind. Just wind pressure, Naruto realized. He looked across the lake and saw the tall figure of Big Mom stomping from the trenches Punch had put her in, the smoking length of a cutlass clutched in her hand. Her face was set in an angry scowl and her clothes were a little scuffed, but apart from a small red welt on her chin she was otherwise unscathed. You damn brat, now you've done it. They're gonna be finding pieces of you scattered across the island for years by the time I'm through with you. Linlin pointed the end of her sword across the lake, her voice echoing off the woods that ringed the water. Naruto squinted in confusion. Hey brat lady, you're like only 2 years older than me. There is no way in hell I'm a brat. Linlin's teeth ground together loudly at his blatant disrespect. GNNHHH. Age has got nothing to do with it. You've got all the manners of a 3-year-old throwing a tantrum when he's been caught red-handed. Oh, bite me a crazy bent. Try putting up a sign next time and maybe it won't happen again, Naruto shouted in response, thoroughly annoyed at Linlin's words. Squaring her shoulders, the tall pinket's fists tightened until her knucks shone white through the skin, the handle of her cutlass giving an ominous creak and strain. This guy had an attitude, it seemed. It wasn't the first time that Big Mom had dealt with a man running his mouth, and she was always open to dealing out retribution. But this felt strangely personal, and thus dictated her response. Zeus, Prometheus. Yes, Mama, the twin elemental homies answered in unison, positively vibrating at the prospect of a good scrap. Unfortunately, Linlin's words would disappoint them. You two hang back. I'm going to beat some manners into this guy with my bare hands, she exclaimed with palpable excitement, lightly bending her knees and dropping into a ready stance, the flat of her cutlass resting on her shoulder. Both homies gave a disappointed "oh" before dropping back. Naruto tensed, feeling Linlin's intent wash over the surrounding area in a miasma of vermilion waves lapping against his senses. He watched her closely, taking in every aspect of the delicate minutiae that might herald oncoming movement. The dilation of the eyes, the flaring of the nostrils or twitch of muscle that meant an attack was coming. Then she came, surging forth in a lightning-fast leap that cratered the ground where she had been standing and soared across the lake as if in flight, set to bring down her cutlass in an overhead slash that would have split a normal man in two. But Naruto was no normal man. Kicking off the ground to meet his statuesque opponent, Naruto made a grab for the descending sword and locked onto Linlin's wrists before crashing both his feet into her unprotected chest in a dropkick. Linlin gave a small grunt of annoyance while Naruto's eyes widened in surprise. It's like kicking a slab of solid iron, he thought, feeling reverberations rumble through his legs unpleasantly. Making a snap decision, Naruto twisted his body, throwing his weight backwards while bracing his feet against Linlin's sternum and levered her sword-wielding arms with the yaw of his body. Big Moms gave a frustrated yelp when Naruto flipped her and with a twist sent her careening into the forest once again, great oaks and pine trees snapping like twigs as she crashed through them. Swearing, Big Mom attempted to right herself amid her flight only for Naruto to blur in front of her, still in motion with fist reared back. Jumping off a nearby broken tree stump that the superhuman had just felled, Naruto lashed out with a vicious straight punch to her sternum, propelling Linlin backwards yet again. He bounded from tree to tree with inhuman grace, changing direction like a whirling dervish and continuing to hammer away at her, his targets varied but always consistently aimed for center mass. Linlin was knocked in all directions like a pinball, Naruto's constant flood of strike propelling them across the island in a single continuous performance of violence accompanied by the soundtracks of shockwaves and shattered trees. He bounded off the ground after his latest hammer blow to the solar plexus sent Linlin into a boulder that splintered on contact, finding himself above her with the intent of drilling a viscous hook to her thigh. However, Linlin's sword struck out in a blistering arc towards him, sending another of those lilac-colored flying slashes at the blonde. Acting fast, the Uzumaki twisted his body under the arc of the sword, his left foot whipping up and catching Big Mom in the cheek, though this time he was not able to escape totally unscathed. Gritting her teeth as the tip of Naruto's foot ground into her jaw, Linlin made another swipe at him with her cutlass, the ring-covered fingers of her sword-wielding hand landing a glancing blow to the temple. Both of them were sent spinning away from one another, spiraling through the underbrush of the forest and creating a new clearing in the process. Springing up quickly, Naruto touched his hand to his temple and winced. There was definitely going to be a bruise there tomorrow. He watched Linlin pull herself to her feet and stretch, her great height towering over the ocean of fallen trees that their conflict had created. Concerningly, aside from numerous red welts across her chest and face from where he had landed his hit, she seemed no worse for wear. Oh well, not the first time we've dealt with a tough nut to crack. If at first you don't succeed. His hands flashed into a familiar cross-shaped hand sign, try again. A large cloud of smoke poofed into existence on either side of Naruto, pulling away to reveal a 24 clones arrayed around him. A Big Mom grunted in confusion, raising an eyebrow at the sudden appearance of so many duplicates of the troublesome Uzumaki. You are a devil fruit user then, that explains a few things, Linlin said, cracking her neck and taking up a wide stance. Come on then, show me what you got, Whiskers, I'll beat you into the dust all the same. What the hell is a devil fruit? Big Mom blinked owlishly at the genuine confusion in the blonde's voice. Surely he couldn't be that dense. What backwater hole did you crawl out of to ruin my day? She asked rhetorically before rushing at the blonde and his duplicates once again, confident that her haki would see her through anything these obvious illusions could do to throw her off her game. So it was with great surprise that her observation warned her that what she thought were illusions were planning to attack her. HRK. Too late. Half of the clones grabbed one of their fellows and easily tossed them in a fastball special to meet Big Mom, human missiles streaking towards her with an intense speed. Linlin swung her sword in a flurry of horizontal and diagonal slashes that caught the vast number of the multitude up in a hail of death, dispelling them with their characteristic pop and a poof of smoke that served to obscure her vision for a beat. Sadly for her, a lone clone had slipped past in the hail of smoke and now bore down on her back with a racing gun in each hand, driving them home into her back. Linlin cried out in pain as the pair of spiraling chakra spheres tore holes in her captain's coat, grinding against her back in opposite spinning directions before detonating, plowing her straight into the ground with enough force to bounce back 5 feet into the air. The onslaught did not cease as the dozen remaining clones sprinted at Linlin from all sides, each one landing their own chakra-enhanced punch or kick to her body one at a time with such frequency that she could not settle, bounced in the air between the assault of so many attackers like a common volleyball. She felt strong hands take hold of her ankles as the first clone that had hit her landed and began to spin the calamitous woman around by her ankles, a terrible gust being kicked up by the motion until they were surrounded in a small but potent tornado of dust and debris. Feeling dizzy but no less angry at how a country bumpkin was manhandling her, Linlin managed to wrestle her ankle free and kick the clone in the neck with enough force to break it, its head lolling at an odd angle for a fraction of an instant before popping into smoke that was torn away by her personal tornado. God damn it, you little shit, I'll break all your bones for this, she screamed as the storm of dust tossed her free like a kite in the wind. The real Naruto set upon her almost too quickly to react, burying a chakra-enhanced fist deeply into Linlin's gut, knocking the wind from her lungs. The warning of her observation had forced Linlin to guard her stomach in armament, now glistening a metallic black, but it only served to take the edge off of the chakra-enhanced punch. Fighting down the urge to vomit as she doubled over in midair, Linlin crossed her armament-clad arms in front of her chest in the hopes of weathering the rain of follow-ups that carried her further and further into the air. Naruto finished the sequence with a flip kick that collided with Linlin's jaw with a wet crunch and a sour pop. Linlin grunted in pain but did not let Naruto continue to lavish his assault upon her, digging her heels into the ground and skidding to a stop some 50 feet away. Naruto's hits were different than they were before, stronger and faster to the point that even when guarding herself with haki, Linlin's bones still rattled unpleasantly. She fixed Naruto with a venomous glare in her orange eyes before channeling armament into her extremities. Before the blonde's eyes he saw the tall woman's arms and legs flash before becoming covered in the shiny black vulcanized sheen of hardening haki, crawling up the surface of her cutlass and turning it a dark purple. Linlin seethed, "To think I have to exert myself against a backwater fool who doesn't even know he has a devil fruit." Naruto, on the other hand, assessed the situation with a keen eye, his mind going a mile a minute. "You're the one who picked a fight, Big Pink. It's not my fault if you can't keep up," Naruto shouted in provocation, sending Linlin into a rage that had them clash yet again. They were dragged into a continuous cycle of martial brutality that slowly but surely reduced the forest that covered most of the island to a dust cloud of splinters that could be seen for miles around. Far be it from Naruto to bemoan people for punching above their weight, but Linlin proved to be a troublesome opponent. Despite her incredible size, being by far and away the tallest woman he had ever seen, Linlin had an astonishing level of agility and swiftness, and her confoundingly tough body when paired with the reinforcement of armament haki meant that she could endure a mind-numbing amount of force without seemingly any visible damage save for the odd expletive or pained yelp. Still, Naruto had always been good at thinking on his feet and turning the opponent's advantages against them, and this was no different. His blows became targeted, punches and kicks aimed at Linlin's elbows and kneecaps in the hopes of grinding away at her until something gave and she was no longer able to move with the speed that she did. He plowed racingins into her hands hoping to break her fingers, had clones detonate in front of her eyes to blind her long enough for others to kick out her shins, and sent an endless tide of stamps down upon her thighs with the hope of breaking her femurs. He was not always successful. More than once he took a blow to the head that made stars burst before his eyes or savage knees to the stomach that had him gasping for breath. But what was clear by the time their dance of fists, kicks, and steel came to lull again was they were both attrition fighters. Panting slightly despite the persistent ache in her arms, legs, and chest, Linlin managed a violent grin, spitting out a small globule of blood. How long had it been since she had got into a fight that lasted this long? She could count on one hand the number of other pirates and marines that could actually manage to muscle through her defenses to make her hurt. It was not as if she enjoyed the feeling of being hurt. She was no masochist by any measure, but it was a nice change of pace to be able to cut loose. "You got some skill, Whiskers. Shame I gotta kill you." A bead of sweat ran down the back of Naruto's head. "That is not how you compliment someone, you crazy woman." Mama Linlin cackled, tossing aside her now thoroughly ruined sword and cracking her armament-clad knuckles, uncaring for the blonde's words. "What can I say? I'm a refined woman who can appreciate the irony of having to kill what I enjoy. I hope you survive, but if you don't, it's no skin off my back. Now, come at me," she yelled, her eyes wild and full of passion. Kicking off the ground, she zoomed towards Naruto with her right arm pulled back, faint traces of black lightning jumping from her fingers. Naruto watched the keening pirate coming towards him as if in slow motion, letting out a small sigh of exasperation before balling his right hand into a fist. Golden fire burst into life around his right fist and he punched, meeting the much taller Linlin's fist with a cataclysmic bang. The world darkened around the pair as their fists ground against one another, black and golden lightning sparking from the point of contact and a tempestuous storm roaring away from the epicenter of the clash, shattering and uprooting the remaining trees on the island. The ground began the crater beneath their feet as a column of chakra and haki slowly took form in the air above them. Linlin's orange eyes slowly began to widen in disbelief as Naruto held her back at ground zero, his arms steady and his eyes slitted gold. No matter how hard she tried to physically overpower him, she could not get that flaming golden arm to so much as move an inch backwards. Actually, the opposite was true. He was pushing her back, battle cry carrying over the wind. Big Mom mustered her armament and Conqueror's haki into the clash and slowed Naruto's advance but could not stop it. Mama, the shrill voices of Zeus and Prometheus called over the din. "Mama, you have to stop. The island can't take much more of this." Linlin looked over her shoulder at the two cartoonish homies looking at her with abject terror etched into their simple faces, looking around the blasted heath of a battlefield with wide eyes. Following their gaze, Linlin took in the black sky and the lights lancing through it. Unlike a clash between two Conqueror's haki users, her and Naruto's clash had an entirely different knock-on effect on the environment. Instead of splitting the sky, it roiled like an inverted volcanic eruption. A plume of tar-black cloud roiling down from on high towards the island with bolts of gold and purple lightning slashed down and left large craters with each explosive strike. How was he doing this? What manner of man was this that continued to push her back as the very world itself convulsed at the monstrosity of their clash? She had to win, if only so she could ask him why. Zeus, Prometheus, to me. Giving a loud affirmative, the pair of homies suddenly changed, going from caricatures sprung from a child's mind to very real and quite scary appearances. Zeus grew larger and darker until he was a bona fide thundercloud crackling with arcs of heliotropic lightning, his easygoing smile morphing to a sinister grin. Prometheus, on the other hand, ignited, becoming a globe of dark orange and yellow with the yawning specter of a face at heart, jagged-toothed and glowing red eyes looking at Big Mom. They flew towards her, pushing against the wall of ever-present air pressure that the clash produced, and slowly made it through to touch Linlin's outstretched hand. Prometheus's fire went up Linlin's shoulders and into her hair, setting it ablaze and having it float behind her in a halo of monstrous fire topped by her resilient polka-dot fedora. Zeus snaked across her shoulders like a flowing liquid and ran up her arm before settling around her wrist like a bracelet. With a renewed roar of effort, Linlin willed the duo to join the effort, lightning and fire coiling around her fist, finally bringing Naruto's glowing fist to a stop. The heat around them began to slowly rise as the storm above grew stronger still, tearing swaths of Fishcake Island from the land and tossing them out to sea as if they weighed nothing. Naruto narrowed his eyes dangerously, their pupils now bar-shaped like a toad. He could sense it now, the wine and nature from the island, as their struggle slowly but surely made the world come undone. The ground beneath their feet shook terribly while the distant lake where all this had begun slowly boiled away from the omnipresent heat that roared from Linlin's new corona of light and fire. She's strong, but we've fought stronger, eh, Kurama? He asked his partner, maintaining eye contact with the woman's orange orbs. You know, when she's not sneering and is actually enjoying herself, she has a really pretty smile, you know. Kurama scoffed at the sentient, leave it to his partner to see the silver linings in someone currently trying to kill him. As Linlin watched, Naruto's entire body was immersed in that same golden fire and light, and in that moment, feeling the fragments of her soul and manifestation of her will grind against the auric brilliance of Naruto's power, Charlotte Linlin grasped for a brief moment the totality of the soul she was locked in combat against and was stunned. It was not big, nor was it huge. No, those were too small a series of words to define the size of Naruto's soul arrayed against her. It was titanic, gargantuan, gigantic, bigger than all the souls on Tado land combined. It's monstrous, she breathed before in a single soundless tide of brilliant gold power she was overpowered and sent into blissful unconsciousness. Streusen bit his lip for what must have been the 1000th time in the last 5 hours. When he had taken Linlin aside yesterday and told her about the communications breakdown from Fishcake Island, he had tried to caution a measured response of making their way to the errant island in force with a series of tarts to cut off any potential escape of whatever interloper had trespassed into their land. Alas, Linlin had never been one for patience when it came to sating her desires, and had jumped on a lone tart ship at first light when most of Whole Cake had still been asleep. He hadn't found out about her bold journey until a maid had come to his quarters and roused him from his sleep, quickly springing into action and mustering 5 tarts full to the brim with chess piece homies, and set out to follow. But much as he wished it, he could not expedite the journey across Tado land. He was not like Linlin, who could simply fly on her 2 homies. He was beholden to the winds and tide. Damn it, Linlin, you're getting too hard to control, the short pirate thought, cutting a slice from the tart's deck and using his devil fruit to turn it into a genuine piece of cake that he greedily stuffed into his mouth. Now in his early 42nds, the diminutive co-founder of Tado land showed signs of his age. His once curly black hair was streaked with gray and sported a pronounced mole on his large nose. Deep lines marred his forehead that spoke of many years of dealing with stress caused by the walking calamity that had been his one-time ward and partner. Initially it had seemed so simple. After witnessing that monstrous young girl do that atrocity nearly 15 years ago, he had a simple goal in mind. Guide the unbridled force of nature that she represented towards the goal that he had harbored, creation of a land where he and those like-minded could call home without persecution for their nature. And for a long time he had got just that, traveling with the girl and guiding her on the path to piracy with the knowledge that so long as he kept her fed and happy that the ideal pirate's paradise would be born. But as she grew up, she got smart enough to realize that there was nothing stopping her from doing what she wanted because she truly is a monster. Streusen stuffed another piece of cake into his mouth, licking the frosting from his fingers and barking an order to the crow's nest. The pawn responded that Fishcake Island was now in view, drawing a sigh of relief from the pirate. The waiting had been killing him. Happer, in a small childlike voice, spoke from behind him, causing Streusen to look over his shoulder. Mama close. He cracked a small half-smile. Yes, Prospero, your mama's close. We'll be seeing her soon. The precocious 2-year-old's eyes lit up with happiness at Streusen's words, sticking his long tongue out and giggling merrily to himself before sauntering over to his siblings on unsteady feet. The sight was enough to make Streusen puff up his chest in fatherly pride, almost, but the sight of the burbling compote and gently resting triplets made his mood darken. Oh, Periaspero was his. He had been keenly aware of the beautiful young woman that Linlin had grown into, and when she had turned 18, curious to explore her wants and needs as a woman, he had been on hand to enjoy the fruits of his labors. That had been the last time he had any semblance of real control over Linlin. The two lovers she had taken after him, a sure sign that while he was an honored advisor, he was not the leader of this fledgling nation. And in many ways the sight of the younger four of Linlin's progeny filled him with bile. Not that he'd ever say this out loud. His caustic reverie was interrupted when the door to the cabin burst open, a knight-make chess soldier snapping a sharp salute before speaking in a panicked voice. "Sir Streusen, you have to come up on deck," now the piece said, trying not to fumble his words. His face was drawn and panicked, making Streusen frown. Nodding briskly, the short pirate trotted quickly through the corridor and small flight of stairs between his cabin and the deck, his short legs carrying him as fast as they could. The knight opened the door to the deck for him, letting him briskly walk out onto the midship. "Right, what's the situation? Have you spotted Linlin Hurtard?" he asked the assembled crew and soldiers. No one answered him, instead looking over the frosted railings ringing the cake-themed ship, mouths agape and eyes bugged. Streusen poked one of the crewmates in the leg in the hopes of getting his attention, but they remained slack-jawed and unresponsive, eyes welded to the horizon. "What the hell is everybody looking at?" Streusen stopped, struck dumb by the sight visible from the bow. Fishcake Island had been devastated. What had once been a half-terraformed island in the process of being turned from an alpine island into a fish-themed stronghold through the combined power of his and Linlin's devil fruits was barren and dead. The once lush forests and rolling hills had been scoured clean, rendered down to grayish bedrock and glassy surfaces kissed by superheated energy. Kilometer-wide gashes and parabolic craters hundreds of feet deep pitted the island like the battle scars on some ancient beast from a picture book. Most alarmingly of all was the center of the island had been hollowed out by some cataclysmic explosion that even now sparked with random discharges of lightning. 1,000 thoughts passed through the pirate come cook at a mile a minute, attacking his waking mind as a swarm of hornets. What had happened here? A battle, but against who? And if Linlin had been involved, where was she? Slightly more concerningly, who could possibly have pushed Linlin to the point where this was the end result? He took a deep breath before beginning to bark orders to the crews of the 5 tarts. "Helmsman, take us in with 2 tarts. Break out a search party while the 2 remaining tarts circle the island. Try and find Linlin's ship. Move," he yelled, startling the crews of the 5 ships into action. Dozens of crew and homies manned rigging and made preparations to make landfall on the island and search for the missing Queen of Tado. Advance teams were already embarking on rowboats bound for the cracked and scorched beach with search teams and first aid kits strapped about their person while the tarts got as close to the island as they could without beaching. They worked as a well-oiled machine, genuine worry for their leader and in many cases creator spurring them into action. Soon enough they were swarming across the island as fast as their legs could carry them. Those with observation haki sorted themselves into orienteering parties, coordinated the searches via transponder snails, and relayed all the information to Streusen from a simple operations base formed from the shattered remnants of the port town. He listened to reports of glassed prairies and hills shaved away to a near-mirror smoothness by some ungodly wind, while those without devil fruits dredged the scant remaining waters on the island for the pink-haired superhuman, turning up nothing. For 2 hours this continued unabated, and all that time a quiet dread began to grow in the middle-aged pirate. He had seen Linlin wreak havoc like this before, but never had he walked in on the aftermath and found it so horrifying. He had seen her do something utterly disgusting at the age of 6, and it had done little more than make him chuckle, but there was something deeply unsettling about this. She can't be dead. If she had died, then surely the homies would have conked out too. He reasoned, sweat beating down his brow that he dabbed it with his chief's apron. He couldn't be sure of that. After all, the circumstances of how the Soru no Mai had passed to Linlin was in of itself atypical, but it was something else that set all of Streusen's hackles rising. If Linlin is dead or gone, does that mean I have to take over? While he didn't like that Linlin was more independent than him, the graying pirate had to admit that it was her power, beauty and personality that kept Tado Land running, and without her he was but an aging pirate with a twisted sense for humor and appreciation for food. I still have the children. If they are monsters like their mother, then perhaps this could work, he thought, nearly jumping out of his skin when the transponder snail bleated a euphoric discovery. "We found her mamas in the remnants of her tart on the north side of the island," the snail communed, causing Streusen to get moving instantly. Ordering all teams to make their way to the north shore, the chef hopped back onto the lead tart and engaged its paddles, making full speed out of the port and around the island to where the other 2 tarts had discovered the smashed remnants of Linlin's own. It had been beached and smashed against the rocks with some force and had seemingly lost all hands if the crumpled remnants of homies buried in the walls was anything to go by, but Linlin herself was very much there and more importantly still alive. Linlin was splayed out on the deck unconscious, her back propped up against the main superstructure of the tart, looking like she had been thrown face first into a blender. She was covered in cuts and bruises that, while not deep, was completely new for most of the troops that had never seen their leader ever bleed. Her blouse had been torn to shreds, just a few white threads hanging over the sides of her underbust corset while her coat was missing. Checking her pulse and placing his hand in front of her nose, Streusen confirmed that she was still breathing and quickly set about bringing her around. He barged past a rook carrying a first aid kit who skidded back while the first member of the crew drew his short cutlass and sliced a large chunk of the torn sails from the snapped mast. Start a fire, he ordered, the troops mustering to do as ordered while Strusen let the power of his devil fruit permeate the bundle of canvas. Before their eyes, the troops watched as a dark pink light enveloped the scraps of sail and began to shift. It darkened, fainting a shift of dark red and pink colors as its texture departed from cloth to a recognizable meat. Once done, Strusen secured the newly created slices of chorizo on the end of his sword and held them above the fire that the troops had created. Soon enough, the meat began to sizzle and cook, amber-colored juices and oils emerging from the spice-rich pork derivative that popped when they dropped into the flames. The scent of cooking food filled the nostrils of all present, drawing growls from their stomachs as they salivated. Linlin's nose twitched, scenting the air like a haunting hound before she began to stir, roused by the heavenly scent of the fragranced meat slowly roasting to perfection. She groaned in her sleep and began to open her eyes blearily, the glare of the sun instantly forcing her to screw them back shut. Then the pain hit her, a fresh groan tearing itself from her lungs as she sat up and braced herself against her knees. Her mind was fogged with pain and hunger, baying her to find somewhere warm and dark to sleep off the aches and pains that thundered through her body. Confusion prickled at her half-awake mind, not understanding the reason for the pain. The memory of the last few hours was a fog of aching bones, howling winds, and shining gold. Her orange eyes snapped open, memory burning itself to the front of her mind like a hot poker pressed against her forehead. Shooting up, Linlin looked around feverishly at the assembled crew who all instinctively took several steps back in fear, her towering form a head taller than even the tallest of the king's soldiers. Breathing deeply, she slowly recognized each of their faces and settled on Strusen looking up at her with guarded worry, sword-bearing food slowly dipping into the fire. Wordlessly, she stomped towards the cook before dropping to the floor and crossing her legs. She plucked the proportionally small sword from his hands and began to gnaw at the chunks of roasted chorizo. Linlin was ravenous, taking little time to chew the rich meat and tossing the small cutlass back at Strusen when she had licked it clean. Linlin, what the hell happened here? Strusen asked candidly, gesturing with both arms at the remnants of Fishcake Island. He was about to ask more questions when he heard Linlin's stomach give another loud growl, and thought better of it. He pointed at the assembled crew with the tip of his sword. Everyone grab as much food and drink from the pantries of all the ships as you can and bring it here. No. The pieces snapped fearful salutes before scarpering off in the direction of the other ships, tearing open containers of rations, sweets and preserved meats and brining it back to their leader who continued to satiate her hunger. The graying middle-aged pirate watched on nodding to himself. It would prove difficult getting answers out of Linlin when she was hungry. She was likely to eat them alive if her hunger pang got bad enough. Linlin gulped down canteens of sweet teas and sugary milkshakes, slaking a thirst that had built up over her forced rest, and while she took the edge off the pain she came to think about what had brought her here. She had never, ever, received a thrashing so extreme as the one given to her by the whisker-marked warrior. It went beyond simple physical injury which even now made her bones quake and rattle in phantom pain. No, it was the spiritual pain, the feeling that she had rallied the vitality of her soul against Naruto, and with a single thought he had smashed through it like a comet falling to earth. It was utterly new, a violation and brutality delivered with such callous yet sincere intent that, I want to see him again, she whispered, setting down the small wedding cake she had been about to toss in her mouth and using the back of her wrist to wipe her face. Hey, who? Linlin Strusen asked in confusion, running over the number of people that could possibly render Big Mom into unconsciousness. Was it Garp Zephyr Sengoku or that brat Newgate, he asked, feeling fear stab at his heart at the prospect of those monsters being loose in Tato land. Were they bound for whole cake even now to uproot their work while the fleet was away? No, it was someone else, a blonde with whiskers on his cheeks. One with weird powers, Linlin remarked with a frown before looking up into the now clear sky, a far cry from the Terry maelstrom that their battle had turned it into. We're going to hunt him down as soon as we get back to Whole Cake. What? No, we can't do that. We have to see what we can salvage from this mess and fortify our borders. After that we have more pressing things to worry about. Strusen yelped, waving his hands in a show of complaint. Plus, there's that invitation from Hachinos to worry about. Are you giving me orders? Strusen, Linlin ground out, looking down at the diminutive pirate imperiously, her narrowing dangerously. But his words did serve to remind her of part of the reason she had initially been so annoyed to have to come out to Fishcake. Several weeks ago an invitation had arrived from the so-called Pirates' Paradise Island of Hachino sent by one Rox D. Zebek. It was a simple proclamation, an invitation to the strongest pirates of the New World to join under one banner in the hopes of achieving all they had ever wanted. While Linlin may have thought of Rox as a good-for-nothing snake, she couldn't deny his strength and had been intending to venture to Hachinos after the completion of Whole Cake Shadow to further her own interests. But now thoughts of getting her own back on the spiky-haired blonde was at the forefront of her mind, an itch that needed to be scratched. We set out to find that whisker-faced vagabond as soon as we can, and you, Strusen, she fixed a baleful glare on her first mate, if you think for even a moment that you can order me around like a child anymore, I'll make my displeasure known. She uttered, vitriol all but wafting from her mouth. He opened his mouth to try and argue his point but felt the scorching gaze of Linlin's orange eyes boring down on him. He lowered his head in defeat, conceding the point. Yes, Linlin. But where do we even start looking for him? Tato Land is a big place and he could be anywhere. Linlin hummed in thought, templing her fingers until she caught a glimpse of something poking from underneath the heavy rings on her right hand. Gently she pinched the object between forefinger and thumb and drew it out from under the ring to inspect it, her face breaking into a wide predatory grin. I have my ways, mama, she giggled, letting the single thread of spiky golden hair glint in the afternoon sun. Meeting the gaze of the man in front of him, Naruto felt a single eyebrow raise in befuddlement. He was currently perched on a stool in front of a counter, its long surfaces paddled in rich dark woods with a collection of beer pumps affixed to one side in brass. It was quite clearly a tavern of some kind, its appointments warm and homey with a roaring fire set in the hearth and the booths upholstered in exotic fur pelts to help enhance the sense of warmth. It had been a few weeks since his rather bombastic departure from the now-thrashed Fishcake Island, and a combination of water walking and flight had put him clear beyond the burgeoning archipelago of Tato Land. After a while, he had grown bored with the seemingly endless mix of sky and sea and had endeavored to call on Isabu's gifted powers to swim at intense speed as far east as he could. At least he had assumed it was east. Many years of shinobi life had indelibly burnt the fact that east was the direction of the rising sun, but who knew anymore when he was quite obviously in a new world entirely. The stars in the night sky were different, and he was sure there was nowhere near as much ocean back home. Let alone these so-called sea kings. Some kings they were, swam back to the depths with one punch to the head, he thought glibly. So many things had been trying to eat him for so long now that it didn't exactly faze him anymore. Instead, he was more overcome by the weirdness of his current locale. Despite being sure beyond all doubt that he had headed east, his present island was stuck in perpetual winter. Yukuryu Island, the bartender had called it, was appropriately named given that the snow-covered rock formations made it look like a great icy worm perched atop frigid waters. Was east actually north here, then? Ah, perspective, Naruto, keep your mind on the present weirdness. Particularly the bartender currently having a heated conversation with the third biggest gastropod he had ever seen. Bada-bada-bada-dabda, bada-bada-bada-dabda, burbled the transponder snail, its creepily animated eyes locked on the bartender as he lifted the receiver to his mouth. Catcheck a beat passed before the snail's face morphed into a cartoonish approximation of the bartender's brother-in-law. Hey, Ganto, it's me. I'll be back with the wood in about half an hour. Is that mink-faced blonde still cadging for a drink? Said a gruff voice, causing a tick mark to appear at Naruto's temple. The bartender rolled his eyes before shooting Naruto an apologetic look on behalf of his brother. Open snail, you dumbass. Just get back with the wood before sundown, he informed the snail before putting the receiver down. He turned to Naruto fully, pulling a glass from behind the bar, and set it down on the counter. Sorry about that, it's not every day Yukuryu gets visitors, let alone one that walks on the water. That's all good, Naruto drawled, still studying the gently breathing snail intently. Sorry I got nothing to pay for a drink, though. The bartender waved dismissively. Nah, you'll make for a good story to my wife, and on account of my brother running his mouth, I say you deserve one on the house. Naruto grinned, ordering a glass of orange juice and ice. When the tumbler of vermilion-colored juice was placed before him, he sipped at it slowly, letting the sharp citrus sweet ease his mind and let him finally have the time to consider the series of events that had brought him to this strange new world. It had been mere moments after they had been returned from Kaguya's dimension to the foot of the divine tree at the hands of Hagoromo and the return cage when Sasuke had done the unthinkable. Declared his ill-fated rebellion. Yet as Naruto and the rest of Team 7 had debated the ethics of what the last Uchiha had envisioned, Naruto more than ever could see the darkness in his spiritual brother's heart. The honest-to-God belief that what he had planned was right, and that the previous 2 days of abject carnage had taught him nothing. Choosing to cage up the freshly released Biju in front of their own creator had been the final straw for Naruto. The brothers' feud would end, once and for all. And thus it was that he and Sasuke had journeyed to the place where it all began, that Naruto had deceived him. A single clone remained at the battlefield with Sakura and Kakashi until the original and Sasuke were halfway to the Land of Fire before making its way to the freshly made Chibaku Tensei that Sasuke had trapped young Kurama within, stowing away within the Fu celestial body until just the right moment, chipping away though its insides until at last, he laid his hand upon his captured partner. In truth, it was this success that had propelled him to this new plane of existence. Absorbing young Kurama, the clone had dispelled seconds before he and Sasuke's final attacks had collided, supercharging Naruto's Rasengan with the totality of the nine-tailed fox's chakra. He grimaced once, remembering the image of his golden Rasengan ripping through Sasuke's lightning-shrouded fire, warping space and tearing the Uchiha to shreds. Don't weep for fools. He made his bed, and now he sleeps in it with the rest of his clan. Kurama groused from the back of his mind. Naruto swallowed thickly. He had washed his hands of Sasuke, yet he couldn't deny he died screaming. He deserved some dignity. No, he really didn't, Kurama replied, an edge of steel to his voice. I felt his soul and mind as he drew in my chakra to power that arrow of his. He would have enslaved me and my siblings for the rest of time, using us to beget misery out of some deranged belief that if everyone hated him, then they would be united. You showed me humans have worth. He reminded me that you're 1 in a billion. Knocking back more of his drink, Naruto smirked without mirth. 1 in a billion, I guess that makes me some kind of monster. Kurama did not reply, thinking on his words. Naruto accepted the pleasant silence, reflecting that Kurama did have a point. After all, Sasuke's failed dying gambit to use some kind of space-time ninjutsu, one that Naruto's attack had apparently hypercharged to leave him here, right up to facing Linlin. Hope I never have to see her again. The door to the tavern slammed open, and Ganta's brother came barreling in, dropping his logs on the floor as he panted. PP, he stammered. Ganta threw down his bar rag. What in the name of St. Elmo is wrong with you, he grumbled, rounding the bar. Take the back entrance. PP pirates, the brother finally yelled, causing the blood to drain from Ganta's face. Naruto looked up, feeling a bead of sweat roll down the back of his neck. There was no way. Ganta closed the door, shutting out the cold wind, before walking to the window and pulling a spyglass from his pocket. Looking through it, Naruto watched as the older man slowly turned as white as a sheet of paper. Oh gods no, it's her flag. The country destroyer. That sounds familiar. Naruto adopted a constipated look before making his way to the window. In the distance, slowly cutting through the sheets of thick white snowflakes that gusted down from on high, was a single smudge of hot pink. I mean, maybe someone else uses a pink ship. His senses, in tune with the flow of nature even without sage mode, slowly expanded over the intervening distance, feeling the emotions of every living thing on Yukuryu Island. The brothers to his side were hysterical with fear while the tiny hamlet at the island's heart sounded the alarm. Yet it was not with the men and women of the island that the most concise feeling was given but the animals. From the smallest insect to the most giant bear, all looked in the direction of the oncoming ship with a unanimous agreement. A storm was on its way. Naruto's eyes narrowed, a glimpse of movement snatched amidst the snow. Something blurred from the front of the ship into the skies above the island and was rapidly approaching in a loping parabolic arch. A streak of pink lit the sky, and Naruto could say this was the angriest of them all. He lifted his glass and finished his orange juice before quietly thanking the two brothers and stepping outside. His feet crunched against freshly fallen snow as he looked up at the approaching human comet, hearing a loud, shrill, all too familiar voice locked in a battle cry. Whiskers. Naruto tensed his legs, watching her like a hawk as she grew closer before, with a grunt of exertion, he leapt, taking to the air with a crack of thunder, a shockwave emanating from where he had once stood. Rocketing through the air, gravity all but an afterthought, Naruto kept his aim firmly on Linlin, face set in an annoyed scowl. Linlin's head snapped to look at him, her observation hacky clocking his approach, yielding a savage grin while falling to reach his rise. She reared back her fist to chamber a punch. It flashed once before being covered in the black sheen of armament haki, not taking any chances this time. Naruto accepted the challenge and answered in kind, albeit with a twist. Pulling back his own fist, he flooded the limb with earth-style chakra, causing the forearm to slowly darken to an earthen brown that was almost black, hardening as he had once seen Kikuzu of the Akatsuki do. Throwing their hands forward in some unsaid signal, the pirate and ninja collide in the air, their fists slamming into one another with extraordinary force. Their collective strengths kept them airborne for a few moments, his golden chakra pushing against the purple energies of the Sorosoro no Mai, yet in that time, Naruto was able to look up into the attractive face of Charlotte Linlin. It was twisted by rage and passion, yet as her eyes burned with the anger of the scorned, her plump lips split into a savage and self-indulgent grin. One that, despite Naruto's better judgment, he returned. The two auras, gold and purple, thickened around the pair, shockwaves buffeting the island below and creating an empty space in the snow that had now been kicked up into a blizzard. As before, this was no clash of conquerors haki, the sky did not split, but instead, the storm above the island seemed to grow more intense until finally, with a shared yell of exertion, their power struggle broke, each one blasting backwards towards one of the serpentine rock formations that gave the island its name. As he fell, Naruto performed an yukimi to gracefully touch down upon the gray stone while Linlin landed hard, the heels of her maroon thigh-high boots biting deeply into the rock. Eyeing her, the blonde noted she was mostly the same as she had been on Fishcake Island, save for a few minor cosmetic differences. She had changed her blouse to one with an ascot worn fully buttoned closed while her captain's coat had gained a furred lining to deal with the cold. Naruto suddenly felt self-conscious of his own ragged clothing that he had not had time to change. Hi, he said slowly, his breath coming in great clouds of steam. Please leave. Hey, you can't talk to Mama like that, Prometheus growled, popping up on Linlin's right shoulder. Yeah, parroted Zeus, emerging from the left, their eyes sparked with each of their respective elements. You messed up her island and then ran away. Naruto pouted, not my fault. If you didn't want to wreck your own island, why fight me there? I mean, people call me dumb, but I don't shit where I eat. He chuckled, enjoying the mix of fire and lightning that shot from the annoyed homies. Linlin, however, didn't speak, keeping her eyes locked on Naruto while slowly drawing her cutlass. He noticed that the cracks he had put into it during their last fight were still there. Don't tell me you own this one too. Still no flag. He gestured around. Linlin finished drawing her sword, tapping her foot in anticipation. No, this one isn't mine, there's not much call for it. But who knows, maybe after I kill you, I'll take it as my territory and use your head as the sign. Naruto's eyes narrowed. I don't die so easily. Wind nature chakra began to swirl around him, both arms darkening with earth chakra. Linlin took her sword in both hands and raised it beside her face, her glowing orange eyes reflected in the steel. Neither do I, but it seems you grasped Haki quick enough. Naruto looked down on his arms, tilting his head in curiosity. The hex Haki again caused this, sure as hell, isn't it? Take this seriously, Linlin raged, surging forward with sword held high, jumping into the air for extra force. Naruto crossed his arms and took the blade on his hardened forearms, hissing in annoyance at the pain. He may have her beat in physical firepower, but it didn't change the fact he only weighed 112 pounds, and she was struck with several hundred tons of force. I can't, there are people around. He pushed her away with a shoulder bash, hitting her in the stomach due to the height difference. She went skidding backwards, and in that moment, Naruto formed a cross-hand sign. A dozen clones popped into existence in a puff of smoke before jumping off the side of the rocks to the island below. Plus, I have no reason to kill you. Grabbing Zeus, Big Mom squeezed him tightly until he began to discharge large bolts of violet-colored electricity that concentrated into a slowly lengthening lance of lightning. I am trying to murder you, you little brat. Naruto flashed through 3 hand signs before grabbing his right wrist, blue sparks starting to jump from his hand. Linlin stamped a foot forwards, catering the stone beneath her forefoot before bending at the knee, levering herself forwards for maximum force. The lance grew 3 times in size before, at last, she let it fly. Vajra the purple lightning sped forward, leaving burn ozone in its wake, less an electrical attack, but rather a thick stream of pure energy sent barreling right towards Naruto. She cackled in the joy of battle, but a different sound also filled the air, 1,000 flapping wings. Naruto tracked the lightning bolt. It was nowhere near the first time he had been forced to dodge lightning, but he had no intention to, not when it could take a chunk out of the populated island they stood upon. He took his hand, surrounded in a potent haze of blue lighting, and thrust forward to meet the Vajra head-on, a name ripping itself from his throat. Raikiri. The front of the lightning bolt appeared to deform on contact with his sensei's jutsu before the piercing power of lighting style did as it was bade, giving the technique its name. Naruto split the purple lightning bolt right down the middle, the 2 remaining halves sent in either direction, harmlessly dissipating over the sea. Linlin paused in that instant, transfixed. The sight and sound, the fury and serenity, this whiskered blonde who she intended to kill, taking her attacks and responding in kind. Was he always that dashing? Her heart skipped a beat. Mama, she laughed, hearing the distant boom of thunder out over the sea. Backwater idiot, you might be Whiskers, but you've made my day this time. She allowed Prometheus to roll up her arm and cover her sword. Show me a good time, Whiskers. Context. Lady, geez, Naruto barked in reprisal before leaping forwards once again. Yukuryu Island was soon swallowed in a blizzard of thunder. And by the log, my name is Naruto Uzumaki Naruto. The ship pitched and yawed in the water, its crew doing its level best to pull in the sails lest the tremendous tempest being kicked up by the feuding monsters did not tear them from the masts and leave them crippled. They had thought they had made the perfect preparations for this, in Strulson's opinion, foolish endeavor, to the point where the pink polka dot-themed ship had been equipped with an ice ram to navigate the icy waters surrounding the winter island. Strulson dug his short cutlass into the frosted deck of the ship for support, the overburst from the latest clash shaking his thoroughly frozen bones. I knew this was madness. What was I thinking, letting Linlin lead us here? He shouted over the tumult, standing as 2 streaks of purple lighting streaked overhead, detonating amidst the snow into potent thunder. I should have just accepted Zebek's invitation on Linlin's behalf and had him meet us halfway. To say this small contingent of the burgeoning Big Mom pirates were having a bad time was an understatement. Since her defeat at the hands of the whiskered blonde, she had a single-minded focus to hunt him down and make an example of him. And in that respect, they had made mistakes. For the sake of speed, they had been forced to take a single reasonably large ship as opposed to mustering part of their fleet. This meant that they were disconnected from their supply lines, and for someone apparently lacking a ship, the interloping Uzumaki could certainly cover distance with supernatural speed. He grimaced, turning the collar of his winter coat up against the frigid winds. What bothered him was the fact that Linlin seemed so dead set on chasing the blonde down. While she had been murderous with fervor, her focus on the matter was arrow straight and backed by a will harder than sea prism stone. With the exception of food, drink, and attending to her infant children, Linlin had spent every waking moment standing at the prow of the ship, eyes practically welded to the horizon. The very moment she had clocked the blonde's presence on the currently blizzard-trapped island, she had used her Herculean strength to leap kilometers of distance in a single bound, her intent clear. That, Strulson realized for the 12th time these past weeks, was a problem. Linlin was many things to Strulson. His ward, his apprentice, his captain, his former lover and mother of his son, but her abnormal power and overly naive end goal had been a boon for him. It kept her focused on their shared desire of Tato land, and her more destructive impulses could be channeled into creative projects that benefited them all, especially him. But this apparent mink hybrid, the cook had never seen the blonde for himself, only knowing he had whiskers from Linlin's descriptions. He had Linlin's undivided attention and the strength to match her. The longer this pursuit continued, the more progress would be lost, and the more his hold over the pink-haired 20-year-old would begin to slip. God damn it all, he grunted under his breath. The chess soldier ran up the stairs towards him, snapping off a harried salute as frost gathered along the blade of his polearm. "We have a report," Sir Strulson, the rook-themed crewmate, said loudly, keeping a respectful tone despite the evident discomfort. The cook gestured for him to get on with it. "We have confirmed that Mama has engaged her prey on the island and has broken into a vicious battle." "No shit." Unaware of the short man's thoughts, the soldier continued. "The maelstrom is preventing us from making landfall on the island, but our reconnaissance teams have got a look at what's going on the rest of the island." "Anything of note?" the curly-haired man replied, wondering if any plunder might be had to make this trip somewhat worthwhile. Nodding, the rook said, "There is a modest hamlet located in the center of the island, mostly villagers living off the game in the forests. At least we might be able to restock on rich meats." Linnell, he coughed, catching himself. "Mama puts a real dent in our stores this far away from resupply ships." Turning to sweep back along the deck, he was brought up short when he added, "There is one other thing, sir." "What?" "Mama's prey. He's evacuating the hamlet to the far coast." Pausing, Strulson looked over his shoulder at the crewmember with a deadpan expression before looking at the blooms of distant fire and lightning rumbling from atop the stone pillars of the very much still in battle Naruto and Linlin. He looked back at the soldier, who sweated profusely. There are reports of clones of the blonde moving through the island to evacuate the citizens from their homes and avoid collateral damage. Perhaps it's some kind of devil fruit." "Oh, that's just perfect," Strulson drawled, sarcasm dripping from his words like poison. "Order the recon teams to take anything not nailed down from the empty houses," he added, ever the opportunist, hoping he could spin this in their favor. Far above them, perched atop the yardarm with his arms crossed, one of Naruto's clones looked down at the crew, totally oblivious to his presence. He clicked his tongue and maintained his silent vigil. While most of the other clones had been drafted to evacuate the hamlet from the rampant destruction his clash with the fedora-adorned Pinkett was already producing, he had been sent to spy on the pirate ship to ensure they didn't pull anything underhanded. Much to his chagrin, these pirates seemed to be reverting to type. It was a good thing they wouldn't get far with the sabotage he had unknowingly wreaked on their ship under the cover of the storm. It would take them at least half an hour before they released that their dropped anchor had been welded to its port, the gunpowder was all wet, and he'd used Seiken's corrosive ooze to dissolve the rudder chain. His ears perked up, something carrying over the blizzard, the unmistakable sound of a child's cry. Crouch, walking along the yard tips of the cross-tree masts, he spied the door to the interior had been opened and now clattered back and forth in the wind. But much to his horror, the children. He could see 4 infant children, crawling out on the deck towards the ship's edge. 3 of them were very young, triplet boys of only a year each, while the 4th was slightly older, a cute little toddler with aquamarine hair. She was the sole female of the group of children and the one who was crying, drawing the attention of the scarlet zero-haired member of the triplets while the others looked around, bewildered. Why on earth were there babies on a pirate ship, unguarded on the deck in the middle of a blizzard? Despite the fact that it risked revealing him, he could not allow the innocent to come to harm by the negligence of the chess and food-themed crew. So without a second thought, he stepped off the yard and gracefully fell, landing on the snow-covered deck with the nearest crunch. Instantaneously, the maroon-haired babe saw him, and Naruto got his first proper look at the triplets. The smallest one was a young boy with vibrant orange hair and a broad face thick with baby fat, while the other had closely cropped blonde hair. The third of the triplets, the crimson-haired baby, was slightly taller than his 2 brothers, nearly as tall as his crying sister. "Hello," Naruto said gently, flashing the 4 children a bright grin. "What are you all doing out here?" he asked, unsure if the children so young could even understand him. A quiet observation told him what he needed to know. A hailstone the size of a brick had shattered the nearby window of the cabin the children had been staying in. Suddenly, they were woken from their nap covered in broken glass and hit by the freezing gale coming in through the window. The confused children had left the room looking for help. After all, one of them had been hurt. Eyeing the crying girl, Naruto saw she was hurt. Her pudgy little hand was bleeding slowly, and a blood-stained fragment of glass by the door must have cut her as they crawled over the glass to escape the freezing room. Naruto stepped forward and, to his surprise, saw the boys close ring around their sister, the scarlet-haired one pride of place, his pudgy face set in a childish, albeit emphatic frown. But it was his eyes, they were strong. They held a drive and fire to them that no baby should have, their intent clear as a cloudless blue sky. Naruto's grin changed to a small smile. "You're a protector, aren't you, little guy?" he asked. The babe could not and did not respond, but he held Naruto's gaze and kept himself between the blonde and his elder sister. "I'm not going to hurt you, in fact, I'm here to help." Naruto molded fire chakra within him, then slowly released it from his pores, an aura of warmth rolling over the cold children. Kimpote's tears immediately slowed while Oven and Deifuku basked in the warmth, melting away the cold. But the eldest of the triplets, Charlotte Katakuri, kept his siblings behind him, never once breaking Naruto's gaze. "I'm gonna help your sister, okay?" Naruto said good-naturedly, holding out a hand to the little boy, palm up in a show of placation. Katakuri looked between the hand and his siblings before moving minutely to the side. Slowly, Kimpote shuffled forward, her hands shaking in fear and pain, but Katakuri's presence and Naruto's bright smile assuaged her childish concerns, and she lifted her small bleeding hand to rest in Naruto's much bigger palm. Naruto cupped it with his other hand, and soon they were covered in a translucent sheen of mint green healing chakra. Compot made a confused burble at the odd feeling that pleasantly rustled against her skin, but it was better than the pain. When Naruto opened his hands, the eldest daughter of Big Mom opened her mouth in a little O, greeted by her hand now totally healed, a peal of melodic giggles coming from the tot of Tato. You see, all good, Naruto uttered happily, giving Katakuri a lengthwise smile. Katakuri looked unsure for a second before finally opening his mouth, his face splitting into a bright grin of needle-sharp pointed teeth. Naruto was overcome with the urge to swoon in cuteness but suppressed it as his negative emotion senses blared in warning. He stood and threw himself in front of the four babes. Intruder, he is Mama's children, shouted a chess soldier desperately, only now noticing the mysterious blonde standing on the upper decks. A bell soon rang out and in a few moments, a crowd of Big Mom's crew stampeded up the stairs with weapons in hand, stopping about 10 feet away from Naruto and the children. Strulson pushed past the much taller henchman to stand at the head and finally lay eyes on Naruto and, more importantly, the four infants huddled behind him. Get away from the children, the cook with a large nose shouted, pointing his cutlass at Naruto, who looked thoroughly unimpressed and not at all intimidated. Don't worry, I'd never hurt a kid this young, but do you mind lowering your weapons? I got bad memories of trigger-happy mobs and snowstorms. Naruto replied, the memories of wave seeing like a lifetime ago. The pirates exchanged uneasy looks before slowly lowering their weapons, not willing to risk a negligent discharge when 3 princes and 1 crowned princess of their burgeoning nation could be caught in the crossfire. Naruto let out a sigh of relief before addressing the scowling first mate. I'm guessing that Big Nose there is the boss around here. Strulson gritted his teeth at the barb, thumbing his nose and tightening the grip on his sword. Yes, now what do you want? Naruto hummed and thought, not much. I've done what I came here to do and beyond, watching to make sure you guys didn't attack the villagers while the boss battles thigh-highs over there. He jerked his thumb to the concussive shockwaves ripping out from the island, referring to the somewhat provocative footwear the 20-year-old captain had taken to wearing. As a matter of fact, the only reason I'm here is cause this little one hurt her hand. Compot burbled in confusion, looking between her brothers, the man who had helped her and the crew, unaware of what was happening. Strulson's brow knitted together in confusion, not understanding the altruism from an enemy. Was he another soft-and-head monster like Linlin? He was happy that Prospero had been safely sent back to Whole Cake Island weeks ago. So you'll leave then? Naruto nodded before seeming to think better of it. Actually, there are 2 things you could do for me. The crewmates bristled, shouting obscenities at the interloper for holding the children hostage in exchange for services but a stern look from Naruto, and they felt an almighty weight slam down on them. Within reason, Strulson ground out between gritted teeth, sheathing his sword. Great, you got some brains. The first thing I'm gonna need is a blanket, the fluffier, the better. The blue-eyed team requested banally, and the first mate gave the order to acquiesce. Soon, a fluffy pink and red polka-dot blanket was tossed at his feet. Naruto bent down and retrieved the blanket before wrapping it around the 4 children, who snuggled into its warmth. He spared a glance to Katakuri, the babe looking up at him in fascination. Keep your siblings safe, little man. You're a protector, I can see it, he said before getting back to his feet. And the second thing, Naruto scratched the back of his head in embarrassment, cringing as the nearby island shook. I really don't want to mess up this island when people live here, but I know thigh-highs won't stop till I beat her again, so can you tell me where the nearest uninhabited island is? That's it, Naruto nodded, and Strulson looked down at his wrist where his log pose was strapped. After a few moments of thought, he pointed out over the sea. There's an abandoned island about 40 nautical miles southeast of here. Will you leave now? Naruto nodded in thanks while chuckling. I was never here in the first place. Just like that, the clone popped, vanishing in a puff of smoke. Beady eyes looked around wildly. Is he gone? He demanded to know, the observation hacky users amongst the crew shaking their heads while other members of the crew carried the children back inside. A flicker of golden light caught his attention, and looking out towards Yukuryu, he saw an orb of brilliant gold rocket away from the island, flying in a southeasterly direction at high speeds. Linlin followed, riding atop Zeus as if he were her chariot. Follow them, he ordered, waving his arms around wildly for emphasis and sending the crew running to their stations. Alas, Naruto's parting gift made itself known. Sir, he's disabled the rudder chain. Damn, echoed out over the icy waters as the retreating forms of Naruto and Linlin vanished over the horizon. The chase over the ocean had persisted for several minutes until they eventually arrived at the deserted island, and Linlin could honestly say she preferred it that way. The whisker-faced menace could fight her with so much more ferocity that she felt her bloodlust sing in chorus with the storm that inevitably followed them to the island, turning the icy surface and rocky landscape into volcanic glass before a volley of gigantic Rasengans had once again introduced her to the dirt. By the time she had regained her bearings, he had once again vanished into the wind, little more than a speck of gold light disappearing over the horizon, slipping through her grasp once again. She followed on Zeus as best she could, discarding her no-destroyed cutlass, but the blonde's aerial speed was not a gap she could easily cover, and to her immense displeasure, she was forced to return to her ship for food and drink, letting out a blast of her conqueror's haki upon discovering he had thoroughly disabled it. And by the time a replacement ship had been able to relive them, it seemed that their target had vanished into the ether for good. But despite what few thought and even fewer would speak aloud, Linlin was not an idiot. Beautiful certainly, set in her ways with a temper that could boil an ocean without a doubt. But an idiot no sir. Charlotte Linlin, when not strung between her projects and vices like a blood-drunk sea king, could display an unsettling level of critical thought. She had the means to track Naruto at any time and the passion to learn from her missteps so that when their final clash eventually came, she would be able to quite handily pound him into the ground and force him to lick the dust from her heels. It was a month before she found him again. Word of a curious golden fox having sunk a marine near the Red Line sent Linlin on the warpath, discovering Naruto once again on the jungle-packed island of Punk Hazard. She arrived with a flotilla of 12 ships at her beck and call, bombarding the island's shores with cannon fire to keep the duo hemmed in by a ring of fire. The battle, as always, began a storm of biblical proportions and, as before, ended with Linlin's defeat. Naruto had conjured a dragon from each element and left her temporarily submerged in water, robbing her of her strength long enough for him to smash her blockade and escape. Again and again, this process repeated. Naruto would slip away to explore part of the new world, but eventually, Linlin would track him down, resulting in a blood-spilling battle that, more often than not, resulted in Linlin's defeat. This was not to say that she did not make progress. Her temperament with regard to the blonde had slowly but surely cooled from its burning hatred to a rivalry that prickled with emotions that she could not truly identify. She enjoyed fighting him, enjoyed the thunder of blood in her ears with each fantastical display of strength and plethora of questions he opened up. Well, was he definitely not a devil fruit user given how adept he was at swimming? An offshoot Lunarian she had thought once as they danced across the lava fields of Peroto, Naruto summoning up great eruptions of magma that he shaped into fox maws to snarl at her. Oh, wouldn't that be a treat, the only race not present on Tato land being a conquered ancient race. No, he doesn't have anything other than that golden energy of his. As Naruto's form was once again wreathed in golden light, Linlin felt her spirit soar. For every battle that they had had, the appearance of the golden cloak had been the sign that he began to take her seriously, and that acknowledgement, the thrill of being able to make someone she was coming to see as an equal try. I want him to acknowledge me, she had thought, wrapping herself in Prometheus like a cloak of fiery armor, electrified fists trading blows with a volley of chakra arms jackhammering down on her. Aye, the ethereal arms moved with blinding speed, each rocking her to the core as he pummeled her into the blackened lava field. The air hummed with their passage as they danced like golden serpents, delivering a barrage of blows with pinpoint accuracy. The very ground quaked beneath their ferocity until, once again, Naruto rendered her unable to move. He stood there, the cloak bleeding away, and panted lightly, resting his hands on his hips while she glowered weakly up at him. He gave a cheesy grin before turning on his heel and leaving. As he began the trek to the coast, he called out to Linlin over his shoulder, "Say hi to the kids for me." Linlin eased herself into a sitting position, watching as he went, her glower lowering to a smile and cheeks flushed with red. "I want him." Tanagari Island stuck out like a sore thumb amidst the lapping blue waves of the New World, though not for what you might expect. While all islands in the second half of the Grand Line were weird to the point where the first half had long been dubbed paradise by comparison, Tanagari was the odd one out. It lacked the grand scale of the closed-off Wano, the submerged intrigue of Fishman Island, and certainly not the constant violent lightning storms that had mysteriously intensified over Raijin Island these last few months. No, Tanagari was, for lack of a better word, normal. It had no odd shape to it, no strange weather or rampant Sea King problem, just 20 kilometers of mild weather, green trees, and a sea breeze. If one were to not count the colossal red and white tower in the center of the island. Situated in the center of the island was a tower made from a four-legged base sunk into a parabolic dish before rising up a thinning neck cross braced with red and white striped metal lattices, the very apex topping out at 333 meters on the dot. With its color and shape, one might think of it as a colossal striped windsock jutting into the sky. Kinda looks like a metal shinju, Naruto observed, his blue eyes reflecting the odd vertigo-inducing phenomena that all tall buildings seem to produce against the sky, as if in motion while knowing it was still. Kurama roused from his nap, shivering unpleasantly. "Don't bring up that thing so early. If I never hear the word again, it will be too soon." The fox breathed out slowly. Naruto sent a wave of apologetic feelings to the fox, cringing lightly as he put his hands behind his head in whimsy. The air rustled his clothes as it passed him. The Uzumaki no longer wore burnt and shredded scraps of cloth for clothes, having been able to cobble together an outfit he was somewhat fond of. Naruto was dressed in an offered long captain's coat with cobalt blue lapels and gold, military-styled epaulettes on each shoulder. His lower body was clad in a pair of somewhat baggy green pants with the bottoms taped tight to his ankles by a roll of white bandages, his feet tucked into black soft-soled shoes with a notable point to their tips. He accented this with a blue sash at his waist, a matching scarf over his male undershirt, and his Konoha headband worn around one arm. He liked the outfit, even though he thought the leopard print coat lining was a little much. "Are you listening to a word I'm saying?" "Boy," said a woman's voice, causing Naruto to quickly look down at the woman in front of him. The wizened old crone in a lab coat sat at the controls of some kind of computer. Naruto blinked several times before shuffling in embarrassment. He ran a hand through his hair. "Sorry, Grandma, I was a million miles away." The old woman growled in annoyance that he wasn't taking this seriously. So are the celestial bodies you're asking me to look at? Keep your mind on the present and you might just learn something. Naruto nodded as the woman pointed to the screen displaying 7 planetoids of varying sizes. As I was saying before you zoned out, our world's mesosphere, that is, the part of the atmosphere with air in it, extends far further beyond what you would think, maintaining a breathable atmosphere in the blackness of space. Within this super mesosphere are 7 moons that orbit the planet, the biggest of which is what most call the moon, as it is the one that reflects the most light at night. The Sky Islanders from Burka call it Fairy Verth. Naruto absorbed the information like a sponge, adding it to his growing stock of knowledge about this world that had become his home for the last year. Yes, a year. Almost 12 months to the day he had crash-landed on the outskirts of Tado Land. The now 18-year-old shinobi felt no real rush to get back for 2 reasons. The first reason was that there was no real need. About a month after his arrival, in between his frequent travels between the islands of the New World, Naruto had felt a familiar yank at the back of his consciousness and was dragged into the orange-hued psychic dreamscape shared by the tailed beasts and their Jinchuriki, called there by the ever-rhyming heir apparent to the rap throne of Kumo and his Jinchuriki brother, Killer Bee. The reunion, fleeting and incorporeal as it had been, was a joyous thing indeed, and Naruto would be lying if he said he hadn't shed a tear, a fact that he would fervently rebuke Kurama whenever he brought it up. The two had exchanged words and stories about what Naruto had been doing while stranded and how Bee had managed to break out of the infinite Tsukuyomi. As it turned out, Kakashi had been the mastermind behind the freedom of the world. He had initially thought it impossible to undo the fruit of Project Tsukinomi with him stranded, given that Hagoromo had specified that the chakra of all 9 Biju and a Rinnegan is needed to break the jutsu. But his sensei had proved a resourceful one indeed. He had Sakura transplant a Rinnegan from Madara's corpse into his head before using the chakra of the 8 Biju and the remnants of Kurama's chakra in the Kohaku no Johei to break the global-scale Genjutsu. He'd even been crowned the 6th Hokage after Tsunade had stepped down in the aftermath of the war, the lucky bastard. Naruto had been practically waiting for Bee to break into a heartfelt verse about how soon he would be home. But all he was greeted with was an ominous silence. The second reason he didn't go home was, well, he couldn't. Whatever Sasuke had done to send him here, the dimensional distance was so great that while the Biju could telepathically contact him, he could not be reverse-summoned back home. It had been a pretty desperate few minutes after that, grasping at straws before he came to a conclusion and smiled. So what if he couldn't go home right now? The world was at peace, the Biju were free, and he knew his people would work towards some kind of way of bringing him home, and in the meantime, he could always talk to them via the telepathic link. But what to do in the meantime? Why travel the world? Of course, his Jiraiya had done before him. In the last 12 months he had been traveling from island to island, people to people, learning all he could about this land and its peoples. It was a long process, given there were over 50 million islands on this planet, but he wanted to see all it had to offer and, if he found wrongs, maybe put them right. And this one here is called Oda. It's the furthest away from the planet and has its own minor satellite called Nafurixu. The old scientist said, tapping a button on her command console. With a sound of hundreds of tons of scraping metal, the red and white tower slowly tilted, pointing towards a different area of the sky. Grimacing at the sound, Naruto shot the old woman an askance look. Doesn't the sound bother you? He asked unsurely. The scientist shot him an amused look before reaching towards her ear where a black shell earpiece protruded. Pulling it from her ear, Naruto raised an eyebrow, seeing that it was a tiny snail, a smaller breed than the transponder snail. I went legally deaf 10 years ago, sonny, been on hearing snades ever since. He pulled a face, watching the slippery gastropod disappear back into her ear. Doesn't that feel weird? Nah, got used to it, and he eats my earwax, so it's a good trade plus. If it means I can keep using the most powerful radio telescope in the world, then it's worth it, she enthused, putting her hands on her hips. Those stuffy old bints on O'Hara can look into history as much as they want. All I care about is the world beyond the stars. Naruto nodded sagely at the words, masterfully hiding his incredulousness. Then again, was he not the same, one that had been chased by and was probably still being chased by Big Mom? Oh, on that account, he was definitely the strange one. It did not matter how far he went or how fast he ran, nor how severely he buried her in the dirt. Charlotte Linlin, Queen of Tado Land, always found him. I still don't know how she's managed to catch us so many times. That hacky crap's so cheating. He mused quietly, curious as to how she consistently achieved the feat. The longest he had ever had before she tracked him down was 2 months. He had last seen her about a month ago on Raijin Island, where she had been consumed by a Kirin he had called down, channeling the entire island's lighting discharge into a singular animated beast. Kurama barked from within, drawing Naruto's ire. The irony that you are being stalked by a pink-haired girl who wants to jump your bones is not lost on me. Naruto gritted his teeth at the comment. Break my bones, not jump him, you fuzzbutt. Same difference. It's really not. Then your human courting rituals are truly beyond me. Sarcasm boiled from the words. Breathing deeply to calm the nerve Kurama was enjoying poking, Naruto reflected that maybe something was there. He was unsure when it had happened, but after so many battles, Linlin's bloodthirsty grin had morphed into something disquietingly more innocent. enjoyment. Her thunderous battle cries had transformed into whoops of jubilation as she did battle with him, exchanging small talk as much as promises of pain. She had even, much to his immense surprise, actually started putting up territory markers. He was oddly proud for some reason. The hair on the back of Naruto's neck suddenly stood to attention, his sixth sense for all things intangible roused, and awareness of something incoming. The professor was in the middle of her speech describing the exodus of the sky peoples from the outlying celestial bodies down to the white seas when suddenly a wave of conquerors' haki washed over the entire island, invisible to the naked eye but appearing to Naruto as a pink-purple haze. The professor was cut off mid-sentence, eyes turning blank and rolling back in her head before slumping back limply in her chair, unconscious. The wave of haki dissipated shortly, and Naruto could not help but pinch the bridge of his nose in annoyance. Well, at least she has the manners to announce herself without cannon fire now, he said, finding a silver lining before turning on his heel and making his way out of the complex, passing dozens of similarly passed-out residents of Tanagari along the way. In a spur-off-the-moment decision, Naruto took the time to prop up every fallen person and ensure they were okay. He knew she'd wait. Progress. Walking through the forest that surrounded the radio telescope complex, Naruto eventually alighted on a sandy beach and saw her, totally unsurprised by her appearance. Now 21, Linlin looked more or less the same as she had a year ago in terms of appearance save for the fact her captain's coat had gained a yellow lining and her fedora had a long pheasant feather sticking out of the fabric band. She sat atop of Zeus in a relaxed repose. Prometheus hovered at her right shoulder. Linlin, he greeted boredly. Zeus, Prometheus. Naruto Zeus greeted excitedly, a far cry from their first meeting. Prometheus glowered at his brother homie being so informal with their enemy. Hey, Whiskers, nice island you got here, far less stormy than ragin'. You put me in traction for a week, you little bastard, she complained with a small smile before rising from Zeus to her full height. Again, Naruto could say she was the tallest human woman he had ever met. She slowly walked towards him, her homies floating either side of her. Did you at least get treats for my boys? Naruto smirked and slowly raised both hands. Channeling chakra into them, he conjured an elemental microcosm in each hand, lila-colored lighting in his left hand and Matatabi's blue fire in his right before flicking his wrists to second them at the two homies. Zeus leapt up with a cheer, opening his mouth wide to gobble up the high-yield electricity and munch on it like succulent candy. Prometheus was far more reserved about nibbling on the globe of azure fire, but it was clear by his cartoonish blush that he was enjoying it. Thanks for using haki to knock everyone out rather than just barging in with the intent to kill, you've come a long way. Naruto smiled. Linlin cocked an eyebrow. And what's it supposed to mean? It's only right that a queen and a conqueror uses her power to prevent an audience of prying eyes. Keep telling yourself that, Naruto chuckled, a dusting of red flushing on Big Mom's cheeks at the tinkling sound. Where's your ship? By the way, you usually have one tart to glower impotently at me from the sidelines. The statuesque woman walked along the waterfront, dismissively looking out at the cerulean waters. They were taking too long to resupply, so I came by myself. More than enough to deal with a backwater little half-mink. How many times do I have to tell everyone I'm not a mink? I've been to zoo, and even they think I'm part mink. Naruto complained, remembering the dukedom on the back of an elephant wandering the seas. She looked over his face searchingly. You just have a creatine vulpine charm to you, Naruto. Her use of his name so casually caught Naruto flat-footed, causing him to sputter to Big Mom's amusement. I take that you won't give me the fight I want with those people on the island. But we're in luck. She raised her arm, twirling her finger in a show of theatrics before pointing north. There just so happens to be an abandoned island 40 kilometers that way. Looking at Linlin, Naruto considered her, unsure of what her endgame was anymore, but it was fine to acquiesce if it got people out of danger. Approaching the lapping waves, he casually stepped onto the water and began walking across it in the direction she had pointed as she mounted up on Zeus. The island shook violently, a tempest of invisible wind shaking the forest to its foundations. Once again, the Queen of Tado and the last Uzumaki met one another in battle, sparks of clashing weapons flowing across the treetops like a water of ephemeral fire. Stay down, Naruto yelled over the scratch of a slowly expanding Rasen Shuriken, carving a smooth crater in a plateau, his opponent in the center. Silence reigned for a solitary moment before the beautiful woman's laughter echoed. Ah, you're strong, Whiskers. Much to his chagrin, the young woman clawed her way upright again, shrugging off the sting of the Rasen Shuriken. No one gives me a thrill like you, not like Newgate or Shiki. Not even that Wildman Rocks can knock me for 6 with such style. More, I want more, she yelled, launching an Ikoku sovereignty at Naruto. She swept low under it before raising his own weapon, a black boss staff slightly shorter than him, and caught the magenta-colored flying slash. It seemed to curl around the staff before condensing into a glowing maul on the end of his bow, and he ran forward, twirling it in one hand before launching it like a javelin back at Linlin. She predicted the move via her observation haki and leapt to the side, but was caught blindsided when the rock she had been standing beside vanished in a poof of smoke, revealing it had been no more than a transformed shadow clone who caught the pipe and turned into the momentum, bringing the bow around like it was a mace and crashing the captured sovereignty into her hip. She let out a grunt, pain burning up her side as her own attack detonated against her and sent her skipping back, smashing through the forest in splitters as she was sent through trees by the shockwave. Naruto extended his hand, tapping into magnet style and recalling the bow staff to his hand. It may have looked metallic and black, but in actuality, the material was so densely covered in Shukaku's curse mark that it appeared black. He twirled it idly from hand to hand as he waited for Linlin to come again. What the fuck was that? Big Mom came stomping out of the forest, face set in a happy grin. Felt like I got smacked by the sea itself. Just a little something I picked up from some guy with a panda mask in Strumia. It's apparently made of some kind of sea prissy stone, he answered, tossing the bow like it was a conductor's baton before catching it. All I know is it's hard as hell and perfect for smacking people with weird powers like yours. Sea prism stone ... He had a stick made out of sea prism stone. Linlin tilted her head. Slackjawed had explained why her homies were currently knocked out. But still, this was impossible, inconceivable, it was just so. So, mama, that's so you, Linlin guffawed, drawing her cutlass and rushing Naruto. She brought down her sword, and he blocked with his staff, sparks flying between them. I think I just fell in love. That caught him off guard. She capitalized, kneeing him in the solar plexus. Naruto skidded back before performing a back handspring to get distance and regain his balance. A bead of sweat ran down his brow. What the hell are you? He shouted, confused at the sudden declaration. She grinned, taking up a power stance. A woman who knows what she wants. Now fight me. Her haki enveloped her entire body, growing thicker around her sword, her eyes hiding nary a lie. There is no person on these oceans like you, no one so unique, no one so carefree. You simply do as you want and face power with power, so I must have you, you will be my grrrg gurglerie. The sound echoed over the clearing with a sour note. Linlin's face drained of color, and her eyes swam with pain, the shroud of haki around her guttering like a candle in the wind. Not now, she hissed under her breath, placing a hand on her stomach and clenching her fist in dismay. Not when I'm so close. Grrrg gurglerie. Og, she screamed, her sword falling from her fingers to clatter against the ground. Doubling over in pain, it took a superhuman effort to keep herself from falling over as her midsection caught fire. It had been some time since she had felt this agony, her body asserting its will with such ferocity that conscious thought nearly evaporated from her mind like water on a skillet. Now she would not lose to a hunger pang. She was a queen, she ruled. She was not ruled over, she was not a monster. What's wrong? Thigh highs. Orange eyes widened. Linlin slowly looked up into the tanned face of Naruto, his features set in a concerned expression. Another groan came from her stomach, but this time, it did not seem to hurt so much. Why did he look at her with concern when her hunger pangs had only inspired dread and fear in her crew? Naruto seemed to consider her for a long time before he sighed, sealing away his bow staff with a poof of smoke before a larger poof of smoke revealed a box of supplies and bowls. How about we call this quits till we get something to eat? It was music to her ears. The sun had set by the time the two had prepared dinner, and Big Mom's two cartoonish meteorological phenomena slept soundly by the fire. Naruto and Linlin could be seen slurping from giant bowls of ramen animatedly. Linlin ate like a ravenous beast, spilling the broth down her front as her hunger slowly receded, and while Naruto was slightly more controlled in his consumption of the comically large portion, he was able to keep pace with the tall woman. Light and shadows danced over each of them. The warm glow of the fire and the crackling of logs provided a pleasant ambience, and in the darkness you could almost forget they had nearly trashed the island in their battle. Naruto was the first to finish and covered his mouth to hide his belch, having enjoyed the break in the fighting for his favorite meal. You're looking better, so it seems you just needed some grub. Lucky I picked up a catering pack of ramen, though I didn't expect that I'd have to share it. Linlin finished tipping the last of the broth into her mouth before putting her bowl aside. How much better, she huffed in contentment, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand. She narrowed her eyes at Naruto conspiratorially. Food is meant to be shared, not hoarded by one person. But it seems your manners have won out over your bad upbringing, Whiskers. Naruto snorted, leaning back against the fallen tree he was using as a seat. Big Mom smiled, slipping into a contented silence. The silence slowly grew awkward, neither really knowing how to broach the subject of conversation without Mortal Kombat at play. The older woman eventually broke the silence. If you're going to stare, Whiskers, then take a picture, it will last longer. Naruto rolled his eyes, but it was a good enough easing of tensions, he supposed. You're the one who's been chasing me for a year. Thigh highs, if anyone has obsessive issues, it's you. The difference between an obsession and a quest is the chance of success, and it seems you and I are breaking bread over a campfire. That's a win in my mind. She rationalized, removing her fedora and resting it on her lap, her long pink hair free to flow down her back. Had she always been that pretty? Naruto beat the stray thought into submission but let his curiosity eventually win. So are we going to talk about what you said or just go back to trying to kill each other? Mama, she giggled at his banal breakdown of their dynamic. My declaration has you hot under the collar. Good, there's hope for your common sense yet. There's nothing strange about the truth. I think I love you. Naruto rested his chin on the back of his fist and pouted. Linlin, in my short life, I have seen a lot of weird things, and let me say this, the truth is never normal and always strange. A thought occurred to him and he leant forwards. Speaking of weird shit, I've always wondered how you were always able to track me down. Linlin glowed with mirth, tapping her fedora knowingly. Seeing Naruto's lack of comprehension, she slipped a finger into the fabric band of the hat and withdrew a small square of blank yellow paper that she lay on the palm of her hand. Naruto watched as the piece of paper began to slowly, without prompting, edge itself closer to Naruto by minute increments. His eyes bugged out when it was a Viver card, a standard method of navigating used in the New World to bypass its wacky magnetics. Taking a nail or a hair of someone and combining it with special paper created a link to the life force of the target, monitoring their life and moving in their direction whenever not acted upon. She returned the scrap of paper to her fedora. End of our first clash last year. You left a few of your hairs in my rings. Naruto facepalmed. It seemed so obvious in hindsight from what he had learned of this sea in the last year. As for my love for you, I don't see a problem, unless I'm too much woman for you. She trailed her fingers down the line of her waist corset to her wide hips and enjoyed the blush it incurred in the firelight. No, it's not that, it's just, I'm finding it very hard to see how we can go from enemies to loved ones without so much as a kiss. Oh my god. This is like one of Sensei's books. It's actually freaking happening, pervy sage, you old lech. Naruto muttered, flashing to a 1,000-yard stare born of 3 years of proofreading smut manuscripts for Jiraiya. Thumbing her chin, Linlin pushed on with her explanation. I know the pleasures of the flesh sex is fun, but I've never felt anything like what I do for you, like an attraction that calls over the sea. You are so strong, yet you don't flaunt it. I find the unique attractive. And what is love? An unexplainable force that attracts two things together for no given reason other than itself. Big Mom offered sincerely, you'll make a fine addition to my crew. Naruto pouted in confusion, weirded out and flattered by the words. He had hardly expected things to get so philosophical with the so-called country destroyer. But who sat before him right now? It was a far cry from the legend of Charlotte Linlin who annihilated countries on a whim, whose bounty numbered in the billions. She looked so relaxed, not human. An innocent monster who, despite the way the world viewed her, had a mind, feelings, and viewpoints all of her own. Curiosity teased words from him. I'm not even a pirate, and I hardly want those seagull heads running after me. It may be a bit too late for that, Linlin replied. She began to rummage through the pockets of her captain's coat, causing her bust to jiggle a little to Naruto's watching eyes. He averted his eyes a few seconds after he should have. She made a triumphant sound and withdrew a rolled-up sheet of brown paper and tossed it to him. You've made a name for yourself, Whiskers. A pit of dread formed at the base of Naruto's stomach, and with trepidation, he slowly unrolled the parchment, revealing a familiar whisker-marked face set in a fierce snarl. Wanted, dead or alive. UZUMAKITYPHONNARUTO. B99 million. The vein in Naruto's forehead all but exploded, throbbing visibly, eyes bugging from their sockets. Wanted for crimes including but not limited to vandalism, theft, thuggery, disrupting the peace, multiple counts of island demolition and sinking of a marine battleship carrying Celestial Dragon tribute to God Valley. What the hell? Linlin roared with laughter, her orange eyes running with tears of mirth while Naruto did a stunning impression of a fish in how he sightlessly looked between her and his bounty poster. It's a good starting bounty, Whiskers. I think sinking that battleship really pushed it over the edge. Naruto had never really stayed long enough on one island to pay attention to the goings-on of the world, but that did not mean the world had not paid attention to him. Linlin informed him that the blonde had slowly but surely earned a reputation as a herald of destruction, as every time he showed up on an island, Linlin would inevitably find her way there and their clash would scare the population to death. By the time the explanation was over, he simply stared at the poster in confusion, seizing on random elements of it. Does someone at the Marines not know how to spell typhoon? He asked glibly. It's probably a reference to an old legend, Typhon, the storm giant who laid the continent polar oars low. Probably because of the storms our battles have kicked up over the New World, Linlin hypothesized. Great, that's just great, Naruto scowled, gesturing at Linlin using the rolled-up poster. The last thing I needed was getting slapped with the pirate label. Now I gotta worry about Marines everywhere I go. Linlin turned pensive. Not all pirates are bad. Sure, you've got rough ones like John, Wang Jai and that hoodlum Rocks, but some of us have noble goals. Naruto sent her a searching look. Really, the last year tells otherwise, he snapped before getting a collar on his annoyance. He took a deep breath and asked Linlin for her side of the story. What do you want, Linlin? What I want, Linlin began, closing her eyes and letting passion fill her voice, is a place where everyone, of all races, colors, and creeds can sit around the same table and enjoy dinner in peace. A utopia where people no longer have to know hunger, prejudice, persecution, or hate. Where a little girl doesn't have to wonder where her mother and siblings went. Naruto remained silent, letting her talk, listening. He listened to what she was saying, not simply allowing the words to flow over him as many of her crew did. Honestly, part of her would have preferred it that way. Being listened to and not feared was. It made very old insecurities sit up in the back of her mind. Is it so wrong of me to desire? Before answering, Naruto thought about her words and actions and perceived and believed nature. It's not wrong, but I've seen before how noble intentions are insidious traps that can lead good men down bad paths. There's nothing as scary as the evil of a good man. Cause demons run when a good man goes to war, he said firmly. Something inside Linlin broke, shattering like glass. A veil lifted itself from her eyes to see the world anew, truths long hidden. No, truths she had refused to see, began to wriggle from the dark. "What about you? What is it that you desire?" she asked, begging to slowly move closer. Naruto hummed and thought his obvious answer was somewhat untenable at the moment, and the thought of a future in this world was something that had never evolved beyond idle fancy. But now, after such a heartfelt baring of the soul, he had to answer in kind. I didn't have a very good childhood. It wasn't the worst, but it wasn't good either. But I can say that the cause was something out of my control. Being seen as a monster. The words seemed to catch in his throat, but he gathered himself. I wondered at times, was I a monster? What even is a monster? Some moldering thing that crawls from a wet and cold place, a ghost from a book. No, a monster is something that does not fall in line with common sense, and to blame a child for that, how could I do anything that is not for the children in this world who suffer for no other reason than the world says they should? He finished, staring into a pair of beautiful orange eyes. Linlin had crossed the distance to him as he had spoken, his words growing more impassioned until now she was just a few inches away. They looked into one another's eyes, feeling the tickle of their breaths on one another's face, frozen in a moment in time by a campfire in the middle of nowhere. Slowly, as if testing the waters, Linlin leaned in and captured Naruto's lips in a kiss, his eyes going wide. He did not respond at first, but eventually he began to respond, sucked into the hypnotic rhythm of a kiss, lips dancing to the beat of their hearts. Getting over the initial awkwardness, he returned the affections, and Linlin let out a pleased moan, her painted red lips melding with his until, finally, they were forced to break for air. Both panted lightly, hearts thumping in their ears at the enjoyment of the touch of tantric tete-a-tete. Mastering herself, Linlin sat up and looked deep into Naruto's eyes, a delicate hand slowly tracing the neck of her blouse and unhooking a button. So then, another button popped, the top of her cleavage emerging from the shadows. Together we might just make a country for those children to know only peace. Naruto swallowed thickly before finally he decided to try. It was mad, insane, monstrous even. After all, he'd try anything once. Once, he said. For Naruto, how little he knew. The Grand Line was an unbroken band of turquoise that stretched uninterrupted to the horizon. Sunlight beat down from on high amid scant cumulus clouds that added to the picturesque quality of the moment, a chiral reflection between sky and sea. A pair of hands overlapping that matched up perfectly yet when inspected independently showed their difference. Water emanated a calming susurrus that served as backing for the assembled choir of ambience. The wind was its tenor and the distant cry of seabirds the accompaniment. However, there was something amiss in the otherwise idyllic setting, a shadow beneath the waves that cruised through the depths, obfuscated by the refraction of the waves. Stray fish sensed its passage and thronged towards it, hoping to play pilot fish to a bigger beast in search of good eating. They grew closer until stopping dead, a primeval and basic animal prescience telling them that it was not a good idea to approach the thing, thus they turned tail and swam off into the depths. The shadow grew larger as it rose from the darkness, the surface of the sea bulging as it was disturbed by the displacement effect of something exceedingly large moving with great speed. Was it a sea king? No. The serpentine beasts coiled through the depths unless they were hunting. The object's path was linear in its ascent and uniform in its direction. Churning the water up into foam, a great mass finally breached the surface, heaving itself onto the sea with a mighty bang as water sloughed off a perfectly round locust bearing the iridescent sheen of a soap bubble. Scant moments later did the bubble's integrity compromise and popped into tens of thousands of smaller bubbles that were carried away on the sea breeze. What remained was a ship of immense size and bizarre architecture. I'm a ship. The ship was massive in scope, a bark by rigging but a galleon in design. Bearing a trio of square-rigged masts that stretched nearly 500 meters into the air and even longer from bow to stern, it was more accurate to call her a floating mountain than a ship, her otherwise avant-garde design notwithstanding. The hull was split into 4 distinct colorations modeled after different types of confectionery. The topmost gold lining held a melted effect to it as if it had been heated, and rivulets of metal dripped down the sides of the cannon deck like frosting on a cake. The cakes continued fore and aft of the midship with dual superstructures modeled on different puddings, a tall trifle at the stern and a great white birthday cake at the bow. Looking closer, one could see giant candy canes and wavers sticking out from behind the lit candles and technicolor ice cream cones hanging from the crosstrees from which a gigantic patterned sail billowed in the wind. A white skull adorned in a maroon bicorn with a gold band at its rim, plump red lips and a frizz of rose-colored hair, bifurcated by a pair of cartoon lollipops. It was unmistakably the heraldry of the Big Mom pirates. This was the Queen Mama Chanter, pride of Tato Land and the flagship of Charlotte Linlin's fleet. She cut through the waves with surprising amounts of clip given her size, seeming to wallow from one side to another as if she was skipping along to the song of the ocean. After a few minutes, a few dozen shadows appeared in the sky and flew towards the Chanter, circling her from above before diving down to greet the hundreds of crew that she needed to run properly. Each was a large white bird wearing a peaked cap and a messenger bag stuffed with newspapers stuffed in it. The flock of newscoos picked their targets and pounced, some alighting on the railings next to waiting crewmates while others either perched on the rigging or continued their circling of the Chanter, looking for someone that was likely to buy their wares. One such entrepreneurial avian flew a wide circuit towards the bow where it spotted a figure sat upon the figurehead, appropriately sized sponge-colored round face adorned in a crown, its wide mouth yawning wide in a gormless smile. Naruto looked up at the news coup as it came down to land beside him, raising a wing in a theatrical bow before offering its bag of newspapers. Amused at the showing, he pulled out one of the rolled-out papers and fished out his Bettied frog wallet from his coat and gave the bird a few notes, one for the paper and one for the trouble. Unwrapping the paper, he began to quietly hum to himself as he read over its contents. It had been several weeks since his and Linlin's latest clash and subsequent horizontal negotiations near Tanagari Island, and a lot had happened in a comparatively short time. When Linlin's ship had caught up to them, the crew had been confused and concerned at the fact that Linlin looked satisfied, yet Naruto was very clearly still alive and equally as glowing. They had all but voided their pants when she had proclaimed his new status as her husband, and when Naruto had tried to argue the point on the side of the crew that this was just an alliance, she had proudly stated that they had already consummated it over a vow. He had only hoped that that was where it stopped. Looking at the front cover of the World Economic Journal, a sizable tickmark appeared at Naruto's temple as he read the title. Country Destroyer and Typhon. Alliance start of the Big Family Pirates. How the hell does this stuff leak out so quickly? Does the crew have loose lips, or do we need to buy more white transponder snails? He questioned irately, rifling through the pages to read whatever slander was being spread about him. Slander is spoken, if it's in print then it's liable. Kurama rumbled from the back of his mind, causing Naruto to mentally glower at the mightiest Biju. Since when have you become an expert in literary defamation rules? Fuzzbutt Naruto asked, skimming through the words before settling on the actual details of the so-called Big Family Alliance. Kurama chuckled, ever enjoying a verbal spar with his partner. Because I actually read these articles all the way through instead of just screaming at a headline and ranting into the ether. Believe it or not, you can learn much more if you read the important details rather than tuning out context. Naruto growled at the snark. Usually he was the more quippy of the duo, but Linlin had been keeping him rather busy these last few weeks, and not just in the bedroom. She had taken him back to Tado Land and given him a proper tour, scaring the pants off her subjects in the process, unused to seeing their queen in such a good mood. Whole Cake Island had been a sight to behold and had cemented something in Naruto. Linlin was a child at heart, but a woman in mind. Her methods could be brutal, but it came from a noble goal, and he would see their shared project become a bit more productive, a fairy tale kingdom made reality. He caught movement out his periphery and saw a pair of crewmen and chess soldiers watching him uncertainly. He cast a glance their way and they retreated back inside to resume their duty. Darn, he wished they wouldn't be so nervous around him, but he was still new and someone that defied the very logic of this world. Still, it would not have been the first time he had won over people, and in that respect this winter celebration was good. After making their alliance and his tacit kingship of Tado, Linlin had decided that a proper celebration was in order, and they had left Tado bound for paradise, apparently to meet up with some of her allied crews in the first half of the Grand Line for a winter celebration that came around once a year. Not that he could tell given the Grand Line's schizophrenic weather fronts. He paused his train of thought when a small pudgy hand reached up from his lap to point at an illustration of Naruto in the paper. Papa. Naruto turned before his face softened, looking at the bundle of spiky crimson hair looking up at him. Charlotte Katakuri, now 3 years old, sat in his lap with wide eyes and a toothy grin. Linlin's genes were definitely kicking in with a vengeance, for despite being just out of toddler range, he was already the size of a normal 8-year-old, ambled a comfortable sit beside the young man. He ruffled the boy's hair good-naturedly and chuckled as the little boy chirruped a laugh before returning to nibbling on a donut. Despite his misgivings with how quickly Linlin was rushing into things with him, Naruto could not deny that he found her children unspeakably adorable. The feeling had been mutual, as the children had gravitated towards the spiky-haired blonde due to the ever-present vibe of warmth and safety they felt in his presence. Most of the crew either treated the princes and princesses of their nation as sycophants or like they were made of glass, not getting close. It was something that Naruto couldn't stand to see, separation based on traits they had no control over. So whenever he could during this trip into paradise, he had made sure to spend time with them and made sure they had fun and felt safe in his presence. I'm a ship. Returning to the newspaper, he glanced at the bounties section and scanned for his name, wondering if his marriage had caused the price to rise, but became sidetracked when he saw a different kind of bounty. His smile faded, replaced with an ugly frown. Don't frown, it doesn't look good on you, Whiskers. A tall shadow was cast over Naruto and Katakuri, and Linlin hopped down from the top of the birthday cake to stand next to her lover in second sun. Seen something you don't like? She asked, feeling his discontent rolling off him as an almost visible cloud. Silence was her answer, forcing her to lean over and look at the newspaper, her nose wrinkling in disgust. Damn poachers. Poacher, yes, that was an adequate term for what the bounty involved. A standard fee to report sightings and reward the capture and turning over of 2 particular races to the hands of the world government, the Lunarians and the Buccaneers. Persecuting someone for something so stupid as the race they were born into. Celestial dragons, more like crap-covered worms, Naruto said, watching his language due to Katakuri's presence. I'm a ship. Linlin tipped her new bicorn hat to shade her eyes. It was an ugly truth that the scramble for this world's peoples and creatures made monsters of men, and perhaps if she had taken a different path she might have reduced these persecuted peoples to specimens to be collected. Hee, I'm a ship. Veins pulsed in Naruto's temples. While the Chanter was a fine ship, its nature as a homie made its semi-sentient nature annoying at times. How many do you think are left? Linlin sighed. The talk was heavy for what should have been a time of celebration. My sources tell me that some buccaneers made an exodus into the South Blue. As for the Lunarians, I don't know. Something drove them from their sky islands during the Void Century, and what couldn't slip between the cracks of the world were executed by the world nobles on sight. That advert in the paper has been there for the better part of 300 years. Hee, I'm a shit. Having enough of the homie's prattle, Naruto's hand whipped to his sea stone bow staff strapped to his back, unlashing it and whipping it down against the figurehead in one smooth motion. An invisible tremor burst from the point of impact and caused the entire ship to shudder slightly but left no mark, the figurehead falling silent. Linlin's eyebrow twitched at him. Don't break our ship. I didn't leave a mark, Naruto argued, grinning up at her, and true to his word, there was not a single mark where he had struck. Big Mom considered for a moment that this might be some analog for Haki, Naruto using his own internal energy or chakra to push the essence of the sea stone into her homie to temporarily render it silent. Her pride, however, prevented her from complimenting him, instead huffing and looking away from him with a blush. Silence reigned between the odd couple for about a minute before something odd happened. Linlin sensed it in a flash, a premonition of something bad, but by the time she had turned to look at her lover and son it was already too late. In her premonition she had seen something horrid, Katakuri attempting to stuff too much donuts into his mouth, and in an effort to open his mouth wider, splitting his cheeks into a horrid Glasgow smile. She whipped around, hearing a cry, and saw. Naruto looked down at Katakuri with a wince, a wad of fried donut gathered in his palm while Katakuri shook. It took a moment for it to become apparent why. Katakuri's rows of needle-sharp shark-like teeth were buried to the gums in Naruto's right forearm, blood bubbling to the surface. Katakuri Linlin cried, dropping to one knee to help her child, who looked horrified at what he had done. But what exactly had he done? Naruto had never taken his focus off the 3-year-old, so the moment he had seen the rounded baby fat of his cheeks pull far tougher than it ever should, he had quickly snatched the offending substance from Katakuri's mouth. In hindsight, he should have predicted what would happen. A child no older than 3, deprived of his beloved food with his jaws open to maximum extension, the result had been instant. Prompted by an animalistic nature he had yet to develop an ability to suppress, Katakuri had lurched forwards and sank his fangs into the first thing he could, which in this case had been Naruto's right arm. When the red haze had cleared, the young boy had realized what he had done and let out a wail of sorrow, gleaning that he had unintentionally hurt someone who cared for him. Blue eyes met orange and an empathetic look stopped Linlin in her tracks. A steel was under the blue, a request for trust. Dropping the donut material, Naruto gently slid the fingers of his left hand over Katakuri's gums and massaged them gently, encouraging the young boy to slowly clench his jaw and gently draw the teeth from his flesh. The blonde made a soothing noise as he drew his hurt arm away so Katakuri didn't have to see it, and was quick to pull out a cloth to wipe his blood from the second son's mouth. Steam began to rise from the bite mark and Linlin watched, transfixed, as the grievous wound sealed itself shut in a matter of moments. But the whole time Naruto was focused on making sure Katakuri was okay. Softly smiling at the crimson-haired boy, his face now clean of any blood, Naruto spoke in a quiet voice. Hey now, it's okay, yeah no. You didn't mean to do it and it's over now, so let's just see that cute little smile again. Hey, after all, Linlin tells me that it's getting near Christmas. A time for family and sharing. Can you give me a smile, little protector? Katakuri sniffed, his eyes still glimmering with unshed tears, but managed a small smile, one Naruto returned with gusto. Linlin put an arm around the pair. Yes, she had picked well with this one. He was strong but kind, and hopefully the country they planned to make would be like that too. The sky above Kurigana Island was fittingly gloomy, a slate-gray bank of low-hanging clouds that hung over the forested island like a lead weight. The atmosphere was tepid and cold, dancing on the knife edge between snow and rain but managing to be neither as the bank sat squatly in place. From the deck of his ship, Vice Admiral Monkey D. Garp scowled up a storm, glaring balefully out at the dark waters that surrounded him. A tall man in the prime of his life at 33, Garp could quite easily fall within the realms of what most colloquially called superhumans. Standing in at 9'5", he had a broad and muscular build with a barrel chest, thick strong arms, and a thicket of messy hair that jostled in the wind. Garp wore the standard garb of a vice admiral, a crisp white double-breasted suit with a matching shirt and black tie. The emblematic justice coat slung over his shoulders with gold epaulets and two-tone red and black cuffs that billowed as his HQ ship continued its lethargic circuit of the island. Despite his age, Garp's face held a few lines from smiling too much and a shallow scar on his left temple. Despite the clear evidence that he was used to laid-back cheer, the D-Clan member's current demeanor was anything but sunny. Crossing his arms over his chest, Garp's black eyes scanned the horizon, spotting several other ships trailing a loose parameter of the island, each one a battleship like as though lacking his bulldog heraldry. Why do we have to do this crap, Bogart, he said brusquely, a shorter marine in a gray suit and wide-brimmed hat stepping into his peripheral vision. Orders from Fleet Admiral Khan, you know that as well as I do, sir. Bogart answered, his eyes hidden by the shadows of his hat. While his voice was level, it was clear by the way that he groped the katana sheathed at his side that he was just as disquieted by this position as his leader. Barking a laugh of derision, Garp swept his hand out at the collection of battleships with them. 4 vice admirals to play babysitter to one of them is not how I wanted to spend Christmas, Bogart. I could be back in Goa right now, kicking back to relax and getting a workout in Grey Terminal. Bogart fixed his superior with a sideways look. Is that really the way you want to be spending your Christmas, sir? Why not they just dumped a fresh set of scrap runoffs from their steelworks in there, and there's nothing that gets the blood pumping more than punching metal so hard it turns back into liquid, Garp said, slamming his fist into an open palm at the thought, some of the life returning to his posture. What about your 8-year-old son? I have one of those. The 33-year-old blinked slowly before releasing a snort of laughter. Oh shit, yeah I do. That reminds me that I need to start him on his training. There's this wonderful tiger-infested gorge in the mountains that he can train in. Whatever you say, sir. Bogart wondered how the East Blue could be considered the weakest sea when monsters like Garp and Roger called the place home. They must cause the average level of strength in the entire sea to go up a few notches by their very existence. Another battleship approached Garp's HQ-3 slowly, sailing into the wind as it was, but even then you could make out the letters G5 proudly emblazoned on the mainsail. A tall figure stood atop the starboard rotary turret watching the approaching bulldog and leapt from one ship to another as they passed, ignoring the calls of confusion from their own crew as he walked towards Bogart and Garp. The man was a few years Garp's junior but of a similar build and bore the hallmarks of a vice admiral. He had a strong face with small but intelligent eyes, his hair close-cropped and purple. Upon seeing the arrival of the younger man, Garp mustered a grin before chambering a punch and launching it at the newcomer. He was pleased when the tall 29-year-old sent up a hand to catch his fist, stopping it dead in its tracks. Getting better at that, Zephyr. Been hitting the shipyards to get some training in. Vice Admiral Zephyr smirked, shoving Garp playfully in the shoulder. Stubborn bastard, you took most of the good scrap for yourself. I had to make do with a pair of mountains last month. I'm surprised you haven't created a perfectly flat country yet. Zephyr was one of the rising stars in the Marines like Garp, and while he didn't have a well-touted rival yet like Roger or Rox, he was tapped to potentially take up an admiral position in a few years' time once he mastered his haki. He was one of the only Marines in history to turn down the chance to eat a devil fruit any time it had been offered to him. Garp nodded, slipping his hands into his pockets as the bulldog came around the curve of the island. Where the fun in that be flat country would have nothing to punch but the ground, and I don't like the idea of digging holes when we aren't getting paid for it. Black Fist rolled his eyes. Garp was always the wild card of the Marines. What lie did Kong tell you to bring you out here, he asked, the humor falling away from his words. Laughter dying out, seriousness once more fell over Garp, looking out at the rolling hills of the island. He could spot what appeared to be packs of large bipedal apes watching the ships from the shore before ducking back into the trees. Probably the same horse crap he told you, watching over noted dignitaries in need of protection. The black-haired Marine sarcastically made quotation marks with his fingers. Zephyr nodded grimly, confirming Garp's suspicions. Cause he knew that if he told us the truth we'd have said no. I'd have told him to stick it up his ass. In fact, Bogart, he said to the shortest man of the trio, fetch the transponder snail. I think I'm gonna call up Kong and tell him that right now. Bogart sighed before turning to leave. Whether to get the transponder snail or just leave the two vice admirals to talk was left unclear. Silence passed between both of the tall men as the ship finally circled around to the front of the island. The source of their ire moored in the port arrogantly. It was a ship of similar proportions to the Bulldog but with fewer cannons and lacking the Marines' favored dark green paint. A proud gilded lion figurehead was attached to the prow of the ship that seemed to turn its nose up at the port, as if offended by its existence. Their eyes were drawn to the sails, noting the absence of the Marine seagull heraldry for what was there instead, the 5-pointed cross of the world government. And above it, the red hoof of the flying dragon. World nobles, Zephyr ground out, his hands tensing into fists. There's nothing noble about those assholes, Garp added, sending a scathing look at the ship. When he had originally gotten the call from Kong about this operation, Garp had been mostly ambivalent, much more concerned with his upcoming chance to go home for the holidays. But there had been something that stank about what Kong had said to him that piqued his interest. Kurigana Island was home to the Shikiru Kingdom, a nation not part of the world government, so the fact that they were being asked to escort dignitaries to the island was suspicious. Whenever an island or kingdom made the request to join the WG, a general PSA about it was put out in Marineford, encouraging local Marine task forces to step up their operations in the area to make the transition smoother. Not only had the Shikiru Kingdom not been reported as wanting to join, it was a nation that in the past had routinely declined membership, preferring to stay in the hands of their mysterious and aloof monarch. The shift in rhetoric had been too big of an oddity to not investigate, but upon getting to the island, Garp had been disgusted at just who he was being asked to protect. Spotting another Marine battleship moored in the small harbor, Zephyr read off the identification number and groaned in annoyance. They called in John for this one. We want Sparks not to fly, but we have that status quo sycophant on call with us. There were 4 vice admirals that had been called in to assist this diplomatic venture: Garp, Zephyr, John Giant, and Sengoku. With 4 of the biggest names in the Marines and a small flotilla of battleships circling the island, it was obvious that this was no protection detail. This was a blockade. Bada. Both men turned to see Bogart approaching them with a burbling transponder snail held in his arms, his face grim. Setting it down on the edge of the deck, he took a step back and waited. Garp and Zephyr exchanged a look, each wondering who should pick up before Garp finally lifted the brass receiver from its mounting. "This is Garp," he said, feigning a normal voice. Before their eyes, the 3 men watched as the psychic snail began to morph, a bushy black afro springing from its head and a mustache appearing at its top lip, mimicking the appearance of the one on the other end. "This is Sengoku." He tapped the brass fittings of the receiver to his forehead in frustration before speaking again. "What is it?" "Sengoku got some new tea for me to try because I can guarantee that it's a damn sight more entertaining than playing babysitter to an inbred hick." The afro-sporting snail blinked slowly, weathering the hot words. "Mind your tongue, Garp. Like it or not, we work for the world government and thus the celestial dragons. Have you seen Zephyr?" "I'm here. Go ahead, Vice Admiral." The Black Fist of the Marines commented, seeing no point in hiding his presence. "Good. This means that I only have to make 2 calls instead of 3. John has already been informed." Informed of what? Garp asked, a knot of dread building in the pit of his stomach. Before Sengoku could reply, distant sounds began to echo out from the center of the island, screams of terror punctuated by sharp cracks of gunfire. Their observation Haki clicked on with a mental switch, and even at this distance they could practically see hundreds of men, women, and children cowering in fear with the mandrills as armor-clad knights stomped through the streets, driving their tall lances into legs and arms. Garp was ready to leap into the fray when the snail spoke again in Sengoku's voice. "None of you are to interfere with the actions of Saint Jalmak. We are to maintain the blockade until either he is satisfied or the Count of the Island returns." Glaring down at the snail, Garp let out a roar of righteous anger. "Fuck you, Sengoku. I did not sign up to the Marines to play toady to the dragons as they kill innocent people." Sengoku paused. It was clear that despite his businesslike tone that he too was having his misgivings about their current course of action. "It is regrettable, but Saint Jalmak has promised that he will not explicitly kill any of the residents, merely wound." "That's besides the point, and you know it, Sengoku." Garp riposted, the Marines running about the deck taking a step back in fear. Zephyr closed his eyes, his knuckles white. He knew there was injustice in the Marines, he just hoped he could rise high enough to make a change. "This is an order, Garp. Maintain the blockade, do that and no one has to die." "That's an order direct from the Gorosei," Sengoku proclaimed before the snail went dormant, the line going dead. Garp let out a wrathful cry, picking up the transponder snail and tossing it overboard. Meanwhile, in the heart of the island, Saint Jalmak of the Celestial Dragons watched the man in front of him cower in fear as if he was some kind of insect pinned beneath a looking glass. Most everything had that effect given the glass box he wore over his head. "Where is your king, commoner?" he asked, looking away from the crying form of the man's wife. The people of this country all wore black cloaks emblazoned with the sigil of a red bat's skull. It disgusted the world noble that these clods of mud had the gall to bear heraldry not of the world government. The 8 stammered, unable to tear his eyes away from the broken visage of a man that Jalmak rode atop like a horse. "Is that what was to become of his people?" Count Red is away from the island. "I don't know when he will be back." This was such a tedious endeavor, reflected the saint, shooting the 8 in the kneecap, ignoring him as he fell to the ground and calling bloody murder. What a despicable showing of tardiness from a so-called monarch. He should have been on hand to greet us when we arrived. Looking up at the space-suit-clad aristocrat, the 8 was able to choke out, "But we were never told you were coming." "Of course not. What business does an ant have knowing that their god will be visiting their dunghill? You should have been ready as a matter of principle." He checked his watch before recocking his ornate flintlock pistol, this time pointing it at another resident. "Fine. For each hour I am forced to wait I will shoot 10 of your people, starting with your wife." The gun cracked again, splintering a kneecap. He wouldn't kill any of them. After all, that was part of the coming game and he would not spoil that. As screams of man and monkey alike filled the air, Jalmak had no idea the hell he had just called down on himself, thundering across the sea. One who lived above the clouds could never know that a storm was on its way. Dropping anchor in a nondescript section of the ocean that was just as seemingly idyllic as the rest of paradise, the Queen Mama Chanter sat squat upon the surface as the 1,000-strong crew needed to man her ran about for their assigned duties. Although, that was not strictly true. As a homie animated by Big Mom Soru no Mai, the majority of the Chanter's functions were essentially automated, with one having to simply ask an assigned section of the ship to do a particular action. It was more accurate to call the Chanter a colony of homies because beyond the individual sections of animated wood and steel that had been hammered together into a bark, there were hundreds of other sentient items and beings made manifest by Big Mom's power. Some were simple articles of furniture that bore eyes and a mouth, cheerfully telling those that passed of their function. Others were more intelligent, shaped into simulacrums of life. It was only Linlin's personal homies that had complex thought. "Hurry, hurry, we have to get the Christmas decorations up," Zeus warbled unsurely, floating over the workforce. His usual baseball cap had been tossed out in favor of a Santa hat with a smaller cloud at its end. "Mama wants everything ready before the guests get here." Naruto walked through the mess, the crew compliment giving him a wide berth out of respect and fear. The crew were setting up all manner of Christmas decorations along the deck and hanging from the rigging, a pair of night chest soldiers struggling to lift a long table towards the stern. Seeing their plight, the blonde quickly formed a T-shaped hand sign and a dozen clones popped into existence, trooping over to help the valiant custodians lift the table towards the rear superstructure. "Thanks, Whiskers," Prometheus called from the crow's nest grudgingly. His opinion of the blonde hadn't gone up by much in the last few weeks, but he appreciated when Naruto chipped in about the crew. He spotted Linlin standing on the railings of the ship and hopped up to stand beside her, looking out towards the distant horizon. "This is all a bit much," he said, scratching the back of his head in embarrassment. Linlin looked down at her lover with a toothy grin, relishing his embarrassment. It was one of the few victories she could get over him. "It's far smaller than what we usually do this time of year. The Christmas celebration at Whole Cake Shadow has everyone in all of Tato Land invited. This is a far smaller affair for your benefit, Naruto," she explained, pinching the bridge of his nose at Linlin's definition of smaller set to the sound of over 1,000 people building, decorating, and cooking like their lives depended on it. Naruto decided to instead satiate his curiosity. "So who are these ally crews of yours?" he asked. "Only 2 are coming today due to the invitations going out on such short notice." Linlin's face gained a predatory glint. Usually I'd have been sure to prompt all invitees to it, and now she felt a sharp pain in her side, Naruto having jabbed her in the side. "None of that. You don't get a good reputation if you kill or torture anyone that doesn't come to your parties," Naruto scolded, wagging a finger at his girlfriend, a spark of electricity jumping from the fingertip. The Pinkette rolled her eyes at the rebuke but found that her mood did not sour. It felt strangely good being told not to do something for once. The way Naruto talked to her was different from how Streusen or even Mother Caramel had once talked to her. Streusen could be snide and buttery all at once, while Mother Caramel had honeyed words that overrode any arguments she might have had. Naruto, though he simply talked to her, gave her a direction and outside perspective but still let her come to her own decision. These two are chalk and cheese, polar opposites in their own way but still good. One's a huge slab of beef with motley crew and a heart of gold, while the other is an aloof count that claims he has no crew at all, Linlin said, recalling her allies. Humming in curiosity, Naruto decided to probe the latter. "Claims? What do you mean?" "He's always been fiercely independent, but that doesn't mean he hasn't acquired followers even after becoming the count of his nation down here in paradise. He calls them his aides and entourage, never his crew, despite the fact they fight for him and sail him from place to place." With those words did Naruto finally see a pair of ships crest over the distant horizon, slowly sailing over the calm waters towards the much bigger Chanter. The first was a darkly colored frigate with a golden W as its figurehead. Its sails bore the Jolly Roger, consisting of skull and bones, wearing a spiked helmet and that same gold W as a mustache. The second ship was much smaller, a red sloop with yellow and black checkered sails and heraldry of a red bat skull. Satisfied that her two allies were close at hand, Linlin hopped down onto the deck with a thump. "Come on, let's get seated and wait for them to be properly introduced." Sparing the twin ships one more look, Naruto shook his head, before following behind Linlin, cringing at the number of salutes and bows he received due to Linlin's closeness. 10 minutes later they were seated at a long table in the trifle-themed superstructure at the ship's stern, which turned out to be a dining hall of ridiculous size. It had been appointed for the occasion with candy canes and decorations streaming from the overhanging observation platforms. A tall and healthy pine tree had been decorated with a standard of a serene nun in place of the star. All in all, it was exceedingly cozy. Despite Linlin's claims that this was a small affair, the hall was packed. Every island in Tato Land had sent at least 2 dignitaries, and higher-ranking officers in the fleet had been afforded invitations as thank yous for a year's hard work. While the dignitaries and crew members were clustered around dozens of satellite tables, the main long table was reserved for the royal family and her as yet unarrived allies. Naruto sat beside his gargantuan lover while the first 5 of her children were arranged around them, already snaking on child-friendly foods. Pulling at the collar of his coat, Naruto felt a little out of place being the center of so much pomp and circumstance, which was ironic given he had spent much of his early life wanting to be the center of attention. The lights in the hall dimmed and a hush fell over the tables, the burble of happy holiday conversation falling silent. A spotlight clicked on with a sharp pop and highlighted a king chess soldier, his usual blue cape and yellow tunic traded out in favor of a red and green ensemble. He withdrew a rolled bit of parchment from a satchel at his side and held it in front of himself. Clearing his throat to speak, the king piece began. Introducing the first of Mama's honored guests for this wondrous Christmas celebration, I hereby present the captain of the world pirates, with a bounty of 500 million berry, world destroyer Byandy World and his crew. The arched white doors to the hall swung open on crystalline hinges, revealing a large shadow in the door. A second spotlight clicked on, illuminating the newcomers, and Naruto watched on in surprise. A mountain of a man stepped forwards, a foot taller than Linlin but by far in a waist thicker set. His physique was rippling with muscle, with thick arms and an iron-hard body. He had a full beard and a comically large W-shaped mustache, a scar covering his left eye and a thick chain bandolier going across his bare chest. He also wore a pair of green pants and a horned helmet with one of the horns notably broken off. Despite his intimidating appearance, his face was set in a jovial grin, beady eyes glittering happily upon seeing Linlin. Mama World boomed, holding his arms wide as he entered the room. It's been far too long, Barorororo, he laughed. His crew walked in behind him, an eclectic bunch to be sure, but they all looked just as happy as their captain to be there. The short, sickly-looking man leaning on a cane with a matching helmet to World. A pretty young woman with purple hair in a bun, a short pink kipau, and a doctor's coat. They were joined by an eccentric man in suspenders with cube-shaped hair extensions and a muscled fishman with a pair of sunglasses and a novelty bow tie that spanned by itself. World, so good of you to come. I know it was short notice, but I just had to have you here for Christmas, Linlin exclaimed, rising from her seat and embracing the broader man as her came to the table. I'd love to introduce you to my new partner, Naruto, she said after breaking from the hug and gesturing to Naruto, who got up. Nice to meet you, big guy, Naruto greeted, totally unintimidated by the massive muscle before him. World grinned, smacking Naruto on the back good-naturedly in greeting. His smile broadened even further when Naruto did not stumble at the hit that would have sent most men reeling. Hello to you, Naruto, the so-called Typhon. You're much shorter than I expected, but you have a rod of iron up your spine. You'll need it to handle Linlin here. Don't I know it, Naruto chuckled, drawing another peal of laughter from the captain as he and his crew seated themselves around the table. World and the smaller man, revealed to be his elder brother Byajack, removed their helmets and quickly launched into pleasant small talk with Naruto and Linlin. They were the pure definition of a motley crew, but they had a charm to them. World was bombastic with a lust for life and sense of adventure, who wanted to hear all about the year-long chase that had culminated several weeks ago. Byajack was far more timid, but Naruto could sense a genuine happiness in the sickly man, expressing it through a soft smile. Jaren, the cube-themed shipwright, had stars in his eyes, combing over the chanter while the ship Dr. Knight and cooed over the children. Hey Captain, it's Christmas, ain't it? Sebastian the fishman asked, gesturing at the odd family unit that were their hosts, so bring out the presents already. Slapping his face at forgetting something so basic, World began to rummage around in the pockets of his oversized captain's coat. You're in luck, I found something perfect for your crew, though I don't know if your new hubby. Naruto spluttered, thumping his chest at his drink going down his windpipe. We'll want it. Suppose your crew could grab it if one of them has a like for this sort of thing. Ah, here, finding what he was looking for, World drew out a wrapped present that fit in his oversized hand and slid it down the table as gently as he could. He had meant to pass it to Linlin, but it came to a stop in front of Katakuri, who eyed it with intrigue. Katakuri looked between the box and Linlin before looking to Naruto, who nodded in encouragement. The young boy pulled the ribbon and tore the present open, revealing a simple cardboard box that Naruto leant over and opened. Looking into the box, Naruto raised an eyebrow. A bit early for New Year's, isn't it, World? Linlin raised an eyebrow before her eyes widened as Katakuri drew out a peculiar-looking white fruit covered in swirling patterns and a curly green stem. That's not a Kagami matcha, you dumbass, that's a devil fruit. The lights dimmed again, snuffing the excitement as the king piece made ready to introduce the next guest. Hailing from the Grand Line, I hereby present the Count of the Shikaru Kingdom, a pirate with a bounty of 848 million berry, Patrick Redfield the Aloof. The doors opened again and another tall figure entered, causing Naruto to realize that next to Byajack he was now officially the shortest person at the table. Redfield was tall and thin with an elfin face, pale skin and curled eyebrows. He had rich red hair that he wore in a pair of braids that trailed down to his shoulders. The Count wore a magenta silk shirt and red slacks, a red ascot at his throat and a large blue carnation at his left lapel. Over all of it he wore a red mantle with a popped collar and yellow and black checkered lining. He held a Batwing-themed umbrella in one hand that he used as a cane, walking gracefully into the room. Redfield offered Linlin a theatrical bow before approaching the table, a seat being pulled out for him by a similarly attired aide. Linlin, always a pleasure, he greeted before taking Naruto's measure, and the man of the hour. I must say your first bounty was a surprise, to be sure. It's rare for someone to nearly get triple digits as a first showing and earn the attention of our dear mama. He spoke in a rich voice with eloquent intonation on each word. Something moved within his cloak and Naruto was surprised when a small tanuki popped its head out of the Count's mantle to look over the assembled guests, causing the children to coo. Nice tanuki, he's more polite than the last one I met, Naruto mentioned, thoughts of a homicidal sand raccoon playing across his mind. Smiling at the critter warmly, Redfield patted the tanuki fondly. Pato is as special to me as Linlin's homies. Though where are my manners? 'Tis Christmas. No, an aide approached with a richly wrapped package that Redfield slid over to the blonde and pink duo. A Merry Christmas to your burgeoning family. I hope I get an invite to the wedding. He snarked, condescension in his voice, but Naruto could sense it was surface level only, a put-on air of haughtiness to hide the fact that it was genuine. Naruto took the time to open this one, revealing a large transponder snail modeled in the style of the vampirically coated Count. You know, I've never actually owned one of these despite running around for a year. That's your own fault for never staying on one island for too long, Linlin groused, earning her a side-eye from Naruto. It's almost like someone was hunting me with the intent to either kill or enslave. And yet here we are at a Christmas party. I won. I can quite easily feed you your own thigh-highs again if you want to spar, Linlin. But then you complain that I broke another one of your swords," Naruto challenged, causing the crew to laugh at the banter. Redfield tapped his umbrella to the floor, a far more refined form of assent. "It's a direct line from Kurigana to Tato Land should you ever need to get a hold of me for whatever reason." It was a thoughtful yet practical gift for those in alliance, and all would have gone well for the rest of the Christmas celebration had something not happened. One tiny, innocuous thing. Bada 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 bada. The snail began to ring. Naruto shared a look with Linlin, silence falling over the table while Redfield's brows knitted together in concern. Swallowing thickly, Naruto picked up the receiver and the transponder snail exploded into life. Its face morphed into one of pain terror as the screams of those fearing for their lives came over the receiver. "Oh God, help us, save us, Count. Please, you must return at once," the snail bleated before the sound of a gunshot rang out. The snail jostled before taking on an apathetic look. "To whom do I speak now?" The voice was dripping with arrogance and apathetic spite. Naruto offered Redfield a look. The Count's demeanor was stony, gathering his thoughts. Handing the older man the receiver, Naruto watched as the aloof took a breath before responding. "This is Count Patrick Redfield of the Shikuru Kingdom, and I am going to have to ask, what in the name of God's blue marble that we live upon are you doing to my home?" The words were conversational but silenced by the murderous glint in Red's eye. Sniffing derisively, the snail replied, "How dare you, a commoner, use the name of God? I am a god, not you. I am Saint Jalmak of the Celestial Dragons, and here is the reality of the situation. I am currently in this dung heap you call a kingdom, you are not. Your presence is required immediately. For every hour you delay your arrival, 10 of your subjects will be maimed. Do not waste my time." A line went dead and silence filled the room. No one had anything to offer as the day of gracious giving had just been perverted to something darker. But then, it began, a presence that bore down on all those present as if gravity was slowly but surely being dialed up. Within the glasses around the room, wine began to come to a boil and those of weak constitutions simply passed out. It did not come from Redfield, for while he was angry for his people, he maintained aloof control worthy of his namesake. It did not come from World even as he balled his fists in outrage. Nor Linlin, her mood shifting sways far above to an angry black cloud. No, it was Naruto. An aura of golden chakra began to radiate out from the blonde like a corona of fire, the wood of the table blistering under its touch as the blonde got to his feet and began to speak, his voice a whisper that held the voice of a hurricane. "Today is supposed to be forgiving. To look back on the year and bring those we care about close ... show just how big your family is." Wine bottles around the room began to detonate one by one, a wind radiating from Naruto's body as his eyes narrowed to slits and bled red. "But now someone that has given me a gift is being slighted, those under his protection persecuted for no fault of his own. That will not stand. This world is due a Christmas miracle, and all I ask is you join me in giving it by removing a stain upon it." Linlin, whirled and Redfield grinned with predatory glee. "Let's go kill a celestial dragon. Unfurl the mainsail and raise the anchor, move like you've got a purpose, you checkered cretins. If we aren't underway in the next 5 minutes, then it's no dinner for any of you." The orders were barked at amidships by a tertiary deck officer who looked just as harried as the rest of the Queen Mama Chanter's crew. While the majority of them stepped to their jobs with gusto, there were a few, attired in their Sunday best, who floundered at the call to battle stations, slipping on the deck that was polished a bit too brightly before running off to their muster stations to hand out weapons. Hundreds of counterweights, each one weighing north of half a ton, were unlashed to allow the colossal canvas of the mainsails to billow in the sudden mistral that had picked up in the aftermath of Naruto's proclamation of murder. And despite their initial reticence at taking orders from the so-called newcomer, a bloody euphoria had soon settled over the chanter. The colossal galleon soon scything through the water, the winds and waves seeming to match and give their blessing to the course of action. Naruto was perched on one of the crosstrees of the mainmast, overseeing the entire spectacle with narrow eyes, an unfamiliar bloodlust swelling in his chest. It was a curious thing, the simple knowledge that you were setting out with the intent to kill, so much more than any little maxim that Kakashi had said to him and his teammates what seemed like a lifetime ago. It was oddly familiar, though, not the stealing of self that had come when he had to kill Sasuke, but something further back, something. You felt the exact same way when you confronted Nagato, Kurama informed him from the back of his mind, watching the goings-on with a keen interest. "Ah, right," Naruto replied in thought, recalling the sound of blood thundering in his ears as he tore the faux tree that he and Conan had been hiding in. "When I found out where he was, I was sure that I was going to kill him. You growling in my ears to do it didn't help." Kurama rolled his shoulders and grumbled. "Can you blame me? I had just nearly gotten out of this annoying 16-year-old when the ghost of a man I hated the time stopped me, and then I saw Nagato staring at us with my old man's eyes claiming the world needed violence and pain. It was like a bad Father's Day reunion for both of us, and I didn't have the luxury of being able to sink my fist into his gut." Nodding in understanding, Naruto allowed himself to slip off the crosstree and fall towards the deck, landing silently between a pair of crewmen who squealed in fright before running off, likely thinking he was about to punish them for slacking off. The blonde smirked at wry amusement, while the crew's mix of fear and reverence grated on him. It did have its moments and served to blunt his steadily rising ire. No, not blunt. Quite the opposite, it sharpened it to a laser focus on the so-called celestial dragons that they were on their way to kill. I never got why you didn't just off Nagatoltho. Leaving him alive in such a state would hardly have been mercy. Descending a flight of stairs, the Uzumaki went to the ship's edge and peeked over, spotting 2 world crew members, the square-themed Harem and blind fishman Sebastian, quickly affixing metal plates to the front of the Chanter. He initially thought they were creating some kind of ram, but something about its shape was wrong. Because, for whatever he did, he was born as stepping off the path Jiraiya walked before us. The evil he did, and it was evil, had good intent as much as we can excuse as that is. These dragons, they have no such excuse, Naruto thought, fingers twitching and eyes a pair of cool blue fires that would have chilled any that looked upon them. When you treat the suffering of others as nothing more than filling the time till you get like you want, like a kid burning ants with a magnifying glass, then you've succeeded in burning through most of my capacity for second chances. HMPH, Kurama sniffed, stretching out within the mindscape, knowing that he may just be in for a chance to stretch his legs. That other you, the dark one, he's still in there. He mused, remembering the black and red-eyed doppelganger revealed by the waterfall of truth. It was Naruto's turn to sniff at that before he said, "Nah, I just don't shun my negative emotions anymore. Seeing and living in this world has shown me that there are times when it's okay to feel anger." And it seemed he wasn't the only one feeling anger. Redfield was the image of cold fury on the top of the front cake-shaped superstructure. His cloak billowed in the wind, and his elongated fangs poked from his top lip in a predatory rictus, but his eyes glowed with wrath that his aloof persona could not hide. While the Count of Shikuru Kingdom claimed that he stood alone, he was chomping at the bit to run those who would dare to slight those under his protection. The sound of sharp heels clicking upon the deck alerted Naruto to the arrival of Linlin, and he turned to see his statuesque paramour tucking a fresh flintlock pistol into her belt as she came to stand beside him. "Everything good up here?" she asked Naruto nonchalantly, his words having turned him into the Chanter's unofficial executive officer. Twitching at the brusque opening, Naruto faced forward alongside Linlin to see the crew all moving to their posts. "Well, I didn't know much about sailing, but the sails are all out, the anchor's raised, and the wind's with us. I guess that means we're good." "And the people bellow?" she asked in reply, cocking her bicorn-clad head to look down at her shorter partner. "My clones helped all the non-combat dignitaries to the panic rooms with the kids," Naruto said simply, the memories having filtered back to him shortly before Linlin's arrival. "But I think everyone's spoiling for a fight." She nodded at that, crossing her arms beneath her blouse-covered chest and causing something else at her belt to glint in the sun. Looking closer, Naruto was confused to see the cracked handle of a cutlass, its blade having snapped off almost the whole way but still held to her side by a loop in her sword belt. "Did they run out of decent swords in the armory?" he asked jokingly. Linlin cuffed him upside the head while he chuckled, placing her left hand on the end of the red fabric-covered sword handle, the underside of her rings clicking against the pommel. "If they ever ran out of weapons, then I'd have them hung by their feet off the mast for an hour till they remembered tardiness. No, I'm just ticked off that whenever I fight with you, my swords get dinged or broken." "And your solution to this was?" Using an already broken sword, he questioned in confusion, causing Linlin to laugh. "The mama god, no. I'm going to fix the issue before we head into battle and need some sentimental items to bring out the best results from my devil fruit." Long, thin fingers extended and ran through Naruto's spiky gold hair fondly, a pleased smile on Linlin's rosy cheeks. "I'm going to have to ask you for some more of your hair, though, once we finish with that stupid world noble, jailback or whatever." Mirth filled Naruto, and he couldn't be bothered to correct the name. Then he squinted at the sword, his face positively vulpine as he looked closer at the broken sword. "Wait, is that the sword I broke the first time we fought?" The rest of what she had said registered with him. Well, why do you need my—" There Aurora came a boisterous laugh, and the pair turned to see World landing on the deck with a thump, his brother perched on his shoulder. "Ah, Mama, you have some crew here. You would need it to man a ship this big," he blustered enthusiastically, scratching at his beard in thought. "I want to have a ship this big and fast one day. That would be a sight to see." "Yes, a sight indeed, World," said Bayajak as he adjusted his horned helmet, feverishly checking a stopwatch in his hand. "Despite the sudden start, they are running as well as we can towards Kurigana." He trailed off, intimidated by Linlin and Naruto's presence. Seeing that he was afraid to speak by himself, Naruto broached the subject. "Everything okay, Bayajak?" Bayajak swallowed thickly. "Oh, no, of course not. But well." World patted a trashcan-sized hand to his brother's back tenderly, coaxing him to speak as Naruto and Linlin waited. Finally, he spoke. "Even with the ship running at peak efficiently and the tailwind keeps astern, our time frame for arrival is still at least 48 hours. And for every hour that passes—" He trailed off, casting a glance to where Redfield stood at the front of the ship, hands clasped around his bat-themed umbrella. Naruto's smile thinned, keenly aware of the cost of time. For every hour that passed, Saint Jalmak had threatened to shoot a number of Redfield's subjects. While Naruto was confident he could make the distance, he didn't know where the island was, which left them reliant on sea travel. And was slow even at the best of times. "We'll find a way," Naruto said with determination, only to be entirely caught off guard. When World began to laugh with gusto. "Bear-roar-roar-roar-roar," he laughed, thumping a hand against the chain bandolier around his chest. "Ah, that's the spirit, kid. No wonder Mama has you as a trusted ally. To be a pirate is to spit in the face of the impossible." As the large pirate had been talking, Linlin had made it to the starboard railing and peeked over to look at the small commotion that was building at the bow. Her eyes widened, and she shot World an annoyed glare. "Oi World, what are those dumbasses of yours doing to the front of my ship?" Indeed, it now appeared that the cartoonish figurehead attached to the prow of the Chanter now wore some form of protective steel helmet. "Oh," that World replied, scratching his nose nonchalantly. "Garum didn't want the seafoam getting in the figurehead's mouth once I get us up to flank speed." Naruto eyed the sails, at full billow with a heavy wind, and while they were pushing a bow wave, the ship was so damn big that it barely rose a tenth of the way to the figurehead. But he could see the excitement in World's eye. "What are you up to?" "Aurora, just you wait," everyone the allied man shouted, bringing a pause to the crew, who all looked at them with bated breath. World cracked his knuckles before raising both hands in the air. "Best hold on to something as it's about to be a bumpy ride." "Do as he says," Linlin ordered, a mix of annoyance and excitement in her eyes, knowing what World was about to do. She also placed a hand on Naruto's shoulder to ensure he wouldn't fall. The blonde, who had adhered himself to the deck using chakra, felt his cheeks warm at the gesture, even if it wasn't necessary. World gave one last grin before his hands flashed dark with armament haki, the blackened palms having a note of green to their sheen, before swinging them down against the deck. More, 100-fold speed, he yelled, a pulse of energy vibrating out over all of them. At first, nothing happened, and many of the crew, who had grabbed lengths of thick rope or held onto the rigging, blinked in confusion. Then they were moving fast, very fast, exceedingly fast. The mistral at their back was forgotten in the face of the wash of intense wind that washed over the front of the ship as it blasted forwards, churning the waters as it passed into a fine vapor as the many thousands of tons of wood thundered through the waves with unnatural speed. A light laugh tore out of him despite his shock as he clung on for dear life. "Wee!" squealed the Chanter's homely figurehead as almost the entire mighty ship lifted out of the water, only its keel remaining submerged to hydroplane along the water's surface, the speed stabilizing to a blistering 200 knots. Naruto squinted in the face of the oncoming gust of wind, taking a step forward to peek at the front and noticed that Redfield was still standing proud at the prow. Linlin held her bicorn to her head, making sure it didn't fly off. World ate the more fruit, it lets him multiply the speed and size of anything he touches up to 100 times over. While Naruto wasn't the best at maths, he got the message. Their travel time had just gotten 100 times shorter with what World had done. "We're not going to have much time to prepare before we arrive now," he said, sobering Linlin's enthusiasm. He expected her to make a snide remark about how it meant they could just get to cruising the dragon quicker, but instead, she slowly removed her bicorn hat and drew the broken cutlass, using the latter to skewer through the former. "Whiskers," she began, "all this is still kind of weird to me. Not the battle, but going to save a country rather than destroy it. Even if we're still about to kill a lot of people, I want to do it with you. Grinding people into the dirt because they attacked what we're building, not just because. Because I got hungry." Naruto knew she wasn't referring to the hunger pangs, she meant the endless desire for more violence. "So I think the first step for that is going to be making a weapon that doesn't just snap when I run into battle with you, either by your side or to keep each other sharp." Lastly, she slipped her hand into her coat and gently withdrew the gold Viver card, gently pinning it to the edge of the blade where it stuck. She looked at World and jabbed the ramshackle object at him. "Oi, World, where do you get off upstaging me at my own holiday party?" The big man had the decency to look sheepish, which made the young woman grin, her long pink hair billowing in the wind. "If you want a show, I'll give you a show." The hairs on the back of Naruto's neck began to stand on end as he felt a familiar unearthly tinge to the air, forcing him to take a step back. Spotting movement out of the corner of his eye, he spotted Zeus and Prometheus popping their heads up from the deck to watch, each having seemingly felt the presence building around Linlin. Kurama creaked an eye open in his mind. "Oh, what have we here?" Thumping a palm against her chest, a purple aura emerged from the Linlin like Mo fire, roiling off her in coils of pure psionic energy. She gritted her teeth, slowly pulled her hands away from her chest, and brought something with her, a ball of brilliant white light hued in purple. He recognized the sight of it. That telltale shape could only be one thing. A piece of her soul. "Come, oh piece of my soul, come and be born anew," she intoned, lifting both arms above her before she drove the ball of pure spiritual energy into the eclectic collection of items. "Become a weapon of war, become a weapon of peace, become my raiment, become my homie." As he looked on, the edges of the bicorn hat began to vibrate violently, and the shattered remnants of the cutlass grew red hot. And then the Viver card, glinting gold even amidst the squall, ignited a plume of pure golden fire at the heart of the tumult. Using the fire of what Naruto realized to be his chakra, Linlin thrust the object heavenward and let out a roar of exultation, a pillar of purple and gold light exploding skyward with a keen wail of life. When the pillar cleared, having rendered more than one crew member temporarily blind, Linlin held a sword, one that was a marriage of a hat and a serrated blade proportionate to her size. A gold blade with a fanged face and wicked blue eyes. "Come, Napoleon." The weather over Kurigana Island had grown progressively worse in the hours since Saint Jalmec began his perverse method of marking the hour. He paid it little mind, content in the fact that the only thing of loss was that he could not reclaim the bullets he had used to send their putrid souls to the next life. They were, after all, peasants, subhuman trash whose blood sullied the holy metals of lead and blessed powder of his pistol. This was the ambivalent work of a petty god that the rest of the world was forced to deal with. But the world did not stand idly by. The sky above the gloomy alpine retreat churned itself into the bleary eye of a beast that glared down balefully at them all. Nature itself scolded them for standing by and letting this happen when it was their charged duty to protect the people of this world. That was the way it was supposed to work. The Marines were the guardians and protectors of those beneath the umbrella of the world government. But what do we do when the world government itself commits this shit? Garp thought, his teeth clenched hard enough to grind down mountains. Tapping one finger on his suit's white sleeve as his ship once again came into dock beside Sengoku's austere-looking battleship. Stand around with our thumbs up our assess and build a nice little picket fence to let the worms paint the town red. The broad-chested Marine had been in a foul mood when he had first arrived for this gig, and the past few hours had succeeded in dwindling what little patience he still had. Now here he was again, about to check in with his old comrade and brother in arms and say with a straight face that nothing was wrong. The gangplank between both ships to admit his passage, not that he needed it. After all, he could probably jump from here to the island in a single bound. But for the sake of niceties, he stepped up onto the wide wooden board and crossed over to Sengoku's ship. His footsteps were joined by the creak and clack of two more sets of footfalls falling into step behind him, and Garp felt his mood improve a modicum that he was not alone in his dissatisfaction. Of the 4 vice admirals that Fleet Admiral Kong had sent to this shitheel of a mission, he had either made the mistake or good decision in asking for Zephyr. The Black Fist followed Garp onto Sengoku's ship with Bogard bringing up the rear, their expressions much more guarded than Garp's clear scowl, but still obviously disliking what their orders were being made accessory to. Unable to help due to the blasted rule from the Gorosei of maintaining the blockade at all costs. Or at least, that was the look that they were putting on for Sengoku's crew, who watched them all with bated breath. Garp suppressed the urge to let his scowl morph into a grimace as he recalled his somewhat out-of-the-box solution to the issue at hand, unwilling to admit that it had been Bogard's quick thinking that had turned it into something somewhat feasible. While he couldn't directly stop Jalmek's malignance, he could at least stymie the steadily growing number of dead and wounded. His attention shifted to the upper gangways and crosstrees that crisscrossed the blue and green superstructure that most marine battleships sported, spotting figures sticking to the shadows in some pathetic attempt at being menacing. They weren't trying to hide, and even if they had, they wouldn't have been able to slip past his observation. Cypher Paul, he thought in annoyance, recognizing their tacky black suits, sunglasses, and fedoras even without the gold world government brooch they all wore at their left lapel. They were probably here to act as the eyes and ears of the government, but he was perplexed at the lack of any of their white-clothed colleagues. Aegis Zero isn't here, and they sure as shit aren't with Jalmek. Something stinks about all this. While not exactly the sharpest sword on the rack, Monkey D. Garp was a shade more shrewd than all save a select few ever saw. And while he didn't know the particulars of the situation, he knew enough to say that something was up, and hopefully he'd be able to ask Sengoku about it soon enough. There was a tension in the air that was electric, having nothing to do with the storm building above their heads. It wasn't something that you should feel walking onto the ship of your so-called allies. He continued walking uninterrupted until he passed a line of Marines standing at parade rest, saluting him as he passed. With no warning, Garp whirled to face them head-on and stuck his fingers into his mouth, pulling his cheeks wide and sticking out his tongue at the Marines. "La la 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 la," he yelled, rolling his eyes for comedic effect. The group of young Marines squealed in fright, stumbling backwards and dropping their weapons while others fell flat on their rears as the very tall and very imposing Vice Admiral continued to pull faces at them. From beside him, Zephyr snorted in amusement at the attempt to break the bleak atmosphere and shook his head. "Cut that out, Garp. If one of them craps themselves, then Sengoku will make you mop it up." "Seriously, Zephyr, it's called the poop deck for a reason," Garp reasoned, causing Bogard to tilt the wide brim of his hat to shield himself from the cringe he felt at the sincerity in his leader's voice. While he knew he was trying to lighten the mood, it was highly likely that Garp genuinely believed that, or that Bogard had personal experience of it. Neither was a particularly pleasant reality. A vein popped in the purple-haired man's temple. "That's not what it means. It's never been what it means, or God forbid what it's for." "Oh yeah, then why is it called the poop deck?" Garp said, sound self-satisfied that he obviously was right on this rightfully silly argument. Though selling the energetic response, the younger Vice Admiral slipped his hands into his pockets. "It comes from la poop, the word for the back of a ship in the Frost Kingdom in the East Blue," he explained, not missing a beat. Rap blinked owlishly. Bogard's hat dipped further, opening his mouth to continue. Zephyr's eye narrowed before shutting his mouth, whatever line of thought he had been on being violently derailed into a screech of indignant confusion. "Wait, aren't you from East Blue? How is it that I know that and you don't?" Scratching his cheek in embarrassment, Garp mustered a shrug. "Sounds kinda boring, to be honest. I'd prefer using ship as punching bags, so they're usually scrap and splitters by the time I can see what part of the ship I'm pounding," he offered honestly. Bogard's lips curled upwards in amusement before thinning to a thin line. "Vice Admirals, sirs," he said, causing both inhumanly tall men to turn and look at him. "We best not keep your fellow Vice Admirals waiting any longer." Both men schooled their features hearing that, turning on their heels and silently marching with the XO bringing up the rear once again. It was not long before they found both Sengoku and John Giant by the ship's central mast. They were not exactly difficult to miss. At 36 years old, Vice Admiral Sengoku was a man in the prime of his life and the picture-perfect model of what it meant to be a Marine. But as with any Marine of above a certain rank, he had a level of eccentricity to his appearance that set him apart from the rank-and-file Marines under his command. Like Garp and Zephyr, Sengoku fell within the realms of a superhuman and boasted an imposing height of 9'0" with a broad chest and heavily muscled arms that shone through the dark blue double-breasted suit he wore paired with a white button-down shirt and perfectly tied blue tie. His face was wide and serious with a thick black mustache and a prominent black afro. A pair of round-rimmed glasses was perched on his nose, glinting in the light. Finally, he sported the characteristic Justice coat clipped to his shoulders as a cape. "You are late," he said sharply, his voice cold. "If I could beat you two here with my size, then you two should be ashamed." Vice John Giant added hotly, tapping his foot on the deck with enough force to make nearby lanterns quiver. As his name would imply, John Giant was a giant, and while that statement may have been redundant, seeing him in the flesh forced the affirmation of his size from all who looked at him. The first ever member of his species to join the Marines, though not the last, he was a massive figure that made even the three superhumans present seem like small rodents by comparison. He was sat on the next deck up with his legs hanging over the edge to rest beside where the trio now conversed. Tall and rippling with muscle, John Giant had a broad and sour-looking face that was deeply lined with frown lines and somewhat beady eyes. His hair was a curly brown that fell to the nape of his neck and two bushy sideburns either side of his face. An orange button-down shirt with gold buttons was worn about his cheek while his lower body was adorned in a pair of blue buccaneer breeches tucked into knee-high black boots, an appropriately sized katana sheathed at his left hip. Different from the others, or most other Marines in general, John wore his Justice coat as an actual coat with his arms in the sleeves and had it richly decorated in gold filigree and medals. Waving off their annoyance, Garp addressed them with a flippant disregard for their rank. "Yeah, well, we're here. We have nothing to report and now are gonna go. Have fun playing babysitter to an asshole with a fishbowl on his head." He jeered before turning on his heel. "How dare you refer to the celestial dragons with such disrespect?" John growled, jabbing a finger at the short black-haired man's back. "You forget yourself, Garp." "Oh, blow it out your ass," John Garp shot back bluntly, looking over his shoulder at the colossal Vice Admiral and jerking his chin towards the island. "We're the same rank, so you have no right to tell me what to do, least of all give that subhuman sludge in a stand-up condom anything more than a fart in his general direction." Monkey D. Garp was many things: blunt, brave, loyal to a fault, and a sworn believer in moral justice. But he had never, nor would he ever expressly kowtow to people who kept and proliferated slavery. He would never become an admiral and forfeit his freedom of choice to become a glorified lapdog for the worst of humanity. So while he may follow his words to the letter, he was very loose with what he viewed as the letter of the law. One of the perks of being a Marine was the notion of emergency powers, the ability to tell established law that it was suspended until such a time as normality was restored. A long-winded way of saying that he wouldn't even piss on a celestial dragon even if they were on fire. Silence fell over the battleship, an uneasy and tension-filled silence at the borderline sacrilege that had just passed from Garp's lips. No one said a word, and the microcosm of shuffles, uneasy looks, and thick swallows was deafened by the rising wind as the muggy sky transitioned to the beginnings of a storm. Garp's coat fluttered in the wind, its justice on proud display to the giant Vice Admiral, as if daring the much older Vice Admiral to test him. John's jaw locked tight and his hand came to rest on the handle of his katana, its clover-shaped hilt begging to be parted from the sheath. Before things could erupt into a true incident, Sengoku finally spoke. "Enough, John, calm down." John whipped his head around to look at Sengoku. "I'm the one that needs to calm down. He's goading you into a fight that Zephyr and I would have to intercede on, meaning that all four present Vice Admirals would be unable to intercede and all focus would be here." He turned his gaze on Garp, eyes turning to chips of glacial onyx, meaning no one would notice the men he dispatched to the island to help evacuate the citizenry of the Shukriya Kingdom. A murmur of surprise permeated the air and Garp's smirk dropped to a strained rictus. John's righteous anger bled away in favor of confusion. "What? Did you really think I wouldn't notice that there were less life signatures on your ship with every pass?" Sengoku asked Garp, totally ignoring John. He stepped forwards towards Garp, who walked to meet him, stopping when they were eye to eye. From within his pocket, Garp tensed his hand 3 times, not taking his focus away from Sengoku. He saw Bogard shift imperceptibly in his peripheral vision and felt relief sweep over him. When Garp and Bogard had collaborated on this plan, his XO had made sure to acquire a horn transponder snail from storage and hid it within the folds of his coat. That tiny tilt of the head, bereft of any emotion that could be picked up with observation hacky, every single transponder snail on the ship, be they recording, communication, or anything in between, had just gone dead. Meaning he was free to speak his mind and no one would be able to prove it. "God bless you, Bogard. What I think, Vice Admiral Sengoku," he punctuated each word with force, "is that it is the duty of every Marine to help those who require help. And if a large population of clueless bystanders were to unintentionally walk to the boundaries of the island, Well then it is my duty to take them into protective custody upon my ship until the blockade is over. Sengoku scowled, fixing his anger-filled eyes squarely on the other vice admiral standing before him. What you're doing could land you with a court-martial, Garp, or even treason if the Gorosei find out. What are you talking about? Garp replied, his smirk vicious, the scar on his face contouring into a grin of its own. I'm simply being flexible with how I enforce the blockade. If it's anyone's fault, it's yours for not being clear enough. Gritting his teeth, Sengoku felt his hands clenched into fists. You don't want this fight, Garp? Oh, I think I do. You could hear a pin drop in that stitch of time, where a clash of ideologies danced on the knife edge of becoming a brawl of fist. Regardless of which side you supported, all in that moment wished for a miracle to avert this catastrophe. A miracle that fate was all too eager to deliver. The sky rumbled with thunder in a tempestuous crash, and a presence suddenly manifested on the edge of their senses, a large and looming threat that bore down of them with a wrath that shattered the current argument. Garp and Sengoku whipped around in a flash, blitzing to the port side bow of Sengoku's battleship, Zephyr quickly joining them to stand atop one of the domed cannon turrets while John got to his feet. As one, every single Haki-capable Marine on every battleship taking part in the blockade fixed their attention on the horizon. Something's coming, Sengoku said grimly before barking orders for the rest of the non-Haki users to make ready. Whatever it is coming fast. A large drop of sweat beaded at John's temple, his eyes slowly widening. This presence is unreal, he muttered, the image taking form in his mind's eye, forming something terrifying. Garp tamped down on his surprise and expanded the range of his observation until a dot appeared on the horizon, not yet clear even through a telescope, but Garp knew that Haki. Crap, of all the times and all the people, why did it have to be her? Zephyr clenched his fist and let it flash black with Haki. Look not for war, Garp, but be ready when she comes. This is no war, Zephyr. Garp grimaced before his face split into a predatory grin, excitement and adrenaline pouring into his arms and legs. Attention, attention, all blockade crew to battle stations. This is a code red, a harried voice stammered over the PA system as one by one each ship began to emit its klaxon cry. Outbound scouts have confirmed the presence of a ship that matches the profile of the Queen Mama Chanter. Charlotte Big Mom Linlin and Uzumaki Typhon Naruto are on a direct collision course for Kurigana Island. This was not war. Two monsters had clawed their way from the abyss of night and now came upon them with wings of storm, with the wind as their feet and the beat of their hearts the thunder. The tempest was about to break upon them, and all collectively noted that their ships, the pinnacle of size on the seas, suddenly felt like rafts in the path of a tsunami. The Chanter's deceleration was far more smooth than its initial devil fruit-induced burst of speed, the great bulk of the food-themed ship slipping back into the late gray waters with a boom of surf. She coasted for a few moments before tilting lightly in the wound, now floating approximately 1 nautical mile out from the gloomy island's forested shoreline. The crew got to their feet on shaky legs before gaining their bearings, the exhilaration and exhaustion at such a prolonged charge needing a moment to clear from their systems. More than one of the crewmen and women staggered to the railings and vomited over the side of the ship, emptying the contents of their stomachs with wet squelches. To their credit, the disorientation didn't last all that long, for they were a New World pirate crew to whom the fantastical was as annoying as inclement weather. After all, they had much greater bastions of power and terror in their midst and at their heads. Naruto let out a low appreciative whistle at the timing job. The issue with utilizing World's more fruit was that he needed to reapply 100-fold speed every 10 minutes or so to keep them on track, and there had been a small chance that the last of such applications would have sent the Chant careening into Redfield's island as a shower of brightly colored splinters. Alas, the speed had abated in just the nick of time, and the bigger of the Burndy brothers was raucous in his laughter at the fact. Whatever mirth the blonde felt stilled into a zen-like calm as he made his way up onto the figurehead where Redfield maintained the vigil, aloof as ever. But whatever visible calm the Count of Kurigana put off did nothing to abate the palpable anger and bloodlust that rolled off him in waves, tangible to even those without an empathetic sense like Naruto. But the blonde shinobi-turned-pirate did possess such a sense, and it felt every stab of righteous anger in a clarity that could have been their own. But it was not something he could not overcome, not something he had not already overcome. His wrath was his own, and on this day, in this place, it was about to be unleashed. Narrowing his blue eyes at the flotilla of marine battleships currently meandering around to ready position, Naruto had to note how imposing the force must be to most people. While the Chanter was darn near half a kilometer tall, the marine battleships were still bigger than almost any other commercial or pirate ships that he had seen since his arrival in this world. They were all so dreadfully similar, though, almost impossible to tell apart. Save for one. Someone must really like dogs, Naruto said. Redfield did not dignify the words with a response, but did shift his focus to the dog-themed HQ-3 battleship, which, unlike any of the other ships present save the Chanter, bore a figurehead of a hound dog happily chomping on a bone. Linlin joined her paramour on the figurehead with World bringing up the rear. The pink-haired woman's new sentient pink bicorn hat sat jauntily on her head. I'd recognize that floating dog turd anywhere. That's Garp's ship, and where Garp is, Sengoku is usually never far behind. Garp, Naruto mused, having heard the name once or twice before but never more than in passing. Silently he began to expand his own enhanced senses, taking in the bountiful natural energy of the sea to usher him into sage mode, though even without it fully active yet he could sense a pressure on the air that told him a beast lay ahead. That's the name of a powerful marine right. One of the strongest, as much as it pains me to say it. He's a pain in the ass and more tenacious than a used ship salesman. Packs a hell of a right hook too, Linlin grunted, remembering the few times she had crossed fists with the brawler vice admiral. Brash, hard-headed, surprisingly intelligent, and a heart of gold despite the shit the world government makes him walk in. Honestly, I think that's why he wears a white suit, just to spite them. A beat passed before she smirked and bumped her hip against Naruto's shoulder. He's kinda like you ... just dumber. The unsaid backhanded insult did not bother Naruto, but it did give Naruto pause in considering what would make someone similar to himself be an accomplice to this travesty. Orange pigment appeared over his eyes as they became gold with the toad-like bars of sage mode, his senses expanding in concert with the observation haki of his three allies to paint a picture that went beyond sight, sound, or any synesthesia between. There were 7 battleships to their immediate 4, each one carrying at least 1,000 souls aboard, while an 8th was attempting to make a circuit of the island to join up with the rest of the blockade. Klaxons bleared loudly as thousands of footfalls sprinted this way and that, grappling swords and muskets and clumsily attempting to bring their cannons to bear on the chanter. Compared with the legions of panicked enlisted men, Naruto zoomed in on a handful of much more powerful signatures, with their 4 most powerful members standing astrike one another on the deck of one ship in particular. There's a giant with them, Naruto pointed out, noting the sheer difference from the normally happy Titans. The mention of a giant made Linlin square her shoulders as she recalled a haze of memory from long ago Elbaf. There's a few of them in the Marines, they don't like me much given my history with them. Joining in on the assessment, she quickly picked out what she recognized as the austere presence of Sengoku and Zephyr gathered in the same area. But of all the emotions they felt from their foes, it was not them, not even Garp's bestial excitement that they felt. Deep in the heart of the island, far distant and unaware of the calamity bearing down on them, the hundreds of Redfield's subjects still suffered beneath the cruelty of Gelmek's cruel time-wasting, executed at the hand of the world noble or his clan of sycophantic knights and other assorted servants. Their cries of pain and pleas for help lit a fire in all of their hearts, but none more potently than the Count himself, his fingers gripping the bat-wing handle of his umbrella with such force that his hands began to bleed. The first of the battleships had finally managed to bring their guns to bear on the chanter and launched an initial salvo of high-explosive ordnance right at the quartet, the 3 large cannonballs sent whistling through the air in a parabolic arc. Incoming a midshipman called to the grunts under his control, and several of the newer Big Mom crew braced for impact, while more advanced chess soldiers sprinted to the front of the ship in a suicidal attempt to throw themselves in front of their captain and her allies. Naruto began to weave hand signs to call up a water dragon and devour the cannonballs using the ample ocean water as fuel, but was blindsided when a swirl of purple and red blurred at his side. Taking hold of the shaft of his umbrella, Redfield twisted the handle with a sharp click, and they watched as its tip extended to a long handle while a great edged blade in the shape of a bat's wing folded from the other end. Now wielding a stylized scythe, the Count instantly proved it to be more than just for show, sweeping it diagonally to send a vermilion-colored slash flying out, bisecting the cannonballs and causing them to explode harmlessly a few hundred feet off the bow. Resting the scythe on his shoulder, Redfield finally spoke in a glacial tone that would scare most men to death. I want to kill these Marines, I want to gut and bone them and hang their entrails from stakes till the ravens have their fill, he said, eyes not leaving the distant treetops. But that would waste too much time while my subjects suffer, an injustice I will not permit. So tell me, Typhon, Naruto perked up, will you hold to your promise to kill a celestial dragon? Do you even have to ask? Naruto replied, his eyes serious. Accepting the answer, Redfield took a step backwards. Then prove it, help clear the path for our arrival. As your captain's ally and count of this kingdom, I ask you to remove this unwanted stain from my doorstep before we arrive. It was a very flowery way of saying that Redfield wanted to save his anger for Gelmek and his knights rather than wasting it on the 4 vice admirals ready to fight them, even if caught on the back foot. Thinking it over for a second, Naruto gave a short nod before approaching the front of the figurehead, unsurprised when Linlin was beside him. I can do this by myself, Yeno, Naruto told his significant other, reaching up a hand to the tip of his bow staff and pulling it from its strap. Then Mama Linlin chortled, grinning that bloodthirsty grin that the smaller of the two could call nothing else but primally attractive. If you think I would miss the chance to ride into battle with you, then you're not beating the dumb blonde allegations, Whiskers. Ha, Naruto snorted, drawing the bow and taking a ready position. If you think you can hang with me, thigh highs, then you clearly don't remember all the times I pounded you into the dirt. Linlin smirked, resisting the urge to comment on his phrasing. Instead she raised her hand above her head, ready to show them what you can do, Napoleon. The cartoonish skull's blue eyes opened wide on the bighorn before setting into an air of happy determination. You betcha, Mama, the newborn Napoleon yelled, jumping from Linlin's head and letting her long curtain of pink hair billow in the wind. The hat turned in midair and both its handle and long-faced gold cutlass blade appeared from both ends, the owner quickly snatching it from the air and taking up a ready stance of her own. Naruto let his chakra thrum to the surface, gold and blue energies boiling to life from every pore and sending his clothes fluttering, a strong wind beginning to flow outwards from his body. With a moment's thought, he sent mass amounts of wind-natured and Zangetsu-infused chakra into his bow staff, its sea stone construction the perfect conduit and amplifier for the energies of nature. Every single sailor on the Chanter felt an inhuman chill prickle at their senses, the old warning of a storm in its early stages taking form and bubbling up from Naruto and his weapon. He was a typhoon in human form that any self-respecting sailor would bow to the majesty of. But Linlin would not be outdone. Tensing her whole body, the rich purple eldritch energies of the soul fruit permeated the air and infused her every cell, joined with her endless flow of haki. Her body was covered in an aura of haki so dark and thick that even those with no sensitivity would have been able to see a warp in the air around her. Naruto was a torrent of wind and will. Linlin was the fury and the fire of the soul, and black and gold lighting began to crackle between them. But it was not like any of their prior clashes. It was as if two choirs were working to draw their voices into a single, powerful concert. Naruto's voice was one deep and old, a power of nature, a will that had breached worlds to find a truth. Linlin's was sharp and new, full of power and seeking new understanding of itself. The powers did not want to fight, they wished to be as one but did not know how. Gritting her teeth, Linlin shouted, "Sync up with me." Whiskers, she was still new to this. It was difficult even if her mind and body were willing. Balance it out. Linlin, let it be what you want it to be. Your power and mine. Naruto offered a white hue falling over his bow as the natural energy began to grow into a self-sustaining loop. Far distant aboard the deck of Sengoku's flagship, the Buddha's eyes widened behind their glasses, scarcely believing what was unfolding before him. "Be ready," he called, his form beginning to glow gold. Linlin growled, trying to coral the power until finally, her eyes snatched upon the disturbance between them itself. The black and gold lightning was starting to coil around one another into a helix, and with a subtle change in perspective, they were as one, black lighting of the conqueror sheathed in the golden luster of the typhon. Power flowed through Naruto, a gold and cobalt-colored tide of concentrated energy that flowed along the length of his sea-prism stone bow and into the gathering maelstrom between him and Linlin. World had to shield his eyes as tendrils of cloud, thick with every weather phenomena imaginable, were drawn down from the heavens and used to fuel the helix of power that was an expression of two powers as one, two minds as one. And in that moment, the pair knew the attack's name and found it fitting. It built and built until finally they both swung, unleashing the pent-up power across the sea with a wrathful cry. Storm's sovereignty. And thus, with a swish of wind, the world came undone. Sound itself was rent as the proud calamity of power was unleashed towards the waiting ships, a lance of iridescent power that drilled forwards like the searching finger of a tornado, growing wider and wider as it picked up speed. The ocean beneath them boiled as the attack passed, a single heartbeat stretching out into an epoch as each and every marine saw their lives flash before their eyes. It was then and only then did Garp leap into action, quite literally. Crouching low, he built superhuman power within his legs and took to the skies in a bound that reduced the section of the deck he was standing on to splinters, the entirety of Sengoku's ship dipping 10 meters deeper into the waterline. He flew forwards like an arrow loosed from a bow, a mock cone forming around him before shattering as he left the sound barrier in the dust. "Zephyr Sengoku," he called, his smile massive. "Leave it to me." On it both vice admirals answered. Zephyr propelled himself into the air with a similar burst of speed. His body blurred in and out of existence with sudden bursts of shave, poofs of condensed air booming from his kicking legs as he supplemented his passage with 2 of the 6 powers of Rokushiki, soon catching up with Garp. Sengoku meanwhile was suffused with golden light, growing larger and wider, his suit jacket falling away. When the light finally abated, he was a man transformed, his skin and clothes a heavenly gold, and while still a few meters shorter than John Giant, who had drawn his sword and infused it with the black sheen of armament haki, was the impossibly large figure of a great Daibutsu. The trio had recognized the threat of Storm's sovereignty long before the two pirates had loosed it into the wind, and the moment Garp had moved, all knew that they would have to counter with a combination attack of their own. Sengoku raised a huge golden palm and pulled it backwards, a menace of purest golden light haloing the appendage as he gritted his teeth. Summit, black hair flying around his face messily as he flew into the path of the roaring beast, Garp chambered a fist and let it bleed black. Of everyone in the Marines, there was perhaps no one as adept with haki as Monkey D. Garp. His hand was wrapped in a blue-white halo of his will made manifest, his solemn vow, his challenge. "We will stop this attack in its tracks," he declared mentally, blood at a boil at the sheer exhilaration of it all. Galaxy. He was not alone, for mirroring his action was none other than Zephyr, his entire left arm darker than a moonless night. While he was not a true master of armament as Garp was, he was a genius of the fist, using what he had in ways that none had ever considered. From within the confines of his black fist, shafts of yellow and orange light began to emerge. Smash. ENLAGHT NMENT IMPSCT BUSTER. Sengoku's arm struck out like a viper, unleashing the gathered power in translucent golden shockwave that rang with the cry of a bell, catching up and passing Garp and Zephyr, who were sucked into its wake, going that much faster, flying in the vacuum that it had created. Garp swung forwards and unleashed the gathered haki via emission, one of the most advanced disciplines of armament haki. A deluge of dark blue haki and enough compressed air pressure to level a city was unleashed in a bubble of pure destructive pressure that filled the concave shape of Sengoku's shockwave. Zephyr chambered his fist further, glowing with more shafts of light. He had learned some time ago that emission was currently beyond his level of finesse with haki, but it didn't mean that he hadn't worked to find a workaround. Most people simply armor the outside of their limbs with hardening, but the Black Fist learned that the division between outside and in could be used to great effect. Smashbuster worked by armoring his limb in haki before flooding the inside of his arm with as much haki as he could, pressurizing it until it could no longer be contained within the limb, so at any moment, usually on contact with an enemy, every single hit could receive a bomb of haki. A poor man's emission, perhaps, but it was effective. With his roar joining the others, Zephyr swung and his fist detonated, a flood of orange and yellow haki flowing out of him with the boom of a cannon, filling him behind the double layers of the others' attacks and serving as the propellant to drive one combination attack into another. Meeting in the middle, the two praxioms of diametrically opposed power collided with biblical reverberations that shook the teeth of everyone within a dozen miles. They drilled against each other for dominance with neither giving an inch until finally, at some unsaid signal only the heavens could fathom, both attacks detonated into a dome of rainbow, gold and black energy that was nearly a kilometer across. Sound briefly bled away from the world, as if reality was so shocked by the meeting of the elements that it had to take a moment before cause and effect were permitted to resume, and in that time a paradox of calm and chaos played out to both sides. The sky was the sea and the sea was the sky. Both cloud bank and ocean dimpled into concave cavitations that were totally still, with fish clearly able to be seen swimming from one sphere to another. Weightlessness fell over the nearby ships while static crackled with such ferocity that every single light bulb on the marine ship shorted out simultaneously. Eventually, something had to give. A whump of infrasound heralded the end to the minor break in reality, the merged attacks pulling in on themselves to a singular point of light before finally exploding, releasing all the pent-up noise and pressure in a singular, unfathomably loud and cataclysmic KRAKAKAKKOOM. For one unlucky marine battleship that had been too close to the initial clash, the shockwave that fell upon it from the cloudburst was as if it had been struck by the hammer of an angry war god. In a mere moment, every single surface on the ship from the sheets to the iron hull plating and even the mighty keel was pulped to splinters that were sent flying across the bay as shrapnel flew from a grenade. Garp and Zephyr caught the shockwave in the chest and were sent reeling backwards, crashing back down onto the deck of Garp's ship that the churning waters had pushed into their path. Naruto was forced to stick his feet to the figurehead with chakra and had to look perplexed at the damage he had wrought. But soon enough he looked to Linlin and saw her face was one of shock as well. But from her feelings he sensed only pleasant surprise. Now you see what you can do when you master yourself, he thought, pleased by both her state and the hole that had been punched in the blockade. And wouldn't you look at that, a path cleared, as promised. What was that St. Jalmak demanded, picking himself up from the floor with the assistance of his knights and other servants. Moments ago, the entire island had been rocked by an unholy shockwave that had shattered nearly every single pane of glass on the island. Unknown to him, battle had commenced between the forces of his blockade and the rightfully pissed-off forces of Naruto, Big Mom and their allies. WWE don't know sir, one of his servants, a knight clad in cataphract silver armor with an ellipsoid-shaped helmet, replied. Amidst the pandemonium caused by the shockwave, a series of much smaller booms began to echo out from the edge of the island, ones that the knight was able to recognize as cannon fire. The island is under attack. Jalmak snarled, clenching his hand around his gilded pistol as his breath and spittle fogged up the inside of his cube-shaped plastic helmet. Who would even dare? When he did not get an immediate reply, he grabbed one of the knights by a pauldron and shoved him harshly, sending the loyal servant stumbling back. Find out, you worm. Yais, St. Jalmak, the knight answered, snapping off a sharp salute before running off to the many other servants that were manning the communications equipment. Wiping shards of glass and dust from his usually immaculate protective clothing, St. Jalmak of the Celestial Dragon strode to one of the shattered windows and looked out over the heart of this dead-end backwater he had found himself in. After taking control of the island, he had taken up temporary residence in the castle of the kingdom's absent ruler, Count Patrick Redfield. It was a large Gothic affair that was the jewel of the island's characteristically creepy architecture, but to Jalmak it was little more than a tawdry shack when compared to the lofty heights of Pangaea Castle. Looking in the direction of where the shockwave had come from, the spacesuit sporting dragon could see little more than the mist-heavy forests that covered most of the island, blocking any view of the sea. But there was evidence of the proclaimed attack, flashes of orange and yellow light plumed into being along that side of the horizon, poking through the trees as distant marine turrets and carronades tried desperately to hold back whatever it was that was approaching the island. The cataphract stumbled back into the room, his face hidden by his helmet, but had Jalmak been able to see it, it would have been grave. It's pirates, my lord. The Big Mom pirates under Charlotte Linlin. That name rang oddly familiar to Jalmak for some reason, but it didn't stand out especially well. What is the point of learning the names of people who never have nor never will affect your life, he wondered, but knew the fact that this was a New World pirate crew did pose some concern. contact Sengoku and tell him to eradicate the pirates. Spare none, and if any do happen to survive, see them branded with the hoof by nightfall. Jalmek ordered. We cannot, sir, replied the cataphract, earning him a sour face and a demand to explain. We don't know what, but there's something blocking our transponder snail signal to Sengoku's ship, and the rest of the ships are locked in combat with the Big Mom pirates and her allies. Allies, who else dares, he said, cocking his pistol and fully intending on blowing the knight's brains from his skull if he found the answer wanting. According to the blockade, it is the world pirates as well as Red the Aloof, Count of Kurigana. An evil smirk spread across Jalmek's bearded face. There was one other. Enough of that, he shouted, cutting the knight off. That cur who thinks himself royalty attacks a place where I have come, so he can enjoy seeing his people suffer for it. Send word to our forces across the island, kill everyone and start with the children. Shock permeated Big Mom's crew after what they had just witnessed. The power displayed by their captain and her paramour was something that many of them had heard of, but even after all this time had been skeptical of the truth. Yet now it was beyond doubt, Naruto was indeed someone strong enough to stand beside their queen. Trepidation and distrust began to quickly shift within their chests, metamorphosizing into excitement and fervor. Weapons were drawn from sheaths and held aloft. Lances, swords, axes, rifles, and clubs. From the highest-ranked chess soldier to the lowliest swabi, all roared their approval for their queen and the person who, for the first time, had shown them he was worthy of the title of king. Their Aurora, what a stupendous attack! World laughed his approval, thumping a meaty fist to his chest as his crew silently agreed. He turned to face the throng of people below him. A sea of faces that massed on the deck primarily formed of the Chanter's massive crew, but interspersed with his own men and women and the sparse littering of Redfield servants in their magenta cloaks. Pirates of the New World, your king and queen set an example. Are you gonna let them down? No, the pirates thundered, stamping their feet and discharging their firearms into the air. From their place at the figurehead, Naruto and Linlin looked in the direction of the huge pirate as he worked the crowd. A meaty finger was jabbed at Redfield. Our friend has had his land attacked, and these marine slimes want to keep him from taking his home back. We won't let that stand. Yeah, screw the Navy. Let's kick their teeth in. He's quite good at that, Naruto observed as the ship began to move again, bringing its broadside cannons to bear on the remaining battleships, the mighty guns belching superheated iron and high explosive shot. The blonde eyed the gap in the flotilla. I'm going to have to get going soon enough. Linlin nodded, her orange eyes trained on one of the ships where a glow of gold and a large figure could be seen. Sengoku and John Giant were firmly in her sights, so she gave Naruto a playful smack on the back. Go have your fun, Whiskers, and make sure the worm dies in pain. She may be changing, but Linlin was still a bloodthirsty woman. Naruto gave the simplest of mental pokes and felt Kurama respond, his body shrouded in the golden chakra of the mightiest Biju. He remained on the figurehead for a moment more, nodding to all those looking his way, then blasted into the air, streaking forwards at great speeds with a trail of flaming gold in his wake. Linlin watched him go before bringing her fingers to her mouth and whistling, calling Zeus and Prometheus, who emerged from the crosstrees, to stay by her side. She snapped her fingers and Zeus expanded, his coloration darkening to a thundercloud and allowing Linlin to step up onto him before beginning their own flight towards the marine ships. Redfield and World remained aboard the ship, watching the two monsters make their way towards their given quarries. Wanting to join in on the fun, World made to jump over the edge and down onto one of the Tart ships that were deploying en masse. A moment of your time, Mr. World. World paused, looking up at Redfield, who looked at him searchingly. Redfield twirled his scythe in one hand while coming to stand in front of the burly pirate, looking up into his face. As sure as I am that the Typhon will slay the dragon, I would quite like to get in there and kill those who are hurting my subjects. I would not ask this in the presence of others, and ask that you never repeat what I am about to say to you, but... He pointed the scythe at the flying Naruto. Throw me. World cocked his head to one side, looking at the Count as if he had grown a second head before nodding and holding out one of his exceptionally well-muscled arms. Redfield's long, thin legs bent at the knees and hopped into the air, turning in midair and landing atop the other man's arm in a light crouch. Stamping one leg forwards, the younger Burndy brother tensed his leg and amassed his strength, the deck creaking in protest beneath him. Ready. A cool, determined nod was his reply. Right then. More, World intoned, the invisible influence taking hold over Redfield as he became the projectile. 100-fold toss he threw Redfield with all of his strength and sent the Red Count streaking across the sky as a magenta and checkered dart, falling catching up with Naruto as both landed on the coastline and set off into the forest, making for the center of the island. Pain smarted through Garp's body as he pulled himself to his feet, copious detritus falling from his thoroughly rumpled suit before he cracked his neck, rolling his shoulders to loosen the stiffness that had built up in them from his rough landing. The pressure wave from that monstrous airburst earlier had sent both him and Zephyr crashing into his ship, and by the time he had gotten back up, the Big Mom contingent had already begun their ingress into the theater of battle. The Chanter may have been outnumbered, but she was hardly outgunned, her massive broadside cannons unleashing salvos and mortar stonks into the marine battleships that maneuvered to keep out of the lines of fire. That Typhon, spoke Zephyr as he got to his feet, looking worse for wear than the older man, has a hell of a way of introducing himself. Garp shook his head ruefully. Only proper way to say hello is a punch, so I'd say he's greeted us and ready to talk the only way I know how. He punched fist to palm before searching for any sign of the bounty head. Spotting the streak of gold making vanishing into the forest with a speck of magenta, Garp set his mind on following them because if his haki was telling him anything then it was the Uzumaki, despite having the lowest bounty, that was of the greatest threat, and would provide the funnest scrap. He began to jog along the length of the ship, picking up speed as he broke into a run and found Zephyr at his side again. He shot the purple-haired Vice Admiral a glower. "The hell are you doing following me?" Zephyr frowned, keeping pace despite being visibly winded. "You aren't going to fight that monster alone or you'll need me." "Probably," Garp conceded but turned to look towards Sengoku's distant ship. "But I'd wager those two are going to need you more," he said, causing Zephyr to direct his observation to the strong life forces of Sengoku and John Giant. Charlotte Linlin rode atop her homies in the skies above the bay looking like a god of old, loosing forks of powerful purple lightning that crackled against the iron hulls of the battleships, superheating them and electrifying any poor sap that happened to be nearby. Her intent was plain to see, drawn towards the two other vice admirals like a moth drawn to a flame. Her statuesque form leapt from the sentient thundercloud and soared towards the ship like an eagle at the zenith of its dive. As she fell, she held out a hand that the flaming son of Prometheus flew into and squeezed, kneading the plasma construct into a fiery broadsword that served as partner to the grinning gold cutlass that was Napoleon. No further, which John Giant boomed, swinging his haki-infused katana up to meet Linlin. The Pinkette did not move to avoid the slash but instead flipped in midair, adding the coil of centrifugal energy to her passage and bringing down both gold and flaming swords onto John's katana. A shower of sparks and gold-blue energy exploded out from the point of contact, shaking the nearby waters, and Zephyr had to shield his eyes, but could not cover his ears. "Mama hey ha ha. Back them up, Zephyr. I can handle myself," Garp ordered. "You know you can't give me orders, right?" Zephyr pointed out, noting Garp's own earlier words to John. The smile he received in response could be called shit-eating, carrying with it the unsaid words that the difference was that these orders made sense. He nodded. "I'm on it. Just give the Typhon a punch from me," he called before leaping off the side of the ship and using the several ships between them and the angry country destroyer to leapfrog his way there. "Zephyr, my friend, you'll make a better admiral than I ever could," the last vice admiral remarked aloud before jumping in the direction of the island, hoping to cut off Naruto before he could do any more damage. Two figures sprinted through the forest with their feet barely touching the ground, blurs of movement that were like leaves caught in a strong gust of wind. Naruto had dropped from his chakra cloak to maintain it, at least some level of stealth and also in the hope of reducing collateral damage. Redfield meanwhile was keeping pace admirably after his sudden world-induced arrival had scared the crap out of the blonde. Used to rolling with the punches of unusual situations, Naruto had simply kept up the pace and continued to run towards where he sensed life signatures. The Shikaru Kingdom was mostly forested areas that were populated by the native mandrills, sentient monkeys that could copy skills they had observed, and the humans that served there as Redfield's subjects. "I'm sensing the most negative emotions in the center of the island, but there's a few pockets of others scattered around the island," Naruto said as they continued their sustained sprint. Redfield took the information in, nodded, then said, "Most of the citizens live in the central city, but there are a number of smaller hamlets around the island. The mandrills act as go-betweens." Realizing the fact that this was a situation that required his particular set of skills, the last Uzumaki formed a familiar cross-shaped hand seal and 24 clones popped into existence and began to run alongside him. He expected Redfield to make some kind of exclamation of surprise but was met only with an amused half-smile. The older man swept out his scythe and cleaved a nearby tree branch, sending it falling into their path. Pato, at the call of his master and friend, the little brown tanuki emerged from the folds of Redfield's clothes and jumped onto the branch, quickly stripping it of its leaves and stacking them neatly in a pile that it passed back to Redfield. Then, much to Naruto's own surprise, the little raccoon dog was enveloped in a white puff of smoke and replaced with a smart wooden fountain pen. Transformation Jutsu, Naruto wondered as Redfield feverishly began to write onto the stack of leaves. "No, I sense no chakra, so it's probably another devil fruit power," Kurama said, analyzing the feelings he was receiving from Redfield and his off-companion. Swinging his scythe again, the stack of marked leaves was sent spiraling into the wind before each of them was enveloped in a familiar plume of white smoke that cleared to reveal dozens of doppelgangers of the aloof count. Naruto was utterly perplexed but settled for a chuffed affirmation. "You are full of surprises, Red. I aim to amaze and will take no consolation prizes." At that point the two agreed to dispatch their mutual clones to fan out over the island while the two originals continued towards the center of the island. The two spent several more minutes running in relative silence until Naruto felt his danger sense blare a warning. A white shape bolted from the thick forest and tackled Naruto with such speed that he had already been smashed through 6 ancient pine trees by the time he had been able to crane his neck around to see just what the hell had its arms around him. A shock of close-cropped black hair and a scared forehead greeted him, and Naruto knew this had to be Monkey D. Garp. Naruto threw an elbow backwards and smashed it into Garp's face, having little more effect than making the Vice Admiral grin a tad wider. He repeated the mover a number of times before realizing that Garp had him in an awkward position and changing tact, forming a clone that appeared in mid-air above him. When one formed a shadow clone, they possessed the mental option to either spawn the clone static and unmoving or maintain the same amount of momentum that their owner had, much like this one. Knowing its purpose the moment of its creation, the clone extended its arms to its boss, who grabbed it by the hand and swung it down between his legs. The downward and lateral kinetic energy was instantaneously transformed into a vector of reverse inertia, drilling both heels into Garp's crotch. Half Garp gasped, eyes bugging from their sockets as white-hot pain shot up his spine from the below-the-belt blow, his grip loosening just enough for Naruto to wriggle free. Now out of the arms, Naruto and the clone continued their collaboration, grabbing Garp's wrists and performing a front flip while the clone kept its feet buried in Garp's crotch, leaving its legs up. With Naruto dragging down and his clone pushing up, they levered the Vice Admiral between them and tossed him at speed away from themselves, crashing through a copse of trees and sending him rolling into a clearing. Rolling several more times, Garp mastered his pain and dug his fingers into the ground and reoriented, dragging small lines in the ground. As he gradually came to a stop when Naruto appeared in the clearing he had been knocked into, Naruto didn't take his eyes off Garp even as Redfield joined him, pointing his purple bat side at Garp as he got to his feet. "Hey jackass, shoulder checking someone from behind ain't exactly very nice," Naruto told the tall Vice Admiral as he finally got back up. "Neither's kicking them in the balls," Garp winced, eyeing both of them. "Who's your friend, a vampire cosplayer?" Eyes narrowing dangerously, Redfield slammed the bottom of his staff to the floor of the clearing, cracking it. "I am Count Patrick Redfield, Liege Lord and Count of the Shikaru Kingdom, which you people are in the process of ruining. Now get out of my way, Vice Admiral, or I will cut you stem to stern." Garp's smile wilted at that, his shoulders slumping slightly as he searched their faces for truth. "The Count, huh?" he said slowly, brows knitting together in thought. None of them moved for a time, a stray wind of the storm blowing through the clearing and fluttering all their clothes. It began to rain then, drop after drop of slow, thick raindrops that pelted the trio. A single large raindrop struck Garp about the scar on his face, rolling down it with a cool slowness that ushered the Vice Admiral into his conclusion. He took a half step back and turned his body to the side, allowing unrestricted view of the path behind him. "Go." Redfield made a surprised noise and Naruto narrowed his eyes in suspicion. "You're letting us go." "What were you fucking stupid?" Garp shot back, squinting at the, to him at least, short blonde. "You're a known pirate and I'm a marine. I'm going to kick the crap out of you and make you beg for your mama." Him on the other hand, he gestured flippantly to Redfield, "is the leader of your island returning to your people. I'm maintaining the blockade in my own way. And if the gutless worm in the castle can't take it when an angry vampire cosplayer with a farming implement comes to him, then that's his problem. I'm just doing my job." Exchanging an unsaid conversation, the two allies met each other's eyes before Redfield set off again, jogging past Garp and into the forest beyond, bound for the center of the island. The Marine remained true to his word, his eyes never leaving Naruto until he was sure that Redfield was gone and not planning an attack of convenience. "You're a lot shorter than I expected," he finally said, his face once more becoming full of battle-fueled mirth. That comment sent Naruto's eye twitching in annoyance, never quite being able to forget that he had been the shortest boy of his graduating class. "It's not my fault most of the people I seem to be bumping into are vertically undisputed," Naruto griped, pointing an accusatory finger at the 9 feet of Vice Admiral standing before him. "Well then maybe you shouldn't have taken the name of a storm giant then. I had no say in that." The bickering went back and forth until a lull fell over them, the sounds of the storm intensifying with booms of cannon fire mixing with the rumble of thunder. Kurama perked up from within Naruto and paid Garp close attention, both men falling into ready stances, bringing up their fists and squaring their shoulders. "Careful with this one, Naruto. He feels like a tough one." "Aren't they always?" Naruto said, but despite his levity he found his heart thumping in his ears. That pressure before a good fight welling up from deep inside, and despite his better judgment he found himself smiling. "Linlin says you're kinda like me." "Yes, that makes you pretty cool, Vice Admiral." "Did she now? Well, you look like a pipsqueak. But I'm sure you can dance." Garp snorted, his muscles tensing. "And my name is Garp, Typhon. What should I call you?" "Name's Naruto. Remember it." Both men vanished, reappearing in the middle of the field with their fists drawn back and dark with earth chakra and armament haki. Garp sent a brutal haymaker down at Naruto while the blonde leapt up with an uppercut that rent the air. Naruto's hardened fist collided with Garp's jaw and Garp's hand thundered into Naruto's forehead, shockwaves detonating from each. Both were suspended in chronostasis for a moment before being launched away from one another, each skidding to a stop. Garp licked his lips, a thin line of blood rolling from the edge of his mouth that he wiped aside. Naruto hissed at the bruise that would mark his forehead tomorrow. Both smiled and launched themselves into the fray again. "I'll beat you down, Naruto." "Bring it on, Garp." Running across the deck, Linlin brought Napoleon onto Sengoku's armored palm, levering her greater height against him until he formed a golden shockwave that sent her away from him. The Buddha had been forced to transition to his human form once again against Big Mom due to its ungainly size being a hindrance against an opponent as mobile as Linlin. While his ability to produce shockwaves was reduced compared to his Daibutsu and hybrid forms, he could still conjure them when he needed, supplementing his strength and endurance. As she flew away from him, Linlin displayed profound agility and acrobatics, pirouetting in the air and swinging her gold cutlass with one hand, Ikoku sovereignty. She launched the purple crescent moon of energized air pressure at the Vice Admiral while kneading Prometheus into a new shape with her left hand. The flaming homie transformed into a spear with a grinning arrow-shaped spear, tossing it in pursuit of the Buddha, Surya. Sengoku stepped in towards the attack and sent a straight punch at the crescent, grinding against it for a moment before sending it into Prometheus, who was returned to his globe of flame that continued to harry the Vice Admiral. Still in flight, Linlin strengthened her legs and made to dropkick John Giant when she was intercepted by Zephyr, who launched a smash buster into her feet, the explosion of haki causing her boots to smoke and causing her to be blown into the air above the ship. Mama Zeus called, seeing his creator being pinballed. He flew into her path and broke her flight, providing the perfect platform for her to kick off and launch herself back into the fight. To her surprise, Napoleon's serrated mouth bit down on one of Zeus's stray electrical discharges, his entire length becoming shrouded in lightning. It seemed that whatever life force had been in Naruto's Viver card had imbued the homie with some of the blonde's intuitive element manipulation. Taking the blade in both hands, she lifted Napoleon high as she rained down upon Zephyr, sweeping him down in a brutal electrified helmbreaker slash. Seeing the threat and unable to dodge, Zephyr armored up his forearms and protected himself with a cross guard, tanking the blow with a metallic chime. Horrible vibrations resonated up his arms as his body was numbed with the violet-colored lightning ravaged him before he was sent into the deck of the ship, crashing through several floors and deep into the hold. Linlin landed with a thud and lifted Napoleon to inspect him fondly. "Napoleon, you little scamp, look at you pulling off combinations so easily," she cooed, absent-mindedly kicking the head off of a lieutenant who had been dumb enough to try and rush her. She flicked her boot to rid it of the blood and cranial fluid. "Did you learn that from your papa?" The sword's blue eyes closed in an eye smile as it preened, its jagged gold teeth chattering animatedly. "You bet, Mama Papa can mix the elements into his bow, so why can't I?" She whipped the sword down, catching the necks of 3 CP7 agents in its mouth and letting the sword take a deep, meaty chomp. As their heads rolled onto the deck, hat still in place, Linlin was sure to flick the blood off and pat the sword's guard. "That's a good sword, and let's keep at it and see what you can really do." Big Mama rage-filled voice screamed, a massive shape swapping down on her visible in her haki. She sidestepped John Giant's massive katana that dug into the deck and hopped on the blunt side of the blade. She ran forwards and leapt, slamming Napoleon's pommel into his nose with enough force to break it with a wet crunch. She sneered at the giant, "Piss off, you overgrown brown nose. I'm having fun." Reaching up to his face, John took hold of his nose and snapped it back into the correct position with a wet crunch, grimacing as he did so. "How can you be so calm as you raise an island cooing over a sword that eats men whole?" Linlin flashed a happy smile, chuckling sardonically. "Raising it, we're here to save it from the worm with a fishbowl head. You're the ones trying to let that happen, and we're here to stop you. As for my sword, well," she rolled the sword in one hand, "I was raised to think that all children should be nurtured no matter where they came from." The giant Vice Admiral tightened the grip on his sword. "You are a monster, a country destroyer," Big Mom John shouted, channeling haki into his sword and the metallic length turning black. "Mother Caramel should have strangled you at birth." Linlin's smile dropped. "What did you just say to me?" John Giant bristled, puffing his chest up and strengthening his body to its utmost limit, ready to unleash everything he had in a single blow. "Mother Caramel raised me as well, sent me to the Marines, made me a bastion of justice, but you laid waste to Elbaf and made Mother Caramel disappear, stole her devil fruit. I bet you killed her yourself." Linlin's long pink hair shadowed her eyes. Seeing the lapse in judgment, John pounced, bringing his sword in a mighty overhead cleave, hoping to split the woman's stem to stern. "Die, monster." Napoleon flashed in an arc of purple and gold, arresting the movement with a sonic boom. And when Charlotte Linlin looked up into the face of John Giant, her eyes were whited out with abject wrath. Her moment of mania was derailed, however, when a voice cut through the air, a familiar voice that had suddenly lost its bloody joy, replaced with an empathetic note. "No, Mama, do not give in to wrath. He doesn't deserve it." Linlin's pupils returned and she looked around her to wonder where the voice had come from before looking up at the golden blade of Napoleon, its blue eye locking on her. "Napoleon." Pushing up with the sword, she sent John stumbling backwards into the mast and held the sword up before her. The mania and joyful slaughter that had been in Napoleon just a moment before was gone, replaced with a knowing and empathetic look that permeated the metal. She felt the sword's emotions in her soul more than she could see it in the expressive metal. "You're my mama, I won't let you fall into an anger not your own," the sword said earnestly. Linlin looked at it for a long time before seeing her own face in the golden reflection. Her face turned fond, leave it to the whiskered brat to make sure she had an arbitrating conscience in her hand at all times. Taking the sword in both hands, she ran into battle with a focused cry. She would make the giant pay for his words, but she would do so in a state where she could remember it. All across the island, men, women, and children cowered in fear. It was a terrible day in every sense of the word. Accosted by a deranged world noble while their beloved count was away, held hostage by the Marines, and now the knights had made it clear that everyone was to suffer a summary execution. The knights and squires numbered approximately 400 in total, all well-trained and broken of any morality that would give them compunctions for killing the young, sick or elderly. Within a blacksmith's forge on the edge of the main settlement, a group of 3 residents cowered in fear at the corner of the smithy. An elderly grandfather and simian mandrill put themselves between the man's granddaughter and the 2 knights that stood near the doorway, pikes drawn and advancing on the trio. The old man had armed himself with a blocky forging hammer while the mandrill, who served as the blacksmith's assistant, had a poker and a wrought iron bar. "Hand over the girl, old man, and we'll make this quick," the knights ordered, thrusting their pikes and nicking the chest of the mandrill, who was able to swat one of them away. The large primate let out a cry of pain and dropped his poker, the little girl running to its side. Miss Charcoal, the little girl, bleated for the apparently female mandrill. Mandrills were an interesting primate, fiendishly intelligent but limited to copying the skills of those they witnessed. They had long since learned to live alongside the residents of the kingdom in helping everyone with their problems. From carpentry to blacksmithing, if the skill was physical then the mandrill could learn it, and so long as they were treated well, they would continue to peacefully help. One of the knights retched, spitting from the slit in his helmet. "You show concern for such subhuman trash, no wonder St. Jalmec insists we kill the children first." The grandfather gritted his teeth, his green eyes twin pools of balefire that could have melted the knights to slag had he the power. "You, chrome-plated bastards, what did we ever do to you?" The knights exchanged looks. "Nothing. St. Jalmec says you are repugnant." "Thus you are repugnant. St. Jalmec says you must die, so you must die." "St. Jalmec says the children must die first, so the parents may learn to hate their leader who could not be here to meet him." Sayerk, the second knight, gurgled, a tide of blood suddenly bubbling at the back of his throat. He felt cold and numb and wondered why, looking down to see what was wrong. He was morbidly interested in the large blood-slick blade poking through his cuirass at the abdomen, the metal a deep purple and styled into a bat's wing. The blade was suddenly wrenched upwards, the silver plate offering as much resistance as paper as the knight's entire upper body was bifurcated from navel to cranium. While the first knight didn't get a chance to even scream, the bladed tip of a scythe shaft was sent through the slit in his visor and into his eye before bursting from the back of his skull. The body twitched a few times as the nervous system struggled to gather that it was dead, then went limp and slid off the bloodied point. The blacksmithing trio looked wearily at what remained of the knights before a tall, imposing figure stepped from the shadows. "Will you 3 be able to get to safety on your own?" The little girl's eyes lit up. "Count Redfield." Redfield's face was its usual glacially amused self, but he looked over the 3 people to make sure they were okay. Getting over his shock, the grandfather helped Miss Charcoal to stand, taking off his smithing apron to use as a tourniquet. We'll be fine, Count. Now that you're here. God bless you, sir." "Thank you." The old man had tears in his eyes. The Count offered them a curt nod before making for the door, flashes of lighting silhouetting him in the frame. "What are you going to do, sir?" the little girl asked. Redfield said nothing and did not directly answer the little girl, perhaps wishing to spare her from the reality. Instead, he directed his words to the blacksmith. "Please come to my castle to sharpen Draculina," he said, referring to his scythe, "once this storm blows over. I fear she is about to grow dull from threshing too much iron." Without any further ado, he stepped out into the storm and set to his grisly work. All across the island, scores of silver knights found copies of the lanky Count falling upon them to butcher them into offal and giblets, their armor and training offering no protection from the wicked blade of Red the Aloof. A cohort of the knights chasing after a fleeing family deep in the woods stumbled upon 20 of their comrades impaled on iron spikes, still living enough to moan but not enough to warn them of the red and checkered menace falling down on them from above. A cavalry detachment galloped through the forest, trying to beat a retreat from the Big Mom forces led by World, now landing on the beach only for their leader to rid face first into Draculina hanging from the end of a chain that Pato had conjured with a leaf. The impaled knight was lifted into the tree canopy and one by one every single knight fell to the same fate. A sly mist fell over the main settlement, combined with the gloom of the storm made visibility near impossible. And one by one, house by house, family by family, every knight was scourged from Kuragana Island, never to return. Not a single drop of blood ever tarnished Red's suit or mantle, and he never accepted the thanks of his subjects. But deep down, he felt good. Through the center of town, a single figure could be seen walking, their golden blonde hair cutting through the mist. This Naruto was one of the initial clones that he had spawned before Garp had tackled him into a fight, and a few pop clones had kept him abreast of the situation. Redfield was cleaning house and was content to let Naruto, or at least his clone, do as he had promised. Stepping up the hill out of the mist, he laid eyes upon the castle where St. Jalmec waited. With steely eyes, Naruto approached the thick wooden doors and sent a torrent of searing wind at it, reducing it to splinters along with the last detachment of knights guarding the door. The cataphract was halfway up the stairs, a fist-sized shard of wood buried in his jugular. Ascending the stairs, Naruto looked down at the knight and felt his emotions, seeing no regret in what he had done. So Naruto simply placed a hand upon his chest and discharged a minute amount of lighting-style chakra into his chest, stopping his heart and ending him peacefully. Reaching the throne room, he pushed the door open and laid his eyes on St. Jalmec, lauded member of the Celestial Dragons. He was not impressed. "Come to grovel for forgiveness," Jalmec jeered, not looking at Naruto, who simply appeared as a shadow in the corner of the room. I shan't give it. Tell me, Count, have you any children or relatives? Your death alone will not satiate this debt of boredom, so I ask that you tell me so that your sins may be passed to them and they be tortured after I have finished with you. Naruto did not respond but nearly stepped into the room, a flash of lightning revealing his face. Jalmak's self-satisfied look faltered before recognition lit on his face. You're the one, the reason for this infernal side trip, Jalmak squealed, pointing a gloved finger at Naruto as he advanced on the world noble. You spoiled our fun. Naruto stopped, eyes turning dangerous. What? Jalmak backpedaled, hands searching for his fallen pistol. God Valley was to be our playground. But you took away our chance to play, so I had to come here instead. It clicked in Naruto's mind and brought him up short before with no warning he stormed forwards and smashed his bow down on Jalmak's leg, his protective suit doing nothing to prevent the splintering of his kneecaps. Ugh, you, explain, Naruto demanded. Jalmak winced, propping himself against the chair. Huff. Every few years, we celestial dragons have a game, the native hunting competition. We hunt you lesser life forms like sport, but we don't defecate where we eat. Jalmak sneered. Disgust reared itself in Naruto like a viper and he stamped on Jalmak's already broken knee. Why you fucking? Naruto did not permit the backsass, jabbing the tip of the bow into Jalmak's chest with enough force to wind him. Explain. Jalmak gasped again, in pain and discomfort, his superiority wilting in the face of the first true pain he had ever felt in his life. We play where it is justified. On lands, we say, have slighted us, for we are the gods of this world, he raved, hands flopping to the side of the throne. But sometimes the slight is not enough for the Gorosei, so we must engineer a slight. God Valley was not allied to the world government, so a tribute ship was sent there to demand its tribute. The situation began to unfold in Naruto's mind. It was the ultimate final incarnation of the shakedown racket. Demand money for the sake of the protection of the world government. Then when they say no, use it as grounds to invade and play their perverted game. But he had stopped that. Prevent the tribute ship from ever reaching the unallied nation. But a question remained. What did they do to slight you in the first place? Jalmak, even amidst the pain, looked at him as if he were the world's greatest idiot. Because they dared to call their land the Valley of the Gods. Why else? Something broke in Naruto at those words. His restraint had shattered into a fine powder as he ruminated on the reality that all this misery, blood and pain, was because a bunch of snooty assholes didn't like the name of an island. Jalmak struck, lifting his pistol hidden in the throne and pointing it at Naruto's face. He pulled the trigger, discharging a gout of smoke and flame. Aha, you witless savage, you blasphemer, he fired again and again, emptying his flintlock into Naruto's face, covering his upper body in smoke. We are the celestial dragons, rulers of the world. Gods, by the grace of the elder stars we rule from the heavens over the four blues and the grand line, and you are nothing. His gun ran dry and he clicked it impotently several times. Stupid savage doesn't even know how to fall over rye. Naruto's fist plowed into the plastic box over Jalmak's head and seized him around the mouth. The smoke slowly cleared and the world noble began to squirm and scream at what he saw. His bullets had done nothing more than bring up a few mild welts on Naruto's forehead. But that did not frighten him. No, it was the blonde's eyes. No longer were they blue but an angry scarlet with black slit pupils, his teeth extending into fangs and his whiskers darkening upon his face. Using his other hand, Naruto dug a clawed nail into the plastic box and tore it from the dragon's head, forcing him to breathe the real world's air. The anger was apoplectic. Naruto had met pure evil before, met people who did atrocities based on good intent, but this. You were planning to murder thousands because you didn't like a goddamn name, he howled in the noble's face. Jalmak was struggling to breathe. The sheer killing intent that Naruto was putting off was driving his heart into arrhythmia. And in that state, he answered truthfully. Wouldn't you do the same thing, he asked in a muffled voice. Naruto dropped Jalmak and was forced to take a step back, physically repulsed by the man. He felt diseased, a cancer of cognition the likes of which should be never allowed to speak again. But speak he did. Naruto's bestial appearance and actions had scared some level of sense into Jalmak, though not the good kind. If you spare my life, I'll make it worth your while. He tried to bargain, a foul smell begging to emerge from his spacesuit indicative of what he had likely done. Please, I'm a god, I can do whatever it takes, just please don't kill me. Naruto's eyes grew shadowed and he began to walk towards Jalmak. Please, I can give you an island, a kingdom, money, power, women, men, children, whatever your vice. Naruto grabbed Jalmak by the throat and picked him up as if he weighed nothing. Holding him up and off the floor, he began to walk him over to the balcony. Yet still, he just kept talking. Please, I can make you a warlord, a member of my household guard. The Marines can never touch you, he begged, Naruto's fingers now drawing blood from his neck. Arrange a marriage into a lesser noble household. Make you a god's knight. Naruto stood on the balcony overlooking the entire island, the fires of combat in the distance, and schooled his features. Then with but a thought, he was enshrined in golden light. Garp was panting, blood streaming from a cut under his eye. He derisively spat a tooth from his mouth that Naruto had managed to dislodge with a combination of a knee to the chin and a donkey punch. Oof, gonna need some milk for this one. He winced before blurring towards Naruto again. Tell you what, kid, you'd have made a hell of a Marine. His fist was caught by one of the several golden chakra arms emerging from the blonde's back. The other began to rain blow after blow on Garp's chest and abdomen. The Vice Admiral was a tricky opponent. Even his passive strength was comparable to a shinobi with at least 6 of the gates open, and it only scaled up from there. In addition to that, he was fast, durable, and had 3 full feet on him in height. But Naruto was used to sparring with Linlin at this point and knew how to overcome the difference while staying a regular size. He had pushed Naruto to enter the first stage of Kurama's chakra cloak and utilized chakra arms to overcome the difference. Naruto held Garp's arms, still using 2 of the arms before the remaining 4 and his 2 physical arms to hammer everything within reach. Soft tissue, bone, joints, nerve clusters. He was a whirling dervish, hitting Garp from all angles and particularly working the chest with steam-style enhanced strength. But the man just wouldn't go down. He gave as good as he got, rupturing several of his internal organs and cracking his tibia clean through from a particularly brutal grapple. And despite this, Naruto couldn't bring himself to dislike Garp. There was no ill intent behind his attacks, no malice. Any annoyance or anger was the kind found in a really good fight, one Naruto had not been able to have for a while. Naruto Uzumaki liked Monkey D. Garp. Don't think I could ever work for your bosses, Naruto said with a grunt, driving a massive Rasengan into Garp that drilled him into the ground, only for Garp's emission haki to clap him into the sky as an exchange. If it's any. Aw shit, broke another rib, he complained, holding his side before making ready to go another round. I can't stand them either. Bosses, they universally suck. So true. Now eat my fist of love, you golden dildo. Phrasing, Naruto rolled his eyes, Rasengan, flaw. A plume of distant golden chakra at the heart of the island brought them both to a standstill. Zephyr dodged a fork of lighting with shave and was forced to play hot foot with the deck of the ship. Linlin's damn new sword had the canny knack of being able to manipulate the elements, and the psychopathic queen had called up a wave of water to soak the deck and was now using Zeus to electrify the water. Scanning the field, he saw John had been crucified to the ship's mast, alive but unable to move. His discarded katana was buried into the ship. "My mama, you know, all these years we've fought," Sengoku, Big Mom called, drawing Prometheus into her hair and wreathing herself in flame atop Zeus. "You always pissed me off. But I'm starting to see the fun side of a good fight after some couples counseling. Maybe you and Garp can work out whatever issues you have going on." "Shut it and fight," Linlin Sengoku growled, batting aside a lightning bolt. Grabbing John's dropped katana, he hefted it over his shoulder and launched it at Big Mom, propelling it with a shockwave. It soared at her with impossible speed, seeming strange that something so big could move so fast. Linlin merely smirked and flicked Napoleon. The great sword split in two like a blowtorch through butter. Without haki to armor it, the weapon may as well have been a blunt butter knife. Sengoku cursed to himself and once more glowed gold, ready to enter his hybrid form. Zephyr pulled a pair of sunglasses from his breast pocket only to curse when he found that they had been broken in the combat. Somehow Sengoku was growing brighter even after taking his hybrid form. No, that wasn't right. The light wasn't coming from the afro-haired Vice Admiral at all. One by one, all battles and clashes of pirate and marine began to cycle down to nothingness as they stopped, turned, and looked in the direction of the island from which a pillar of golden power was taking form. Linlin looked at the light and initially felt a thrill and twist of arousal at the power she recognized as Naruto's. But then the feelings hit her. Anger, fathomless and endless anger. "Whiskers?" she asked in concern. The golden power grew and grew, forming a massive pillar over the castle that made all step out and look, the storm above swirling and intensifying. A profane choir announcing the arrival of the moment this had all been building to. It began to contract then, forming into a golden giant with 6 arms and 3 faces, the maws of foxes all set in angry snarls. It was a totally unnecessary showing of power, but it served to help Naruto get a rein on his anger. Because in one of the giant's palms, no bigger than a grain of rice, was Saint Jalmek. The celestial dragon looked around himself, the sight of the great beast that Naruto had become, finally living up to the title the government had forced upon him. Typhon the Storm Giant. "Please, please, please," he repeated again and again. From within the energetic heart of Kurama's battle avatar, Naruto looked down at Jalmek and began to speak, his voice like a hurricane carrying out to the sea. "You said that it is your right to rule and commit atrocities for you are celestial dragons. Yet there you stand, unable to escape my palm even after so much pointless blood. Please, please, don't kill me. The slaves, it's all their fault," Jalmek babbled, "ruling over the 4 seas by the grace of the elder stars from your little heaven." The battle avatar's arms began to arrange themselves around with the one holding Jalmek in the middle. "And then you asked me if I would do the same thing." He took a deep breath and began to speak. "No, I shan't. I will make something, not break it. This island, its ruler and people are under the protection of the big family pirates and will remain that way as more people need a place to live away from the likes of you. Please, please, we do as we please." Naruto closed his eyes. "So be it. But if you test us and bring violence to our door, persecute monsters whose only crime is that they aren't you, then this is what I will do." The last hand was raised high into the air for all to see. "Let the seas boil, let the elder stars fall, though it takes the last drop of my blood, I will see these oceans free of your filth, celestial dragons." He let Jalmek drop and closed all 6 of Kurama's hands into fists. "And if I cannot, then let the heavens burn." Please. All 6 fists slammed home with a thunderclap, and St. Jalmec was reduced to nothing but a puff of red mist. Silence filled the bay, no one spoke. The storm had come to a lull after that final meaty splat carried on the wind for all to hear. A celestial dragon, murdered right in front of them. There were protocols to follow, an admiral to be summoned, and yet nothing. No one dared move. Linlin lowered herself to the deck of Sengoku's destroyed ship, seeing the reflection of Naruto's titanic battle avatar reflected in his glasses. The rage had passed now back into serenity, and in a rare moment of restraint, Linlin sheathed her sword. She held Sengoku's look silently for a full minute until the 6-armed Kurama dissolved. What are you going to do? Sengoku cried at Kong for an admiral keep fighting after seeing that, she asked without a hint of sarcasm or snark, curious what the vice admiral, an ardent follower of absolute justice, would do when faced with this. He considered her words for a few moments before turning to her leaving. Yet the word out that the operation has been a total failure and to retreat. A cry of shock went up from the Marines. We can't just leave. The fight is left undone. St. Jalmec. Enough, Sengoku roared, silencing the naysayers. We were sent to this island to maintain a blockade around St. Jalmec while he conducted his business on this island. The blockade is broken and St. Jalmec is no longer here. If we remain here and fight these pirates, then we are violating our mandate of non-interference with the affairs of foreign nations. That is the business of Count Patrick Redfield and no one else, are we clear? Yes, sir, they all answered. Sengoku looked at Linlin. Can I trust you to honor our safe passage? She raised a single pink eyebrow. Is this a parley? It's a business agreement. I know you think of yourself as a savvy businesswoman. Flatterer, she chortled before turning serious. Your offer. The 6 damaged Navy battleships in the World Noble ship. They are damaged but salvageable by a skilled shipwright. What remains of the world government force here will embark on Garp's HQ-3 and Zephyr's G5. Zephyr gave a grunt of affirmation, though part of him clearly still wanted to fight. Humming to herself as she mulled it over, Linlin came to her decision. Deal. You have an hour and a half to pack your things and leave. And as rare as it is that I get to say this to a member of the world government. She grinned. Get out of my territory. Sengoku offered a single businesslike bow before turning and leaving, his men falling into step. The pirates were much more raucous in victory, whooping and hollering. And Linlin, she knew this was the start of something big. So you're telling me that milk fixes teeth just straight up? Naruto asked, sitting on one side of a rock as Garp guzzled down a carton of milk that the fedora-wearing Bogard had bought upon finding them. Their battle had petered off after the violent death of Jalmec. Garp wiped his top lip and gave a toothy grin, the missing teeth reforming before Naruto's eyes. Sure does. Weird. Mine just grow back. Weird. I'm the weird one. Bah-ha-ha, Garp chuckled before seeing Bogard tap his watch. He got to his feet and strengthened his tie. Welp, I can't say I appreciate you killing the worm in that way, but I won't weep for his passing. Naruto frowned thoughtfully. People needed to see they bleed as red as the rest of us. Garp nodded, then turned serious and gave Naruto a sideways look. This won't be the end of it. You know that, right? While I feel that the Gorosei sent Jalmec out here to die, your little display is going to make a big name for yourself. Not all of it good. Hell, every time I hear your name I'll be there to test a new move on you. I've already got a whole mountain range lined up to get back at you for cup checking me. Let them come. Naruto rose and offered Garp a wave farewell. And bring rice crackers or something. The broad vice admiral grinned and left the clearing. I'll take it under advisement. See you later, you pissant pirate. As he walked in the direction of his ship, Garp knew that Naruto Uzumaki was a monster. But not all monsters were worth slaying. Okay, sadly the chapter is over. And if you enjoyed, just leave a like. And subscribe with post notification. So when the next chapter is ready, you will be notified. Okay, see you in the next video. Bye.